In the glittering heart of the metropolis, the sun rises over the towering spires of Hongou City, where pigeons take flight against a canvas of endless blue. It is a place of ambition and excess, where every reflection in the glass-bottomed bay tells a story of wealth and power. Today, all eyes are fixed on the Silver Tiger International Hotel, a monument of modern luxury that seems to reach for the very sun itself. Outside, the air is electric, thick with the screams of fans and the blinding flash of cameras as the world's elite gather for the event of the year. Amidst the sea of silk and lace, a world-renowned director glides across the red carpet, her presence commanding the attention of every lens in the vicinity. But even she is eclipsed by the woman standing before the microphones, a vision of sharp elegance and untouchable grace. This is Phoebe Helen, the richest woman in the city, and as she speaks of her love for the arts, her voice is as cool and refreshing as a mountain spring. Miles away in Wuyu City, the skyline is equally breathtaking, shimmering with the promise of a different kind of glory. Inside a sleek, high-rise office, a woman named Selina sits with her feet perched arrogantly on her desk, her gaze fixed on a glowing monitor. She is the picture of effortless beauty, her blonde hair catching the light as she studies the woman on the screen with an intensity that borders on obsession. Phoebe Helen, she muses, a dangerous smirk playing on her lips. She looks absolutely great. Her assistant, a young woman with a short, sensible cut, enters the room with a stack of papers, reminding Selina that the cameras are waiting at the filming location. Selina stands, her tall frame casting a shadow over the desk as she leans in, her eyes sparkling with a sudden, predatory interest. She asks if the assistant has seen the scale of the festival, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that makes the younger girl blush. The scene shifts to the controlled chaos of the film studio, where the word "good" echoes through the rafters, signaling the end of a perfect take. Selina is in her element here, surrounded by monitors and the hum of expensive machinery, her sharp eyes dissecting every frame for the slightest imperfection. As the day winds down, a staff member arrives with a cart full of packed meals, a small mercy for the exhausted crew. Selina, however, has no appetite for food. Instead, she leans back with a cigarette between her lips, her thumb tracing the edge of her smartphone. Her assistant lingers nearby, her curiosity finally getting the better of her as she asks what could possibly be so serious. With a flick of her wrist, Selina reveals the screen a stunning portrait of Phoebe Helen that seems to radiate power even in digital form. The assistant giggles, teasingly asking if the director has finally found someone who piques her interest. Selina doesn't answer immediately, instead choosing to slowly crush her cigarette into a glass ashtray, her expression unreadable. The public will criticize you for liking someone like her, the assistant warns, her voice tinged with genuine concern for her boss's reputation. But as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold, Selina simply waves a hand in dismissal. Later, as she is driven through the darkening streets in the back of a luxury sedan, she stares at the device in her hand once more. She looks at Phoebe's cold, beautiful features and feels a thrill run down her spine. "Oh," she whispers to the empty car. "This woman is definitely my type." The following morning, Selina is a whirlwind of energy, her voice booming through a megaphone as she rallies her team for the final push. When the last cut is finally called, the studio erupts in cheers, the crew exhausted but triumphant. To celebrate, Selina treats them all to a lavish dinner, where the wine flows as freely as the gossip. One of the men raises a glass, his face flushed with excitement as he praises Phoebe Helen's untouchable capabilities. Selina listens with a quiet intensity, her chin resting in her palm as she watches the wine swirl in her glass. They talk about Phoebe's empire, the airlines, the sea freight, and the massive theme parks that have made her a queen of industry. Suddenly, a phone is thrust into the center of the table, displaying a headline that makes the entire group gasp. "Look, it's written right here," a colleague whispers. "She's divorced." The table falls silent for a heartbeat before another voice chimes in, claiming there are reports of a rumored girlfriend. The name Yuzing Ren is mentioned, a famous figure in the industry known for her string of high-profile romances with actresses. Selina looks down at her own phone, where Phoebe's face is set as her lock screen wallpaper, the secret light of her eyes reflected in the glass. A slow, determined smile spreads across her face as she thinks, "Phoebe Helen, we will meet for sure." Night falls over the glittering skyline of Hongou City, where the cold neon lights hide the heavy secrets of the heart. On Cuisine Street, the warm glow of the Echo Eatery beckons, but inside a quiet, private dining room, the atmosphere is anything but light. A man looks across the table at Phoebe, his voice trembling with a mixture of grief and expectation as he mentions the upcoming death anniversary of his sister Danny. Phoebe's gaze drops instantly, her eyes clouding with a pain that has lingered for 13 long years as she quietly refuses to join him at the cemetery. "Have you completely forgotten her?" he asks, his voice sharp with a desperation that cuts through the silence of the room. Phoebe's jaw tightens, her eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp intensity as she challenges him, asking if he truly thinks she still cares about the petty gossip of the world. A single, crystalline tear escapes her eye, tracing a slow path down her cheek as she reveals her true fear that the media would only use the memorial to dig up the past and disturb her sister's hard-won peace. Time marches forward, and we find ourselves in Wuyu City, where towering skyscrapers reach for the clouds in a display of modern ambition. Inside one of these glass giants, the air is buzzing with excitement as staff members marvel at their boss's incredible success, with their latest movie becoming a massive international hit. Amidst a sea of gift boxes and fresh fruit, the team celebrates their hard-earned nomination for the prestigious Kangong International Film Festival. Under the dazzling lights of the festival site, a young director waves to the flashing cameras, her smile radiant as she walks the red carpet in a stunning gown. The announcer's voice booms through the speakers, crowning Selina Shan as the winner of the Best Newcomer Director award. She steps onto the stage, the spotlight following her every move as she prepares to accept the golden trophy that marks her arrival in the industry. As Selina reaches for her prize, Phoebe sits in the front row, her eyes widening as she catches a clear glimpse of the young woman's face. Phoebe's heart skips a beat and her breath hitches. She stares at Selina, unable to shake the feeling of a hauntingly familiar resemblance. Later, at the after-party, Phoebe holds a glass of wine with a practiced elegance, yet her gaze remains fixed on the mysterious girl across the room. Selina feels the weight of that intense stare, her own expression flickering with a mix of curiosity and mounting nerves. Oh God, did she see me? Selina wonders, her pulse racing as she tries to maintain her composure under Phoebe's piercing, regal look. A soft, rosy hue creeps into Selina's cheeks, a detail that doesn't go unnoticed as the two women stand in such close proximity. My goodness, just one glance and your face is already so red. Her companion teases, a playful smirk dancing on her lips at Selina's sudden shyness. Selina quickly turns her head away, her voice a frantic whisper as she tries to deny the obvious blush staining her skin. Phoebe glides through the crowd like a queen, her red dress flowing around her as she approaches the group with effortless grace. Selina's companion waves Phoebe over, eager to bridge the gap between the legendary chairman and the rising star. Mr. Zhang, the festival's vice chairman, beams with pride as he prepares to introduce his talented friends to one another. The young actress Renee pouts playfully, claiming she's still incredibly sad about missing out on the Best Actress award this time around. Mr. Zhang chuckles, assuring her that with so many great directors present, her next big opportunity is just around the corner. Your wish is my command, Selina says with a polite smile, as they clink their glasses together in a toast to the future. The group gathers around a lavishly set banquet table, the air filled with the sounds of laughter and the clinking of silverware. Mr. Zhang raises his glass once more, officially welcoming Phoebe, the talented actress Renee, and their new rising director. Renee sighs dramatically, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she continues to lament her loss to the amused group. Mr. Zhang leans in, noticing the persistent flush on Selina's face and asking if she's simply overwhelmed by the heavy flow of compliments. Mr. Zhang, she isn't shy. Renee interjects with a giggle. She's blushing because she saw Miss Phoebe. Mr. Zhang's eyebrows shoot up in surprise, jokingly asking if Selina has a hidden crush on his dear friend. Selina waves her hands frantically, her voice rising in a pitch of adorable desperation as she insists she simply adores Phoebe as her ultimate idol. Renee seizes the moment, jokingly offering to give away her sister if it means securing a lead role in Selina's next project. The table erupts in laughter at the bold suggestion, the tension of the evening melting away into genuine warmth. My sister loves me so much she'll support me unconditionally, Renee brags, looking over at Phoebe for sibling confirmation. Sis, am I right? She asks, her eyes bright with the confidence of a girl who knows she is cherished. Phoebe smiles softly, her eyes warming as she admits she already feels a strange, deep connection to Selina. The group raises their glasses high once more, the red wine shimmering under the banquet hall's chandeliers. Selina looks directly at Phoebe, her voice filled with sincere honor as she expresses how much meeting her truly means. Excitedly, Renee suggests they all return to Hongo City together the next day, promising a trip to her sister's theme park. Phoebe's smile widens as she agrees to the plan, her hand resting gently on the table amidst a beautiful, blooming arrangement of pink roses. The sun glints off the towering glass spires of the city, marking the beginning of a long-awaited escape from the daily grind. Inside the opulent lobby of the legendary GMG Luxury Hotel, the air is thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the chatter of a team finally allowed to breathe. I've wanted to visit Hongo for so long, one of the girls exclaims, her eyes bright with the promise of theme parks and the famous signature tower. Selina stands amidst the excitement, her heart already racing, though not for the tourist attractions, but for the woman leading them. Suddenly, a familiar voice cuts through the noise as Renee and Phoebe approach the group with effortless grace. Phoebe greets them warmly, but it's Renee's presence that commands the room, her aura both intimidating and magnetic as the girls look on in awe. Enjoy yourselves, Renee says with a small, knowing smile that seems to reach only her eyes, sending a shiver down Selina's spine. Selina can barely contain her grin, feeling the weight of her management responsibilities finally lifting as she prepares to roam free under Renee's watchful gaze. For a fleeting moment, Selina and Renee stand face to face, surrounded by a metaphorical garden of blooming roses as the tension between them hums like a live wire. The group's energy peaks as they decide to head straight for the hotel's private art gallery, the girls practically vibrating with chibi-like glee as they drag each other along. They pass beneath the elegant sign of the art gallery, entering a world of hushed whispers and priceless beauty. Inside, the walls are lined with breathtaking traditional landscapes, each scroll telling a story of ancient mountains and myths that leaves the group breathless. Selina finds herself trailing behind, her mind drifting as she realizes she's standing right next to the woman who haunts her dreams, and the proximity is almost too much to bear. Renée gestures toward a vibrant Renaissance piece, explaining how she fought tooth and nail to secure it for the GMG collection. She moves with the fluidity of a predator, leading them to a famous ancient painting that represents the pride of their heritage, her voice smooth and captivating. But Selina's attention is stolen by a sudden flash of brilliance coming from a nearby display case, her eyes widening at the sparkle. Sensing her interest, Renée leans in impossibly close, her warmth radiating through the small space between them as she describes the royal jewels in a low, intimate tone. Selina's breath hitches and her face flushes a deep crimson as she feels Renée's gaze lingering just a second too long on her instead of the display. It's a combination of 108 diamonds, Renée whispers, pointing out the massive center stone that sparkles like a fallen star against the velvet. As Renée looks at her, the jewels in the case seem dull compared to the fire dancing in Renée's own eyes, making Selina's knees go weak. Selina tries to play it cool, but internally, she's a mess of nerves, wondering if Renée is asking about the jewelry or testing her own reactions. Just as Selina thinks her heart can't take any more, Renée casually drapes an arm around her shoulders, pulling her into a world where only the two of them exist. They walk through the gallery as a trio, but Selina is acutely aware of every point of contact, feeling as though her heart might actually pop out of her chest. The following morning brings a change of pace as the rest of the group prepares for a day of high adrenaline thrills at the theme park. Selina waves them off with a practiced smile, insisting she'd much rather spend her morning in the hotel's quiet cafe with a cup of coffee. "You're just afraid of the high-speed rides, aren't you?" One of her colleagues teases, laughing at Selina's sudden bashfulness. Selina just shakes her head, telling them to stop fooling around and stay safe while they enjoy the park without her. She finds a quiet corner in the hotel's upscale coffee shop, the peaceful atmosphere a stark contrast to the chaos she knows is happening at the rides. From her vantage point, she spots a familiar silhouette passing through the lobby, flanked by staff and looking every bit the powerful chairman. She watches the elevator doors close, a pang of longing striking her as she realizes how much she wants to be part of that inner circle. Later, Phoebe joins her in the lounge area, asking how the rest of the team enjoyed their tour of the signature tower. Selina hugs a pillow to her chest, listening as Phoebe describes the luxury facilities and the hype surrounding the new theme park. The scale of the development is staggering, a testament to the ambition of the woman Selina admires from afar. "So, are you really sitting out the bungee jumping too?" Phoebe asks, looking at her friend with a mix of pity and amusement. Selina sighs, confirming that she's perfectly content to stay right here with her caffeine and her thoughts of Renée. Phoebe chuckles, teasing that even the bitterest coffee must taste sweet when you're daydreaming about someone special. A waitress arrives with a fresh cup, the steam rising in delicate swirls as the afternoon sun filters through the windows. Selina stares in the dark liquid, her mind a whirlwind of what-ifs as she wonders if she'll see her again today. She glances down at her watch, noting how the minutes seem to stretch into hours when she's waiting for a sign. Suddenly, a commotion near the entrance catches her eye, and she sits up straight, her pulse quickening in anticipation. It's her. Renée strides through the lobby, surrounded by a phalanx of bodyguards and assistants in sharp suits. It's really her. She looks so cool. Selina whispers to herself, her eyes wide with adoration as she watches the parade. She watches as the entourage approaches the elevator, Renée's red dress standing out like a flame in a forest of gray suits. The doors begin to slide shut, framing Renée's stoic expression as she prepares to return to her world of high-stakes business. Selina bites her lip, a silent, desperate prayer escaping her heart. Will she notice my existence too? She looks back down at her table. The silence of the cafe is suddenly feeling heavy and oppressive as she tries to breathe the same air. Just as she prepares to leave, her phone erupts into a frantic series of pings, vibrating against the wood and startling her. Her heart stops when she sees the caller ID its chairman Helen calling her directly. With trembling fingers and a face burning with a fresh blush, she answers the call. "Hi, Sis," she murmurs, her voice barely a whisper. Phoebe's voice crackles through the line, catching Selina off guard as she asks what her friend is up to. With a playful smirk, Phoebe reveals she's seen Selina lingering at the cafe for 2 days straight. Selina's heart skips a beat, her cheeks flushing as she realizes she wasn't as invisible as she thought. The line goes silent with a soft beep, leaving Selina breathless in the sudden quiet. A soft smile touches her lips, warmed by the realization that she was truly noticed. The sun shines brightly over the sprawling, vibrant grounds of Hongo theme park. Phoebe leads the way through the park, her red dress a bold contrast to Selina's casual style. They pause before the Grand Performing Arts Center, the heart of the park's entertainment. Phoebe turns with a piercing gaze, asking for Selina's professional feedback on their show. Selina stammers a polite response, her nerves beginning to fray under that intense scrutiny. Sitting together on a luxurious sofa, the air between them grows heavy with unspoken tension. Selina's eyes widen, her breath hitching as Phoebe's presence becomes all-encompassing. "I want you to remake the stage play for our theater," Phoebe proposes, her voice low and steady. Phoebe leans in dangerously close, her hand resting near Selina's shoulder as she asks for cooperation. Their faces are inches apart, the heat of the moment making Selina's head spin. Later that evening, a rich red wine is poured as the day's events are analyzed. Selina stares out at the city lights, recounting Phoebe's unexpected and bold invitation. Her companion listens intently, the clink of glass puncturing the heavy atmosphere. The practical reality of the offer hit staying in Hongo would change everything for the company. A warning is issued. Selina must think clearly about what this woman truly wants from her. A plume of smoke drifts into night air as Selina contemplates the risk. Taking a deep breath, she dials the chairman, her mind finally made up. Standing against the glowing skyline, she whispers her final decision. She accepts the offer. The elegant white piano sits amidst blooming hydrangeas, setting a serene mood for the transition. Phoebe leads Selina down the polished marble hallway of the luxury suite. Selina hesitates, asking if staying in Phoebe's personal quarters is truly appropriate. Inside the lavish room, Phoebe pulls Selina close, her arm draped possessively over her shoulders. Selina's breath hitches at the sudden closeness, her eyes wide with surprise. Phoebe leans in, teasing that she simply wants to keep a close eye on her new sister. As Selina turns to leave, she can't help but wonder who this mysterious friend is that Phoebe mentioned. With a playful wave and a wink, Phoebe sends her off, promising a grand introduction later. Selina lingers for a moment, the weight of the upcoming evening pressing on her mind. The scene shifts to the theater, where dazzling lights illuminate the stage for rehearsal. Selina stands before the cast, her presence commanding as she prepares to refine their performance. One more time from the top, she commands, her passion for the craft shining through. As the sun sets, Selina steps out in vibrant red heels, ready for a dinner engagement. The pressure of the production continues to mount as the cast scrambles to find their positions. Selina climbs the stairs, spotting Phoebe's striking red dress waiting for her in the distance. Phoebe watches with a sly, cat-like grin, clearly pleased with her plan. Selina greets her benefactor with a bright smile, relieved to see a familiar face. They exchange a few quick words about the progress of the day's work. "Well then, let's go," Selina says, eager to move on to the next part of the night. She waves a polite goodbye to the theater staff as they wrap up their duties. In the quiet of the car, Phoebe asks if Selina is becoming too close to the lead actress. Suddenly, Phoebe leans in, her gaze intense and searching as she invades Selina's personal space. "I told you, I know a lot about you," Phoebe whispers, her voice low and dangerous. Selina's cheeks flush a deep crimson, her heart racing under Phoebe's piercing stare. Phoebe pulls back, her expression unreadable as she contemplates her next move. Selina stares out the window, wondering if she should have probed into Phoebe's complicated history. They arrive at the exclusive Helen private club, an aura of mystery surrounding the venue. Phoebe swings the door open, announcing their arrival with effortless confidence. Standing there is Ren, elegant woman wrapped in a stylish scarf. Phoebe introduces Selina as her new sister and a brilliant director. Ren freezes, her eyes widening as if she's just seen a ghost. Despite the tension, the two women share a polite but stiff handshake. As they settle in to look at the menu, Ren can't take her eyes off Selina. Exquisite dishes are served, though the atmosphere remains heavy with unspoken thoughts. Ren takes a bite, her gaze never wavering from Selina's face. Selina listens intently, sensing there is more to this meeting than just a casual dinner. Phoebe tries to play it off, claiming she simply felt a special bond with Selina. "I think it's because you look like someone else," Ren remarks pointedly. Selina points to herself in disbelief, wondering who she could possibly resemble. Ren's face remains deadly serious as she prepares to reveal a painful secret. Phoebe looks away, a bead of sweat forming as the conversation takes a dark turn. "You look exactly like my dead sister, Ren," Ren states coldly. Selina's world stops as she realizes she might merely be a replacement for a lost love. Selina carefully applies her lipstick, her mind racing with questions about the mysterious woman named Ren, who appeared in her life just the night before. She can't help but wonder why Phoebe was so attached to someone from her past, her reflection staring back with a mix of curiosity and a growing sense of unease. Shaking off the heavy thoughts, she decides that dwelling on it won't give her the answers she needs right now, and she has a premiere to attend. The Grand Performing Arts Center stands ready for the night's main event, the air buzzing with the electric anticipation of a high-stakes debut. Reporters and photographers swarm the entrance like a pack of wolves, their cameras flashing incessantly as they wait for the stars to arrive. As the sleek black car pulls up, Selina and Phoebe step out onto the red carpet, looking like a power couple under the bright lights of the Time in Hongao premiere. Phoebe looks absolutely stunning, radiating a cold, elegant beauty that commands the attention of everyone in the crowd, her presence acting as a shield for Selina. When a reporter leans in with a probing, uncomfortable question, Phoebe's expression shifts, her eyes darkening as she senses the intrusion. Without a word, she firmly pulls Selina away, her grip tight and protective as she leads them toward the safety of the venue. The queue for the entrance is long, filled with eager fans and socialites whispering as the pair passes by. Inside the exclusive VIP box, Phoebe and Selina sit side by side, the air between them thick with unspoken tension as the lights begin to dim and the show starts. As the performance unfolds on stage, the audience is completely captivated, their faces lit by the flickering glow of the production. The final curtain call is met with a thunderous roar of applause and cheers of "Awesome!" proving the play is an undeniable triumph. Champagne corks fly into the air as the celebration begins backstage, the festive sound of pop echoing through the room. The cast and crew gather around, their faces flushed with the thrill of success and the flow of expensive bubbly. Raising her glass, Phoebe takes center stage to offer a toast, her voice smooth and commanding as she thanks the director for her brilliant vision. She makes sure to acknowledge the boss's support, her eyes flickering toward Selina with a look that says more than words ever could. The director is overwhelmed by the sudden praise, her eyes wide with shock and joy as the room erupts in cheers of "Thanks, boss." Laughter fills the air as the team celebrates their hard-earned victory, the heavy weight of the production finally lifting from their shoulders. Rennie approaches them with a beaming smile, her phone in hand as she shares the incredible news from the box office. "The feedback online is amazing, and I just heard from the staff that the tickets for the next 3 days are already sold out," she exclaims. Selina and Phoebe lean in to look at the screen, their eyes widening at the massive success they've achieved together. Rennie nudges Selina playfully, telling her she needs to hurry up and demand a proper reward from her sister for such a contribution. Selina taps her chin thoughtfully, a mischievous spark dancing in her eyes as she considers her options. Phoebe crosses her arms, a playful smirk on her lips as she dares them to see just how expensive their demands can go. Rennie suggests asking for a whole villa, causing Selina to burst into a fit of giggles at the absurdity of it. "I don't want a house," Selina says softly, her gaze turning tender and serious as she looks directly at Phoebe. The room goes quiet for a moment as Selina makes her real request, leaving Rennie and the others completely confused by her sudden change in tone. She admits that she'd much rather have a guest room in Phoebe's home than any luxury property, her cheeks flushing a deep pink. Rennie can only blink in surprise, realizing that Selina's desires are far more personal than anyone expected. Later, in a quieter corner of the party, Rennie checks in on the upcoming filming schedule, trying to bring the conversation back to business. As they sit down with some tea, Selina decides it's finally time to ask the question that's been burning in her heart all night. She leans forward, her voice low and cautious as she asks Rennie if she knows anything about a woman named Danny Wren. Rennie pauses, the lighthearted mood vanishing instantly as she takes a slow, heavy sip of her drink. Taking a long drag of her cigarette, Rennie stares into the distance, the smoke curling around her like ghosts from the past. "Danny. She should have been my sister's girlfriend," Rennie reveals, her voice tinged with a deep, lingering sadness. As she pours more tea, the steam rising between them, she begins to recount a tragic tale of a family's cold-blooded greed. She explains how their father forced Danny into a marriage for the sake of his business, ignoring her tears and her heart. Selina listens intently, her heart aching for the woman she never met, seeing the raw pain reflected in Rennie's eyes. Rennie describes the aftermath, how Danny spiraled into a deep, dark depression, unable to escape the cage her father built for her. The story ends in a chilling tragedy, with Danny losing consciousness after an accidental overdose of sleeping pills and alcohol. Selina stares down at the table, the weight of the story settling heavily in her chest as she realizes the depth of the scar Phoebe carries. Rennie sighs, stubbing out her cigarette as she notes that people shouldn't think they have it easy just because they're born wealthy. "But it's been so many years," Rennie adds, looking at Selina with a strange, searching gaze that makes her skin crawl. Selina's breath hitches as she asks the final, most terrifying question, "Do I look like her? Do I look like that Danny Wren a lot?" Rennie doesn't look away, her silence speaking volumes before she finally admits that the resemblance is indeed startling, leaving Selina lost in a sea of doubt. "We're only leaving for work," Selina's friend says as they stand by the sleek black car. Selina grips Phoebe's hands tightly, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Phoebe pulls Selina into a brief, lingering embrace, her gaze intense as she holds her close. With a final glance, Selina's friend slips into the back seat, ready to depart. "Remember to text me every day," Selina calls out, waving as the vehicle begins to pull away. Phoebe watches the car disappear, a flicker of softness crossing her stern face. Inside the car, Selina leans against the window, her heart already feeling the distance. Soon, the bustling energy of the XX film studio fills the scene as production begins. "My costume looks nice, right?" A girl chirps, spinning in her punk rock outfit. Selina laughs and pulls her into a tight hug, thrilled by the energy on set. They share a joyful moment before the director calls for work to begin. Meanwhile, back at the office, Phoebe is startled by her phone buzzing on the desk. She glances down at the screen, the light reflecting in her sharp eyes. Even in the middle of a high-stakes meeting, she can't resist checking her messages. A rare smile tugs at her lips as she reads an update from Selina. "In a meeting, missing you guys too," she types back with uncharacteristic haste. Her assistant watches in confusion as the cold chairman suddenly seems worlds away. Back on set, a staff member approaches Selina with a large, mysterious parcel. The box is plain, but the sender's name catches her attention immediately. "Tobacco? Who would send me this?" Selina wonders, looking completely baffled. Just then, her phone vibrates in her pocket with a sharp ding. It's using Ren on the line, his voice smooth as he checks if she received his gift. Selina holds the box, thanking him while trying to hide her growing confusion. He brushes off her thanks, insisting he has plenty more to send her in the future. Selina forces a polite smile, though a bead of nervous sweat rolls down her temple. That night, Selina stares at her phone in the dark, pouting because Phoebe never replied. She paces her room in her pajamas, her mind racing with 1,000 anxieties. Does she only treat me well because of Danny Wren? She whispers, her eyes filling with doubt. She eventually drifts into a restless sleep, the weight of her insecurity heavy. By 6 a.m. the next morning, Phoebe's already at the office, absolutely livid with her team. A trembling employee tries to explain the error, but his voice falters under her icy glare. "I don't want any explanation. My team shouldn't make basic mistakes," she roars. The staff members bow their heads in terror, praying to survive the chairman's wrath. "Dismissed," she snaps, slamming her hand on the desk as they scramble to leave. Once alone, Phoebe collapses back into her chair, her eyes red from a long all-nighter. She reaches for her phone, only to realize the screen is black and the battery is dead. The little empty battery icon mocks her as the device shuts down completely. Across town, Selina finally wakes up, letting out a long, dramatic yawn as she stretches. She fumbles for her phone, her face falling when she sees there are still no messages. She drags herself to the kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee doing little to lift her mood. The sound of the coffee pouring is the only thing breaking the silence of the apartment. She takes a slow, pensive sip, her mind still stuck on the silence from the night before. Suddenly, her eyes drift to the clock on the wall and her heart nearly stops. "Oh no! I'm going to be late," she screams, her peaceful morning instantly shattered. She abandons her coffee and begins a frantic, high-speed scramble to get ready. With a loud bang, she slams the door behind her, racing toward the studio. But in her haste, she left her phone behind, and it begins to buzz on the nightstand. The screen lights up with a call from her, the very person she had been waiting for all night. The morning sun bleeds over the skyline, casting long, golden shadows across the towering headquarters of the Hongao group. Inside, Phoebe is a mess of silk and exhaustion, collapsed across her bed in a vibrant red dress that looks like a splash of blood against the white sheets. Her silence is shattered by the insistent vibration of her phone, the screen illuminating the name using Ren. She stares at the device for a long beat, her eyes heavy with a fatigue that reaches far deeper than just a lack of sleep. With a groan, she lifts the phone toward the ceiling, the light reflecting off her polished nails as she hesitates to answer. Finally, she brings it to her ear, her voice a mere whisper of its usual sharp self. On the other end, Using Ren sounds far too composed, his voice smooth as he questions her sudden punctuality. Phoebe sits up slowly, the fabric of her dress rustling as she tries to shake off the remnants of a restless night. Before long, they are seated across from one another at a breakfast table that feels miles wide, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. Ren leans back, a playful yet piercing smile dancing on his lips as he asks if she expected the caller to be Selina-shan. Phoebe looks down at the table, her expression clouding over as she tries to hide the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Ren watches her closely, his gaze lingering on her face as he probes deeper, asking if the two of them had another falling out. Phoebe's jaw sets, her eyes flashing with a cold fire that warns him to tread carefully. Ren doesn't back down, suggesting with a light chuckle that her interest in Selina is merely because of her striking resemblance to her sister Danny. He leans in, the light catching the sharp edges of his glasses as he declares that no one, no matter how similar they look, could ever replace Danny in his heart. The comparison is like a slap to the face, and Phoebe slams her hands onto the table, her earrings swaying violently with the force of her movement. Ren doesn't even flinch, simply telling her to hurry up and eat so she can finally get some rest. Hours later, the room is bathed in the soft, blue hues of the afternoon as Phoebe wakes up, her arm draped across her face to block out the world. She turns her head toward the window, watching the clouds drift by and wondering exactly how much of the day she has lost to sleep. Her first instinct is to check her phone, her heart sinking when she sees the notification tray remains empty. She bites her lip, her thumb trembling slightly as she decides to take the initiative and dial the number herself. Across town, Selina is sprawled out on her own bed, looking every bit as drained as she answers the call. Phoebe's voice is sharp, demanding to know why it took her so long to pick up and why she ignored her messages. Selina's eyes widen, her breath hitching as she prepares to defend herself against the onslaught. Phoebe sits up, running a hand through her hair in a gesture of pure, unadulterated frustration. Selina retorts that she simply forgot her phone at home, her voice rising to match Phoebe's intensity. The two women are locked in a digital standoff, their faces mirrored in a split screen of rising tempers and hidden hurts. Phoebe's eyes narrow into slits, her suspicion growing as she accuses Selina of leaving the phone behind on purpose. Selina flashes back to her chaotic morning, a chibi version of herself rushing out the door in a panic while her phone sat forgotten on the nightstand. She tries to explain the sheer madness of the film sight, her hands gesturing wildly as if Phoebe could see her. But Phoebe isn't listening, her jealousy flaring as she demands to know why Selina didn't use someone else's phone to reach her. "Busy? You think you're busier than me?" Phoebe shouts into the receiver, her face flushed with a mix of anger and desperation. Selina recoils as if she's been struck, her blue eyes shimmering with the sudden threat of tears. The weight of Phoebe's expectations feels like a physical burden, and Selina's lip trembles as she struggles to find the words to defend her own hard work. Phoebe freezes, the sound of Selina's shaky breath making her realize she's pushed too far. Without a word apology or goodbye, Selina abruptly ends the call, the screen going dark. She buries her face in her pillow, her shoulders shaking as she finally lets out the sob she's been holding back all day. Phoebe stares at her phone in disbelief, her heart pounding against her ribs as the reality of the silence sets in. She looks at the screen one last time, wondering why she allows this girl to affect her so deeply. Shaking off the feeling, she wraps herself tightly in a blanket and dials another number, her voice returning to its usual commanding tone. She instructs Rennie to have a driver ready at the airport tomorrow, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance as she prepares for the next move in her complicated game. Wuyu Airport is a blur of movement as the evening flights arrive. Phoebe steps onto the tarmac, her phone pressed to her ear as she promises to handle things in Hongo soon. Inside the car, her driver confirms that Renyi is completely unaware of her sudden arrival. Good. Phoebe replies coolly, take me straight to the filming location. The set is alive with the hum of cameras and the glow of stage lights. Behind the scenes, Renyi and Selina watch the monitor, oblivious to their unexpected guest. Selina's breath hitches as she spots Phoebe's striking figure approaching through the crowd. Cut! That's a wrap for today, Phoebe commands, her voice cutting through the noise. Renyi's face lights up with joy, her hand waving frantically at her sister. She rushes forward to greet her, while Selina stands back, her expression unreadable and tense. Sis, why are you here? Renyi asks excitedly, is this a surprise visit? Selina watches from a distance, her eyes narrowed as she questions Phoebe's true motives. With a charming smile, Phoebe claims she's simply here to see them both. Selina doesn't buy it, turning away with a cold, hurt expression as she walks off. Phoebe pulls Renyi into a warm embrace, laughing at her sister's boundless energy. Really? I don't believe you. Renyi teases, searching Phoebe's eyes for the truth. Phoebe tells her to go change, making it clear she needs a private word with Selina. Once alone, Phoebe heads toward the director's RV with a look of firm determination. She finds Selina inside, the atmosphere immediately becoming heavy with unspoken words. I was wrong yesterday, Phoebe admits softly. I shouldn't have said those things to you. Selina sits in silence, her head bowed as she avoids Phoebe's intense gaze. When she finally looks up, her eyes are brimming with tears she can no longer hide. You say you're not mad, but you're crying, Phoebe whispers, her heart sinking at the sight. A flash of genuine regret crosses Phoebe's face as she sees the depth of Selina's pain. Selina looks away, whispering that they have never truly been equals. Phoebe leans in close, her presence commanding Selina's full attention. Stop that, Phoebe says firmly. In my eyes, you are the absolute best. She praises Selina's talent, her voice filled with a rare, soft sincerity. Is it just because I look like Danny Ren? Selina asks, the question hanging like a ghost between them. Phoebe recoils, her face flushing a deep red as the name catches her off guard. She stands over Selina, her breath shallow as she struggles to regain her composure. You're nothing like her, Phoebe insists. She was docile, but you are rebellious. She explains that Selina has a special vibe that is entirely her own. Selina asks if Phoebe fell for her looks but ended up loving her talent instead. Phoebe gazes at her warmly, the tension finally beginning to melt into something softer. Just promise me you won't just disappear in the future, Phoebe murmurs. A sudden, loud knocking on the door interrupts their intimate moment. Renyi peeks inside, asking if they are finally done talking so they can leave. Phoebe suggests a late-night snack, leading them both out of the RV. They head to a nearby grill, the night air filled with the scent of savory food. Phoebe asks about the filming schedule, curious how much longer they'll be stuck here. Renyi sighs, explaining that the director holds all the power over their breaks. I have to return to Hongo soon, Phoebe tells them, her gaze lingering on Selina. She invites them both to join her for the weekend, hoping for a chance to reconnect. Phoebe stares intently at Selina, waiting for any sign of a response. Finally, Selina blushes and agrees, promising to take a day off to be with her. Under the brilliant afternoon sun, the sleek glass of the Hongo headquarters shimmered with the promise of a weekend getaway. Phoebe stepped out of the lobby, her eyes widening as Selina waited by the car with a mischievous glint in her eyes, refusing to reveal their destination. The mystery was finally solved when they pulled up to the grand gates of a private horse-riding manor, the smell of fresh hay and expensive leather filling the air. Phoebe's heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and nerves as she confessed she had never actually ridden before. But Selina simply offered a confident smirk, promising she would be a natural. Selina led the way to the stables, proudly introducing her own magnificent white steed, a creature that looked as noble and graceful as its owner. With a gentle sweep of her hand, Selina invited Phoebe to choose a companion for the day from the finest horses in the manor. Phoebe's gaze was immediately drawn to a powerful black horse, its coat shining like polished onyx under the bright sky. Selina chuckled softly, stroking her white horse's man and affectionately calling him her very own Prince Charming. A playful smile danced on Phoebe's lips as she wondered aloud if that made her choice a dark prince in disguise. Seeing Phoebe's hesitation, Selina offered a steady hand and a reassuring nod, promising that the staff would keep things slow and safe for her very first time. With a deep breath, Phoebe allowed herself to be hoisted into the saddle, feeling the immense power of the animal beneath her. Above them, the sky was a canvas of endless blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds that seemed to mirror the lightness in Phoebe's chest. Under the watchful eye of a trainer, Phoebe began her first slow laps, her initial fear melting away into pure, unadulterated joy. Selina watched from the sidelines, her eyes softening as she asked if Phoebe was having fun, receiving a radiant, beaming smile in return. After a successful session, Phoebe prepared to dismount, her heart still racing from the exhilarating experience. But as she shifted her weight, her boot lost its grip on the stirrup, a sudden slip sending a jolt of panic through her system. Before she could even cry out, she tumbled forward, only to find herself cushioned by the soft grass and the firm, protective embrace of Selina. Time seemed to stand still as Selina reached up, her thumb grazing Phoebe's chin with a tenderness that made the blonde's breath hitch in her throat. Phoebe's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, her voice trembling slightly as she looked into Selina's intense gaze and insisted she was fine. Selina gave a knowing smile before gracefully mounting her own horse once more, her movements fluid and practiced. With a sharp click of her tongue, she spurred her horse into a gallop, leaving Phoebe breathless as she watched her command the field. Selina soared over a high jump with effortless perfection, a display of skill that left Phoebe completely mesmerized and cheering from the fence. Returning to Phoebe's side, Selina's eyes sparkled with adrenaline as she offered to personally lead Phoebe's horse for a few more laps. Phoebe's heart did a little flip at the suggestion, her initial shyness replaced by a desperate desire to spend more time in Selina's orbit. The two moved together across the field, a picture of quiet intimacy as the powerful executive personally guided the novice rider through the grass. Later, they retired to the Manor's luxurious lounge, the atmosphere thick with the scent of high-end wood and brewing tea. Selina took a slow sip from her cup while Phoebe leaned back with a cigarette, listening as the executive admitted that horse riding had become her sanctuary. She spoke of the peace she found in raising her own horses, her voice dropping to a low, melodic tone that drew Phoebe in closer. Selina's hands rested on the table, her posture relaxed yet regal, exuding the quiet confidence of a woman who had built an empire. Phoebe listened intently, her admiration for the woman across from her growing with every word spoken in the quiet room. The peaceful moment was suddenly shattered when a red-haired man burst into the lounge, his face lighting up with recognition at the sight of Selina. Phoebe's heart sank as the stranger swept Selina into a sudden, familiar hug, his presence feeling like a cold splash of water on their private afternoon. The man, Ren, adjusted his glasses with a smirk, his eyes darting between the two women with an air of casual arrogance. He began to thank Selina for the premium cigarettes she had sent him, his voice dripping with a familiarity that made Phoebe's stomach knot with jealousy. Selina's composure slipped for a fraction of a second, her cheeks pinking as Phoebe looked on with a mix of shock and confusion. Sensing the shift in the room, Selina stood abruptly, cutting Ren off and insisting that they had urgent business to attend to back at the office. Ren waved a lazy goodbye, his lingering gaze on Selina leaving a bitter taste in Phoebe's mouth as they hurried away. Back at the company, the atmosphere was much more sterile, the weight of their responsibilities returning as Selina apologized for bringing Phoebe to the office. Phoebe stood by the massive window, looking out over the sprawling city skyline where a towering landmark pierced the clouds. Her eyes lingered on the structure, a symbol of power and achievement that felt almost out of reach. Selina explained that the tower was her own creation, built to mark a major milestone. But Phoebe's reply was soft and heavy with meaning. Selina sat at her desk, her eyes fixed on the documents before her, yet her mind seemed miles away from the cold text on the page. In an instant, Selina was by Phoebe's side, leaning into her space with a gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch, promising to take her to the landmark herself. The moon hung high over Hongo Airport as the cool night air signaled a new, uncertain chapter in this high-stakes game of hearts. A sleek black car waited at the curb, where a polite assistant greeted her, explaining that the chairman had personally requested this pickup. Settling into the plush leather seats, she felt a flicker of confusion when she realized they weren't heading toward her hotel at all. Her breath hitched as a sprawling, illuminated mansion came into view, its grandeur far exceeding anything she had ever imagined. Stepping out of the car, she was met by a woman whose presence commanded the very air around them, greeting her with a knowing, elegant smirk. The blonde girl's eyes sparkled with wonder, her heart racing as she took in the sheer scale of the estate. They moved through the grand, silent halls until they reached a set of ornate doors. "While you were at the hotel, I had my study renovated into a bedroom just for you," the woman whispered, pushing the doors open to reveal a room that felt like a dream. A wave of anxiety washed over the girl as she realized the room was directly connected to the chairman's own private chambers, sparking fears of the gossip it might cause. The air grew thick with tension as the chairman leaned in, her eyes searching the girl's face with an intensity that made her pulse thrum with a dangerous rhythm. The girl looked around the room, her mind reeling at the intimate proximity she now shared with the most powerful woman in the city. "Let's go, I'll show you the other places," the woman offered, her voice smooth as velvet as she guided her guest deeper into the heart of the home. They passed the first floor, where a professional-grade kitchen and a shimmering outdoor pool waited beneath the stars. The basement was no less impressive, housing a private cinema, a karaoke room, and a gym for every whim. When they reached the wine cellar, the blonde girl couldn't help but gasp at the sheer luxury, her eyes wide with shock. But the chairman wasn't finished yet, leading her toward a space that felt even more personal and high-end. They entered a walk-in closet that looked more like a boutique, filled with endless rows of designer fashion and tailored suits. The girl stood frozen in awe as she stared at the rows of priceless jewelry gleaming under the soft spotlights. With a gentle grace, the chairman reached into a display case and pulled out a stunning, translucent purple bracelet. "This is my favorite," she said, her voice dropping an octave as she reached out to take the girl's hand. The girl's hand trembled as the cold, precious stone touched her skin, her mind reeling at the weight of such a gift. "No, this is too expensive," she stammered, but the chairman simply leaned closer, her gaze locking onto the girl's lips in a moment of pure, electric silence. The night blurred into a haze of deep red wine and shared secrets as they toasted to their new, complicated arrangement. Eventually, the alcohol took its toll, leaving the blonde girl sprawled across the bed in a deep, dreamless slumber. Hours later, she stirred, her throat parched, and her head spinning from the night's heavy indulgences. She stumbled toward the kitchen in her silk robe, gulping down water as she tried to clear the fog from her mind. Still half asleep and disoriented, she began the long climb back up the grand, winding staircase. She pushed open a heavy door, her eyes barely slowly open as she sought the comfort of her pillows once more. In her daze, she didn't realize she had wandered into the wrong room until she collapsed onto the bed, right next to the sleeping chairman. She curled up, oblivious to the fact that she was no longer alone in the dark. The chairman looked down at the sleeping girl with a soft, amused expression, noting just how much the wine had affected her. Sunlight began to filter through the curtains the next morning, slowly pulling the girl back to consciousness. Her eyes flew open as the realization of where she was and who she was lying next to hit her like a physical blow. A panic scream nearly escaped her lips as she bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs in total shock. She scrambled to gather her dignity. The sheets tangled around her as she tried to make sense of her drunken mistake. Embarrassment burned in her cheeks as she fled the room, her footsteps echoing through the hallway in her haste to escape. Downstairs, a lavish breakfast was already being served by the staff, the aroma of fresh food doing little to calm her frantic nerves. The chairman appeared shortly after, looking perfectly composed as she asked if her guest had rested well last night. I drank too much and slept like a log, the girl stammered, unable to meet the other woman's knowing, playful gaze. She sat at the table, her face a deep shade of crimson as she picked at the gourmet spread before her. The silence between them was heavy with the memory of their shared bed. The girl looked up, her expression soft and vulnerable as she realized she didn't want the morning to end. I don't want to be home alone. Please bring me to the company with you, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. A tiny, triumphant smile tugged at the chairman's lips as she agreed, knowing their bond was growing stronger than either of them had expected. The elevator doors slide shut as Selina gives a quick, obedient nod to Phoebe's instructions, promising to wait while the high-stakes business concludes. Inside the sterile, high-pressure environment of the boardroom, the air is thick with the weight of corporate power and the sharp eyes of the board members. With a final, authoritative glance at her colleagues, Phoebe declares the meeting adjourned, her voice echoing with the cold professionalism of a woman in total control. As the group exits the room, Phoebe walks with an effortless grace, her younger brother Yuhu Helen following closely by her side, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. Phoebe's sharp eyes immediately soften when she spots Selina waiting in the hallway, calling her over with a rare, genuine warmth in her tone. Selina approaches with a humble smile, unaware of the calculating stares from the board members, Liao and Lu Yu, who watch her every move. Phoebe gestures toward the tall, stoic man beside her, introducing Yuhu Helen as her younger brother to the girl she has taken under her wing. The atmosphere turns sparkling and bright as Phoebe proudly presents Selina as the director of time in Hongao, and her cherished younger sister, prompting a polite handshake between the two. They begin to make their way downstairs as a group, a seemingly perfect picture of corporate harmony and familial bonds. However, as Selina trails slightly behind, she catches the lingering, suspicious glances of the others, feeling like an outsider in their world of prestige. A cold shiver runs down her spine when she overhears the sharp sting of gossip, realizing that her staying at Phoebe's private residence has already set tongues wagging. The tension in the group spikes as a board member mentions how Phoebe even cleared out her own study just to make room for Selina, a gesture of favoritism that hasn't gone unnoticed. Yuhu's gaze hardens as he looks at his sister, his voice laced with a protective jealousy as he demands to know why this girl is so special to her. His eyes narrow behind his frames, his mind racing with dark suspicions that Selina is nothing more than a social climber with a hidden motive. Selina's breath hitches, and her heart sinks as she realizes the beautiful world Phoebe built for her is already beginning to crumble under the weight of these accusations. Phoebe's face sets into a mask of icy defiance, snapping at her brother that she is simply hosting her sister, and it shouldn't be anyone else's concern. Frustrated by the prying eyes, Phoebe turns on her heel and walks away, leaving the men behind to whisper about how weird she has been acting lately. Yuhu crosses his arms, a vengeful fire lighting up his eyes as he vows that he won't let Selina take anything his biological sister couldn't have. The scene shifts to the grand, opulent halls of the Performing Arts Center, where the glimmering lights usually bring Selina comfort. Backstage, the cast members greet Selina with bright smiles, happy to see their director during such a busy rehearsal schedule. Selina tries to focus on the work, leaning in to discuss the new cast members for the B set, but her mind is clearly elsewhere. As she walks through the theater, the praise of her staff feels hollow against the backdrop of the morning's confrontation. Suddenly, the sharp vibration of a phone in her pocket breaks her train of thought, the persistent buzzing demanding her attention. She pulls the device out and answers, her voice trembling slightly as she wonders who could be calling at such an hour. On the other end of the line, a familiar, cold voice greets her, sending a jolt of pure dread through her chest. It's Yuhu Helen, and he wastes no time on pleasantries, his voice dripping with disdain as he confronts her about staying in his sister's home. He sits in the back of a darkened car, his posture rigid as he questions how she could possibly have earned Phoebe's trust in just a few short months. Selina's eyes flash with a momentary spark of defiance, her voice rising as she asks him why her presence is such a crime. Yuhu's lip curls into a sneer as he reminds her of the massive gap in their social standing, mocking the idea of a mere director living like a queen in the chairman's house. His eyes turn predatory through the phone line, delivering a chilling warning that she had better behave herself if she knows what's good for her. He leans forward, his voice a low growl as he accuses her of using dirty tricks to worm her way into his family's inner circle. A hot tear escapes Selina's eye and tracks down her cheek as she desperately denies having any ulterior motives or playing games with Phoebe's heart. Overcome with a crushing sense of guilt and shame, she sobs into the receiver, the weight of the gold digger label feeling like a physical blow. Alone under the harsh lights of the terminal, Selina stands at the airport, her spirit broken by the cruel reality of the world she tried to join. Her phone lights up again, displaying a call from her, the woman she loves like a sister, but Selina can barely bring herself to look at the screen. She answers with a shaky breath, lying through her teeth about a sudden company emergency that requires her to leave immediately. Phoebe stands up in her luxury suite, her brow furrowed with deep concern as she questions why Selina is rushing away so suddenly after only one day. Selina paces the marble floors of the airport, her heart breaking as she apologizes over and over, feeling like a burden to the only person who was ever kind to her. Tears stream down her face as she tells Phoebe not to come for her, her voice cracking with the agony of a forced goodbye. She looks up at the flight information board through a blur of salt and sorrow, knowing there is no turning back now. As the plane ascends into the night sky, Selina gazes out the window at the receding city lights, whispering to herself that perhaps she should have never come in the first place. Inside the quiet luxury of Selina Shan's home, the morning light filtered through the windows, a heavy realization set in. Tomorrow was her first birthday since they had met, and the pressure to find the perfect gift weighed heavily on her heart. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the sharp chime of her phone. A message from her beloved flashed on the screen, asking simply what time she would arrive. Selina stared at the words, her fingers hovering over the keyboard in a moment of pure hesitation. When the arrival was confirmed for 4 p.m., a soft blush crept onto her cheeks as the anticipation became real. The birthday party was a whirlwind of glitter and high society chatter. Phoebe stood at the center of it all, a vision in crimson, graciously accepting a mountain of luxury tributes. Standing in the corner, Selina clutched her small, hand-wrapped box, feeling her gift was far too humble for such a queen. She eventually approached, offering a nervous smile while promising to give her real gift in private later. The room erupted in cheers as the guests raised their glasses to the woman of the hour. As the night wound down, the glowing lights of the city reflected off the polished cars in the lot. The air was cool as the group made their way to the exit, sharing final laughs. In the shadows of the evening, the tension between Phoebe and Selina became a physical thing, drawing them closer together. "Mind your head," Phoebe whispered softly, her hand lingering on Selina's shoulder as she guided her into the car. Once they reached the quiet of the apartment, Selina offered a glass of water to the clearly exhausted birthday girl. Without warning, Phoebe's hand shot out, her grip firm and hot against Selina's skin. She pulled the girl into a crushing, desperate embrace that spoke of hidden longing. Selina's breath hitched, her body trembling as she leaned into the heat of Phoebe's neck. Phoebe took a slow, deliberate sip of the water, her eyes darkened with an intensity that made Selina's heart race. I have something for you," Selina stammered, trying to hide her small bag behind her back. She finally presented a simple jar filled with colorful capsules. Phoebe opened the jar with a look of genuine curiosity. She pulled out a single pink pill, turning it over in her palm. Selina explained shyly that every capsule contained a message she had written for her every single day. The air in the room seemed to vanish as Phoebe leaned in, her gaze fixed on Selina's lips. Their first kiss was a slow burn explosion, a release of months of suppressed desire. They tumbled onto the bed together, the world outside ceasing to exist. Another kiss followed, deeper and more possessive than the last. Phoebe's eyes were filled with a raw, predatory hunger as she looked down at her. They retreated under the heavy blankets, the intimacy of the moment wrapping around them like a cocoon. Phoebe watched her with a soft, triumphant smile, savoring the victory. Selina turned her face away, overwhelmed by the sheer power of the woman's presence. "I haven't told you what your real gift is yet," Phoebe murmured, her voice a low vibration. Selina looked back, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Their faces were inches apart, the heat of their breath mingling in the dark. Just as the world felt perfect, the jarring ring of a phone on the nightstand shattered the spell. The screen flickered to life, revealing a familiar face that made her heart skip a beat even as her brow furrowed in annoyance. "I was wondering if I missed your birthday when I woke up this morning," he said, his voice smooth and apologetic through the speaker as he adjusted his glasses. She let out an indignant huff, her cheeks puffing out in a pout as she snapped back that he was exactly one day too late to the party. A playful, knowing smile spread across his lips, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he promised to make it up to her the moment he returned to the city. Leaning back against the plush cushions of her sofa, she couldn't help but wonder if he had actually put any thought into a proper gift, or if this was another empty promise. "Of course I bought you something special while I was abroad," he chuckled, his eyes gleaming with a secret that only intensified the magnetic tension between them. With a final faint sniff, she told him she'd see him tomorrow, though the spark in her eyes betrayed the excitement she was trying so hard to hide. Later that evening, the air in the room felt heavy and stagnant as she sat beside Selina, the silence between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Selina took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, the porcelain clinking softly against her teeth as she claimed she had other plans and wouldn't be joining them. The Rejection stung like a physical blow, leaving her staring at Selina's profile and searching for even a single crack in that icy, stubborn facade. "Forget it. I won't receive any more gifts from you," Selina whispered, her voice cold and final as she stood up to leave. She watched Selina walk away, her heart heavy with a growing sense of unease and a desperate wish to reach out and pull her back. The next morning arrived with a crisp, unforgiving clarity, the sun glinting off the ornate gates of the estate as they prepared to head out for the day. Inside the car, the atmosphere was suffocating, the two women sitting side by side yet feeling like they were worlds apart in the cramped space. As they pulled up to the hotel entrance, Selina caught sight of a figure waiting in the lobby, her breath hitching in her throat as the reality of the day set in. With a forced wave and a hollow smile that didn't reach her eyes, Selina stepped out of the vehicle, leaving only the lingering scent of her perfume behind. She watched the car pull away into the busy city traffic, feeling a strange mixture of relief and a crushing isolation as she stood before the towering glass doors. Navigating the quiet, dimly lit hallways of the theater's backstage, Selina felt like a ghost haunting the scenes of her own life. Suddenly, the lights flared to life and a chorus of familiar voices erupted, shattering the silence with a joyous, synchronized birthday wish. Her eyes widened in genuine shock, a soft blush creeping up her neck as she realized her theater friends hadn't forgotten her special day at all. One of the girls laughed, pointing at a spreadsheet and explaining that they had seen her info when she signed up for her employee pass. The warmth of their genuine affection began to melt the ice around her heart, making her feel truly seen for the first time in weeks. Clutching a massive bouquet of pink blossoms to her chest, Selina finally let out a genuine laugh, the sound bright and clear against the backdrop of the stage. As she leaned over the beautiful cake to blow out the candles, she made a silent wish, her heart fluttering with a hope she thought she had lost. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle like fallen stars, the massive tower standing as a silent, glowing sentinel over the dark night. Selina stood by the window, the glow of a cigarette illuminating the sharp, melancholy lines of her face as she looked out at the urban sprawl. A sudden, rhythmic chime from her phone broke the stillness, the screen lighting up the darkened room with a notification. Her heart sank into her stomach as she saw the photo of the two people she cared about most looking far too happy and intimate without her. Her expression hardened into a mask of cold indifference as she typed out a brief reply, claiming she was too tired to ever consider coming over. Closing her eyes tightly, she leaned her forehead against the cool glass, letting the bitterness of the smoke fill her lungs as she tried to numb the ache in her chest. A sharp, insistent knock at the door startled her, the sound echoing through the suite like a frantic heartbeat. The door creaked open just an inch, revealing a pair of eyes that were filled with a hesitant, searching light and a world of unspoken apologies. The visitor stepped inside, offering a hurried explanation about a dead battery, and the panic that had set in when she realized Selina wasn't home. She looked around the room, her eyes darting from the long shadows to the woman standing so stiffly and silently by the window. Selina didn't move an inch, her silence serving as a barrier that was far more effective than any locked door could ever be. The tension in the room was palpable, a physical weight that made every breath feel like a struggle for both of them. She asked if Selina was truly upset about the meeting earlier, her voice trembling with a hint of desperation that she couldn't hide. But then, her gaze fell upon the vibrant bouquet of cherry blossoms resting on the table, their delicate beauty mocking the gloom of the room. A sudden, sickening realization washed over her, a cold shiver running down her spine as she looked at the flowers and then back at the woman she had so carelessly ignored. She picked up the small, handwritten card tucked among the petals, the truth of her own negligence finally hitting her with the devastating force of a tidal wave. "Why didn't you tell me it was your birthday yesterday?" Phoebe exclaims, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and disbelief as she clutches the small, pink birthday card meant for Selina. Selina looks away, her expression unreadable, as she admits she had nearly forgotten the date herself, only recalling it after theater friends brought it up. The realization hits Phoebe like a physical blow. Their birthdays are only a single day apart, a coincidence that feels far too heavy for the fragile tension between them. As the silence stretches, Selena's eyes begin to shimmer with unshed tears, her cool composure finally fracturing under the weight of the moment. Phoebe's heart aches at the sight, and she reaches out with a gentle, trembling hand to wipe away a stray tear, her touch lingering against Selina's warm skin. Selina gazes up with a desperate, searching look, whispering a plea for a promise that Phoebe isn't sure she has the strength to keep. Seeing the raw vulnerability in those eyes, Phoebe finds herself nodding, promising to do anything just to make the crying stop and see Selina smile again. The intensity in the room is suffocating as Phoebe leans in, her voice a soft, commanding whisper as she begs Selina to stop weeping. A heavy electric tension hangs between them, the delicate lace on Phoebe's sleeve fluttering as she waits for Selina's next request. Selina's breath hitches as she asks for one more thing, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear that borders on obsession. She wants Phoebe to officially take over the theater business, a move that would force her to stay in Hongao and by Selina's side forever. Phoebe's face pales as she pulls back slightly, her voice strained as she explains that her own company demands her constant, undivided attention. Her hand brushes against Selina's in a fleeting, agonizing moment of contact that feels like a goodbye before it's even truly begun. Selina leans in close, her voice dropping to a seductive, desperate whisper as she confesses that she only feels truly secure when they are together. The mood shifts abruptly to a cold, digital nightmare back at the office as a runtime error flashes across Phoebe's computer screen, signaling a catastrophic server failure. Phoebe stares at the monitor in disbelief, her mind racing as she realizes the entire film project everything they've worked for is stored on that broken server. Her assistant hovers nervously behind her, asking if there's any hope for the backup server. But the news is only getting grimmer. The assistant clutches the project files to her chest, her face pale as she realizes the magnitude of the disaster unfolding in the quiet office. A cold shiver runs down Phoebe's spine at the thought of all their funding being wasted, the crushing pressure of failure weighing heavily on her shoulders. Desperate for a solution, the assistant suggests asking for an investment to cover the losses. But Phoebe's eyes flash with a sudden, sharp pride. She refuses immediately, knowing that the gossip would only intensify if she went looking for money now, especially given the rumors surrounding her. As the assistant leaves, Phoebe turns back to her computer, her eyes narrowing as she notices a scandalous notification popping up on the screen. A headline blares across the monitor in bold, cruel letters. The richest woman in Hongo was celebrating her birthday with her girlfriend. Phoebe's breath hitches as she stares at the accompanying photo, showing Selina in an intimate, blushing embrace with a woman named Ren. Her fingers tremble as she grips the mouse, her heart sinking into her stomach as she reads the sensationalized words over and over again. In a daze of jealousy and hurt, she pulls out her phone to capture the evidence of the betrayal staring her in the face. The screen of her phone displays the grainy image of the kiss, a digital scar that feels like it's burning right through her palm. She dials Selina's number immediately, and the woman answers with a frantic plea, begging Phoebe not to believe the lies spreading online. "You guys were so intimate, and you're telling me she isn't your girlfriend?" Phoebe shouts into the receiver, her voice cracking with the weight of her hidden feelings. Selina's voice is small and desperate on the other end, insisting that the woman in the photo is just a close friend she's known for years. Phoebe leans over her desk, her knuckles white as she grips the phone, her face flushed with a mixture of righteous anger and pure heartbreak. Selina continues to stammer out an explanation, claiming they had both drunk far too much and she had no idea the media was lurking in the shadows. Phoebe's eyes are cold and distant as she listens, her shadow stretching long across the office floor as the argument reaches its breaking point. "I don't know where my place is in your heart anymore," Phoebe whispers, her gaze fixed on the image of the woman she thought was hers alone. Phoebe's expression is one of pure agony as Selina delivers the final, crushing blow, calling her nothing more than family and a sister. Selina tries to deflect the tension, asking if Phoebe cares for the woman in the photo too, but the question only fuels the fire of Phoebe's rage. With a final, sharp movement, Phoebe pulls the phone away from her ear and cuts the connection, leaving only a deafening silence in the room. The roar of the engines fades as the massive jet touches down on the runway of Hull Airport, marking a return that feels more like a confrontation than a homecoming. Inside the plush, silent cabin, the air is thick with unspoken tension as the woman in red sits across from her companion, the distance between them feeling like a vast, unbridgeable chasm. She turns her gaze away, her expression a mask of cold indifference that barely hides the storm of melancholy brewing in her eyes. When her companion questions if she's truly ready for what comes next, she simply crosses her arms, her voice like ice as she insists she'll handle the situation herself. The scene shifts to the high-rise office where Selina sits at her desk, her back to the door as she senses the arrival of the very woman who has been haunting her thoughts. The woman in red catches Selina's eye, her gaze lingering with a depth of emotion that speaks of years of hidden longing and painful secrets. Her associate steps forward, holding up a set of car keys with a knowing smirk, clearly playing his part in clearing the room for what's to come. He asks Selina to fetch his phone from the car, a transparent excuse to leave the two women alone in the suffocating silence of the office. Left alone with the man for a moment, Selina's voice trembles slightly as she asks why they've bothered to come back at all. They stand on opposite sides of the room, the sunlight streaming through the windows and highlighting the painful uncertainty written across Selina's face. Her eyes flash with a mix of hurt and curiosity as she demands to know what kind of feelings the man truly thinks she has for Phoebe. He doesn't flinch, his gaze steady as he sits across from her, suggesting that the truth of her feelings is something she can no longer run from. Outside, the city begins to glow with the orange and purple hues of a setting sun, mirroring the fading hope and rising shadows in the room. Selina watches from her high vantage point, her silhouette a lonely figure against the glass as she looks down at the world below. Down on the street, the associate waits by the car, his form reflected in the glass as he prepares for their eventual departure. Standing alone on the vast pavement, the woman in red looks up at the window, a solitary figure whose presence feels both heavy and ethereal in the twilight. Suddenly, the tension in the office snaps as the woman in red returns, standing mere inches away from a startled and breathless Selina. In a moment of pure, unadulterated passion, she leans forward and captures Selina's lips in a desperate, fleeting kiss that tastes of 1,000 goodbyes. Selina's eyes fly open in shock, her breath hitching as the world around them seems to dissolve into a blur of heat and light. "I'm saying goodbye to you," the woman whispers against her lips, her voice breaking with an emotion she can no longer suppress. Tears begin to prick at Selina's eyes, her heart shattering at the sudden finality in the woman's voice as she stares back in disbelief. "Come back to Hall with me," the woman in red pleads, her hand reaching out to brush against Selina's cheek in a rare, heart-wrenching moment of vulnerability. Selina turns her head away, her face flushing a deep crimson as she pouts, trying to hide how much those words have affected her. A tender, knowing smile touches the woman's lips as she watches Selina struggle with the whirlwind of her own heart. Selina huffs, her cheeks puffed out in a mix of embarrassment and lingering frustration as she tries to process the confession she just heard. Without another word, the woman in red pulls her into a firm, protective embrace, her arms wrapping around Selina, as if she were the only thing keeping her grounded. They stand so close now, their breaths mingling in the quiet room, as they share a look of profound, soul-aching understanding. Selina finally finds her voice, her eyes searching the woman's face as she asks the one question that has been burning in her mind. What about her girlfriend? The woman in red closes her eyes for a moment, a bead of sweat tracing her temple as she realizes how deep the jealousy and misunderstanding have gone. She pulls back just enough to look Selina in the eye, explaining that she wants her to be the head director for the upcoming gala, regardless of her protests. Her hand moves to Selina's chin, tilting it upward with a gentle but firm touch that forces their gaze to lock in a moment of intense clarity. "If I ever had a girlfriend," she murmurs, her voice dropping to a husky, intimate tone, "it would be you. And only you." Selina's eyes widen, her heart hammering against her ribs as she asks the question that has been haunting her soul, why her? The woman in red leans in, her eyes softening with a tenderness that is almost painful to witness as she prepares to lay her heart bare. Selina's blush deepens until her entire face is a vibrant, beautiful pink, her breath coming in short gasps as the weight of the truth finally sinks in. In that moment, surrounded by the phantom scent of blossoms and the soft glow of the evening, they hold hands, finally standing together in a world of their own making. The grand stage is bathed in a golden, ethereal glow as the final preparations for the GMG 10th anniversary gala reach a fever pitch. Beneath the shimmering lights, the rehearsal continues with a group of performers moving in perfect synchronization, though the air is thick with a tension that has nothing to do with the choreography. Suddenly, a sharp gasp cuts through the music as Selina's vision begins to blur, her world spinning out of control. Her knees buckle and her body sways dangerously, a cold sweat breaking across her brow while Emma looks on in absolute horror. "Selina! What's going on?" Emma cries out, barely catching her friend as Selina's strength completely fails, and she collapses into Emma's arms. Her breath comes in shallow, ragged hitches as she fights to stay conscious, her eyes fluttering with a pained, distant look. Emma's voice is trembling with fear, reminding her that this isn't the first time she's passed out lately, but Selina only offers a weak, dismissive excuse about being tired from the rehearsal. Emma's golden eyes search Selina's face, filled with a desperate, unspoken plea for the truth. Selina tries to pull herself together, insisting she will see a doctor only after the anniversary event is over. But Emma isn't having it. "No, there's no way you're gonna pull through like this," Emma argues, her heart breaking as she watches the light fade from her friend's eyes. The scene shifts to the sterile, cold exterior of the hospital's outpatient department, where the weight of reality finally settles in. Emma stands by the car, her hands clenched at her sides as she waits for the verdict, demanding to know what the doctor said. Selina emerges, her face a mask of forced cheer, offering a sad, lingering smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Back at the venue, Selina stands under the stage lights once more, looking like a fragile doll about to break. She turns to Emma with a soft, haunting gaze, asking if she has any advice for the upcoming show. But the playful mood is a lie, a thin veil over the secret she's carrying as she leans in close to her friend. Emma's breath hitches as she looks down at the medical report in her hands, her eyes widening in pure shock. Selina's voice is a mere whisper as she reveals the devastating truth. The doctor diagnosed her with chronic chemical metal poisoning. The words hang in the air like a death sentence, and Selina looks down, her spirit crushed by the realization that her body is failing her. "Then you should start the treatment now," Emma urges, her voice cracking with the weight of her desperation. Selina looks at her with a profound, quiet sadness, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She explains that she can't take time off now, and more importantly, she can't let her sister find out and worry. Emma is left breathless, her heart racing as she asks what Selina could possibly want her to do in such a nightmare. Selina asks for a favor that feels like a betrayal. She wants Emma to lie to her sister, to tell her she's just away on a research trip for a new movie. It's a heavy burden to bear, but as Selina reaches out and takes her hand, Emma's resistance crumbles into a reluctant agreement. Half a month later, the day of the gala finally arrives, and the gates of Phoebe's estate stand tall against a clear blue sky. Inside, Phoebe is a vision of lethal elegance, her red sequin dress hugging her curves as she prepares to take the stage. Selina sits nearby, the exhaustion etched into every line of her face as she tells Phoebe she simply cannot accompany her today. Phoebe's eyes narrow, a flash of suspicion and worry crossing her perfectly made-up face. space. Selina remains seated, looking small and frail against Phoebe's towering, vibrant presence. In a moment of fleeting playfulness, Selina pokes Phoebe's cheek, trying to ease the tension with a smile that hides 1,000 pains. Outside, the atmosphere is electric as balloons soar into the sky above the grand gala site. A host stands on the massive stage, announcing a special performance that utilizes brand new technology created specifically for this anniversary. The audience is captivated, their faces lit with wonder as they prepare for something truly magnificent. The secret behind the magic is a fog screen art show, a cutting-edge display that turns the very air into a canvas. It creates an immersive, dreamlike atmosphere that leaves the crowd breathless and gasping in delight. Phoebe watches from the wings, her gaze fixed on the ethereal display of lights and shadows. Even the technical crew looks on with pride, knowing they are sending a truly unique gift to the world. Suddenly, Selina appears on stage, a microphone in hand as she stands before a backdrop of swirling galaxies. The audience erupts into cheers, shouting "magnificent" and "awesome" as the spectacle unfolds. Phoebe joins her, looking like a goddess of the night as she commands the attention of every soul in the building. Despite the poison coursing through her veins, Selina gives the performance of a lifetime, winking at the crowd and throwing a peace sign with a defiant, beautiful energy. Phoebe follows suit, blowing a kiss to the adoring fans, two sisters standing together in a moment of triumph that masks a looming tragedy. Phoebe looks pale, the clinical white of the hospital bed swallowing her whole as she clutches her phone to her ear. Her friend's voice crackles through the line, sharp with a worry that cuts through the sterile air of the ward. Phoebe forces a weak smile, her heart aching as she thanks her friend for hiding the truth of her failing health from the one person she wants to protect. "At least 2 weeks," she whispers, her eyes tracing the slow drip of the medicine that has become her fragile lifeline. The room feels cavernous and cold as she hangs up, a lone figure fighting a battle no one else is allowed to see. Meanwhile, in a sun-drenched office, the air is thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and unspoken agendas. The man leans back, a plume of smoke curling around his glasses as he reminisces about travels they haven't shared in years. Ren stares ahead, her sharp features masking the exhaustion of a woman whose life has become a series of endless, soul-crushing meetings. She mentions Selina, entirely unaware that the girl is currently tethered to a hospital bed instead of filming in the mountains. The man watches her like a predator, his voice smooth as silk as he questions the stability of the bond between them. He turns away, his silhouette framed against the window as he admits he no longer understands the woman standing before him. Ren remains silent, her gaze fixed on her laptop, a flicker of genuine doubt crossing her perfectly composed face. A heavy suitcase thuds against the floor as the man prepares to leave, stepping out of the shadows of his home. He pauses to look at an old photograph, his thumb brushing over the glass with a possessiveness that feels more like a threat than a memory. A chilling smirk plays on his lips as he checks his phone, confirming to his mysterious contact that everything is finally on track. Across the ocean, the bright, clear sky of the United States offers a fresh start that feels more like a carefully laid trap. They are greeted by a world of polished chrome and professional smiles, far away from the secrets left behind in the city. Inside the car, he leans closer to Ren, his voice dropping an octave as he points out a restaurant from their shared past. Ren looks at him in genuine surprise, her heart skipping a beat at the realization that he still remembers the smallest details of her life. "I remember everything," he murmurs, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that demands her total attention. Ren leans back against the leather seat, sending a quick, affectionate text to the girl she thinks is safe and sound. Back in the hospital, the rhythmic drip of the IV bag is the only heartbeat in the oppressive silence of the room. Phoebe looks like a ghost of herself, her strength drained by the grueling treatments that leave her feeling weak and hollow. Her friend leans in close, dropping a bombshell about a server crash that looks suspiciously like intentional sabotage. Panic flares in Phoebe's chest as she realizes someone is erasing the digital footprints of their lives. Suddenly, the phone on the bed begins to vibrate, a jarring sound in the heavy silence of the ward. Phoebe reaches for it with a shaky hand, her heart hammering against her ribs with a sudden, dark premonition. The screen illuminates a photo of a lavish dinner, plates of exquisite food set for an intimate party of two. Her breath hitches as she stares at the reflection in the polished surface of the image, her entire world tilting on its axis. Her friend watches her face fall, the confusion in her eyes turning into a sharp, stinging pity. There together, Phoebe whispers, the words tasting like ash in her mouth as the betrayal finally sinks in. The friend's eyes narrow, her suspicion confirming the nightmare that Phoebe was too afraid to face alone. Phoebe's expression shatters, the cold realization of her isolation hitting her harder than any physical pain. "I warned you," her friend says softly, the harsh truth hanging in the air like a death sentence. Phoebe closes her eyes, a single tear escaping as she realizes she has been played for a fool from the very beginning. The negotiations conclude with a triumphant air, the weight of the massive deal finally lifting from their shoulders as the group exits the building. Phoebe, radiant in her crimson blazer, offers a firm handshake, her voice smooth as silk as she wishes for a prosperous future together. As the business partners depart with polite smiles and waves, the real tension begins to simmer in the cool night air. Inside the sleek confines of the car, the silence is broken by a playful suggestion from Rennie to celebrate their hard-won victory. Phoebe's eyes sparkle with a hidden mischief in the rearview mirror as she asks exactly how he intends to celebrate. "It's been far too long since we had a vacation on our own," Rennie murmurs, the space between them in the backseat feeling dangerously small. His fingers twitch, hovering just inches away from a touch that could change the entire dynamic of their relationship. But while some celebrate, others are drowning in a sea of pain within the sterile white walls of the city hospital. Yuzeng looks down at the frail form of her friend before her heart breaking at the sight of such hollow suffering. "You've been receiving treatment for 2 weeks," she cries, her voice trembling with desperation. "Why aren't you getting any better?" The list of symptoms is a cruel litany: cramps, nausea, and fever, each one a blow to Selina's dwindling strength. Guilt washes over Yuzeng like a cold tide, her eyes filling with tears as she realizes she should have been here from the very beginning. Selina offers a weak, bittersweet smile, her face pale and glistening with a cold sweat. "Don't be sad," she whispers. "If you came more often, your sister would only become suspicious." Yuzeng's breath hitches as she mentions that her sister is currently miles away in the US, supposedly busy with business management. The realization that they are being watched or managed even from afar sends a sudden shiver of dread through her. Selina closes her eyes, the sheer effort of speaking leaving her exhausted and drained. Yuzeng watches her, a fierce protectiveness rising in her chest, knowing she cannot leave her friend to face this darkness alone. No matter the cost, she determines that she will be the one to stay by Selina's side. Back at the bustling airport, the destination boards flicker with a rhythmic click, signaling the return of the woman who holds all the power. Phoebe stands amidst the crowd, her expression unreadable as she declares that the States held nothing worth her time. Rennie watches her closely, a cup of coffee forgotten in his hand as he calls out her true motivation. "You just wanted to be back earlier to see her, didn't you?" he asks, his voice tinged with a sharp edge of jealousy. They move toward the boarding gate, the air thick with the unspoken names of those they left behind. Rennie's gaze darkens, a bitter thought crossing his mind as he wonders if that girl could truly be that important to someone as high class as Phoebe. Outside the terminal, Yuzeng and Selina wait, the cool breeze tossing their hair as they count down the minutes until the flight arrives. Yuzeng looks on in total confusion, her mind spinning with questions she's too afraid to ask out loud. Selina stands tall, her heart racing with an anticipation that makes her skin tingle despite her weakness. As the sleek black car pulls up to the curb, the world seems to slow down into a blur of motion. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the noise, calling Selina's name with a hunger that cannot be hidden. Before she can even react, Phoebe has swept her up in a crushing embrace, lifting her off the ground as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. Rennie stands back, his arms crossed and his brow furrowed in a silent, burning resentment as he watches the display of affection. Selina's face flushes a deep, beautiful pink, her breath trapped in her lungs as she feels the heat of Phoebe's body against her own. Phoebe leans in close, her eyes darkening with an intensity that makes Selina's knees weak. "Don't you dare tell me you didn't miss me," she whispers against her ear. Selina can barely find her voice, her heart thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I missed you too," she finally admits, her confession lost in the folds of Phoebe's expensive jacket. The moment is broken as Phoebe takes charge, her voice commanding as she begins barking orders for the ride home. Her gaze is sharp, a silent warning to anyone who might try to interfere with her plans for the evening. Yuzeng can only offer a strained, awkward smile, feeling like an intruder in a much deeper, more dangerous drama. Without another word, Phoebe drags Selina toward her car, her possessiveness on full display for everyone at the terminal to see. Settling into the driver's seat, Phoebe doesn't spare a backward glance, dismissal in her eyes as she prepares to reclaim exactly what belongs to her. Phoebe's eyes soften as she looks at her friend, noting the exhaustion etched into her features and the way her shoulders slump with fatigue. Selina sighs, her voice barely a whisper as she confesses that her strength is failing her, her body feeling heavier with every passing hour. To cheer her up, Phoebe presents a beautifully wrapped box, a small token of her affection intended to bring a smile to those tired lips. Selina's eyes sparkle with a mixture of surprise and genuine warmth as she clutches the gift to her chest, overwhelmed by the gesture. Phoebe leans in, her voice thick with emotion as she promises to always provide the very best for her, her gaze lingering just a second too long. The air between them thickens, their faces drawn together by an invisible thread until they can feel each other's warm breath against their skin. With a sudden, heart-stopping movement, they tumble onto the plush carpet, the world spinning around them in a blur of fabric and heat. Their hearts race in a frantic, uneven rhythm, the tension between them reaching a breaking point as they stare into each other's eyes, searching for answers. For a fleeting, breathless second, time stands still as their lips almost meet in a long-awaited embrace that threatens to change everything. The following morning, silence fills the room as Phoebe stands frozen, her gaze fixed on the glowing screen of a forgotten phone left on the table. Her heart drops into her stomach as she reads the chilling notification, a medical reminder about dialysis and life-saving medication that Selina never mentioned. Panic surges through her veins, sending her sprinting across the room in a desperate search for the truth hidden within the shadows of the house. Her worst fears are confirmed when she flings open a bag, revealing a stash of heavy-duty pills and medical supplies tucked away where no one was meant to find them. Selina stands trembling in the doorway, her fingers white-knuckled around her phone as the weight of her secret finally crushes the air from her lungs. Phoebe holds up the evidence, her voice trembling with a mixture of betrayal and soul-deep terror as she confronts the woman she loves. "Why are you taking this? Why didn't you tell me you were on dialysis?" She cries out, her eyes searching for a lie she can no longer believe. Selina tries to find the words to explain, but Phoebe reaches out, desperately grasping her hands as if she could physically hold her back from the brink of death. Phoebe's eyes narrow, a sharp edge of suspicion cutting through her grief as she demands to know if Rennie was part of this elaborate deception. Selina can only look away, her guilty silence speaking volumes about the pact they made to keep Phoebe in the dark. Without another word, Selina turns and bolts, her footsteps echoing through the hallway in a frantic, panicked escape from the truth. Phoebe is hot on her heels, her heart hammering against her ribs as she refuses to let this conversation end in a flight of cowardice. The tires screech against the pavement as Selina throws herself into the driver's seat, her movements jerky and desperate as she fumbles with the keys. Phoebe barely manages to scramble into the passenger seat before the engine roars to life, the car lurching forward into the blinding glare of the afternoon sun. The vehicle tears down the street, a black blur of speed and desperation weaving recklessly through the city traffic as the tension inside the cabin reaches a fever pitch. "Stop the car! You're going to kill us both if you don't slow down!" Phoebe screams, clutching the door handle for dear life. The car swerves violently into a driveway, the smell of burnt rubber hanging heavy in the air as the world finally stops spinning. They come to a jarring halt in front of a grand entrance, the silence that follows vibrating with the echoes of their unspoken fury. A girl with short, dark hair steps out of the house, her face a mask of confusion as she asks what could possibly have brought them here in such a state. Before she can even finish her sentence, Phoebe's hand flies out, the sound of a sharp slap echoing through the quiet courtyard like a gunshot. Phoebe's eyes burn with a cold, terrifying fire as she looks down at the girl she once trusted with her life. "How dare you play these crappy tricks on me? How dare you hide her illness?" She hisses, her voice cracking under the pressure of her rage. Tears begin to stream down her face as she asks if they were simply planning to wait until Selina was in a coffin before telling her the truth. The short-haired girl can only stare back in stunned silence, the sting on her cheek nothing compared to the raw agony radiating from Phoebe. Phoebe's voice rises to a heartbroken scream, demanding to know why they would ever agree to keep such a devastating secret from her. Selina stands by, her own face pale and haunted as she watches the woman she wanted to protect fall apart before her eyes. Phoebe finally collapses inward, the weight of the world breaking her as she weeps for the trust that has been shattered beyond repair. She clutches her shirt over her heart, her knuckles white as she struggles to draw breath through the suffocating waves of grief. Covered in a shroud of poor misery, she hides her face in her hands, the sound of her broken sobs the only thing filling the heavy, oppressive silence. Rennie finally speaks, her own voice trembling with unshed tears as she explains that she only wanted to spare Phoebe the pain of watching someone else she loved fade away. Phoebe and her companion carefully support the weakened Selina as they navigate the hallway, their faces etched with concern for her fragile state. Sitting side by side on the velvet cushions, Phoebe's eyes never leave Selina, her heart heavy with the weight of the illness they've both been trying to ignore. Selina reaches out, her slender fingers trembling as she clutches her friend's hand, a silent plea for understanding passing between them. A single, bitter tear escapes Selina's closed eyes, betraying the stoic mask she tries so desperately to wear in front of the others. Shadows of the past loom over her memories of friends who were once close, now nothing more than fading silhouettes in the mist of her mind. She bows her head, the agony of being left behind by those she loved most finally breaking through defenses as she sobs quietly. Phoebe leans in, her gaze softening with a profound, aching empathy that words could never truly capture. Pulling her into a warm embrace, Phoebe whispers that even those who have passed are still watching over her from the heavens, blessing her every step. The morning sun hits the imposing glass walls of the medical center, where the world's most renowned experts in toxicology await their arrival. Selina stands before the reception, her posture rigid as she prepares herself for the clinical scrutiny she's been avoiding for weeks. With a hesitant tug at her sleeve, she tries to retreat, insisting she's perfectly fine despite the deathly paleness of her skin. Phoebe remains firm, her voice a gentle but unyielding command as she tells Selina to be a good girl and cooperate for once. A faint blush creeps up Phoebe's neck, her own anxiety mirroring the tension radiating from the woman beside her. Relenting at last, Selina offers a soft, defeated sigh, her blue eyes shimmering with a mix of fear and hidden gratitude. The sharp sting of the needle marks the beginning of the examination as the doctor carefully draws a blood sample from Selina's arm. Behind the scenes, the medical team works tirelessly, analyzing the samples in a race against the clock to find a cure. The lead physician delivers the initial findings, questioning if the long hours at the film studio were truly the source of the chronic poisoning. Selina confirms the doctor's suspicions, her mind racing back to the newly built sets where she spent so many sleepless nights under the hot lights. But as the doctor compares the new results with the old reports, her expression turns grimly professional, signaling a darker truth. "What do you mean?" Selina asks, her breath hitching as a cold shiver of dread runs down her spine. The doctor slides the test reports across the desk, revealing the presence of a rare, sinister pathogen in her bloodstream that has no business being on a film set. The realization that this wasn't an accident, but something chronic and targeted leaves Selina gasping for air. The expert points out that a poison requires long-term, frequent contact, suggesting the source is much closer to her daily life than they ever imagined. Back at the apartment, the air is thick with suspicion as the two women realize the danger might be hidden in their very sanctuary. Phoebe's voice is laced with a protective ferocity as she offers to find Selina a new, safe place to live immediately. "I'll have my assistant inspect the house," Selina murmurs, her mind already spinning with the faces of everyone who has access to her private life. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the insistent vibration of a phone, the name Amy flashing across the screen like a warning. Selina stands by the window, her silhouette bathed in the fading light as she delivers a series of urgent, whispered instructions. She walks through the quiet halls of the estate, her movements slow and deliberate as she tries to maintain her crumbling composure. On the other end of the line, Amy's eyes widen in shock at the gravity of Selina's request, her breath coming in short gasps. "The experts say the problem might be my living environment," Selina explains, her voice trembling with a vulnerability she rarely shows to the world. Amy's mind begins to piece together the terrifying puzzle, realizing that someone has been poisoning her boss from within her own inner circle. Clad in a simple robe, Selina looks smaller and more fragile than ever, a stark contrast to the glamorous persona she projects to her fans. A spark of realization flares in Amy's eyes as she prepares to uncover the traitor lurking in the shadows of the household. "Go to my home immediately," Selina commands, "and take everything to be tested for poison." Just then, Phoebe appears in the doorway, her presence a grounding force in the midst of the escalating chaos. Selina turns to her friend, the weight of the world visible in her wary, haunted eyes as she tries to find a reason to keep fighting. In the quiet of the evening garden, Phoebe invites her to a charity dinner, hoping to distract her from the invisible enemy that has tainted her life. With a final decisive click, Selina ends the call, cutting off her connection to the outside world for just a moment of peace. For the first time in days, a genuine, albeit tired, smile touches Selina's lips as they plan to pick out gowns for the upcoming gala. The lights of the boutique shimmered, casting an elegant glow over the rows of designer gowns. "Miss Helen, are you here to pick a dress for the charity dinner?" the clerk asked with a polite smile. Phoebe paused, her breath catching as the clerk mentioned that using Ren was already inside. The staff member gestured toward the private fitting area where the mystery guest awaited. Suddenly, the curtain pulled back to reveal Yuzing, looking sharp and calculating in her white suit. "Well, you certainly know your way around my favorite brand," Phoebe noted, her eyes narrowing slightly. Yuzing gestured to a rack of stunning gowns she had already hand-selected. "Selina, pick whatever you like," Phoebe encouraged, though the tension in the room was thick. Selina looked at the high-fashion labels, feeling a sudden wave of insecurity. "I don't think these styles suit me," she murmured, forcing a small, awkward smile. Phoebe didn't push, stepping into the fitting room to transform into something more formidable. Selina watched the curtain close, feeling like a stranger in this world of glitz and hidden daggers. Moments later, Phoebe emerged, looking like a dream in a purple strapless gown adorned with delicate butterflies. "My choice is never wrong," Yuzing purred, her eyes scanning Phoebe with intense focus. Selina could only manage a weak compliment, her heart heavy with unspoken worries. Phoebe looked at her reflection, the weight of the upcoming event settling on her shoulders. "I'll take both," she decided firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. The scene shifts as the days bleed into the night of the grand auction. Inside the car, Phoebe leaned in close to Selina, the small space crackling with unspoken emotions. "You're so stubborn, but you look gorgeous tonight," Phoebe whispered, her gaze lingering on Selina's face. They arrived at the Grand Exhibition Center, a palace of wealth and high-stakes drama. Stepping onto the red carpet, they prepared to face the lions of high society. "If you like anything, just tell me," Phoebe promised as they browsed the luxury lots. Selina's heart nearly stopped when her eyes landed on a specific display. Resting inside a velvet-lined box was a stunning Austrian pink crystal watch. "Does something catch your eye?" Yuzing asked, appearing like a ghost at their side. Her eyes glinted behind her glasses, sensing a weakness she could exploit. "If I want the most expensive lot, I need the richest billionaire to bid for me," Yuzing teased, her smile sharp. Phoebe watched her rival closely, her protective instincts flaring up. The group moved toward the main hall as the auction was called to order. The auctioneer took the stage, her voice booming through the microphone. Paddles began to rise as the first few items were sold off in a blur of numbers. Then, the highlight of the night appeared on the giant screen, the Nassau watch. Yuzing's expression turned predatory as she prepared her move. Selina looked on in disbelief, recognizing the piece as a ghost from her own past. Without hesitation, Yuzing raised her paddle, her eyes locked on the prize as she placed a massive bid. The auctioneer's voice rings through the hall, announcing Lady Number 26 winning bid as Phoebe sits with a cool, collected expression. But the competition is fierce, and another woman across the room raises her paddle, determined to challenge Phoebe for the prize. Not one to be outdone, Phoebe raises her sign again with a sharp, unwavering gaze, proving she will stop at nothing to get what she wants. Selina's heart flutters, her face flushing a deep, beautiful crimson as she whispers that Phoebe didn't have to go so far just for a watch. Phoebe just smiles softly, her eyes lingering on the woman beside her, making it clear that no price is too high for Selina's happiness. The auctioneer gestures toward a grand antique clock, signaling the final and most prestigious lot of the entire gala. With a confident flick of her wrist, Phoebe raises her paddle one last time, cementing her status as the most dominant force in the room. Later, the room erupts in polite whispers as the ladies gather, glasses of rich red wine in hand to celebrate the evening's success. Phoebe lifts her glass, her voice smooth as silk as she dismisses her massive contribution as a mere modest effort for the public welfare. "I bid on the most expensive lot because it was the one you wanted," she says, turning her intense focus back to a stunned Selina. Selina's breath hitches, her heart hammering against her ribs as she realizes that Phoebe has never once denied her a single thing her heart desired. Sensing Selina's growing overwhelm, Phoebe gently takes her hand and leads her away from the prying eyes of the high society crowd. Back at the estate, the moon hangs high over the balcony where Selina stands alone, her mind racing with a million conflicting thoughts. She's on the phone with a trusted contact, her voice trembling as she asks if there is any update on the secret investigation. Her friend's voice is grim over the line, confirming the terrifying truth. There is indeed toxic metal hidden inside the cigarettes. Selina's eyes widen in sheer horror as the reality sinks in. She was being slowly, methodically poisoned by someone she once called a friend. She clutches the gold cigarette box in her hand, the evidence of a cold-blooded betrayal shimmering mockingly under the moonlight. Memories of the package arriving at the filming site flood back. A gift that was actually a death sentence in disguise. "I never expected her to be so evil," Selina whispers into the phone, her heart breaking for the innocence she can never reclaim. Images of her past and the faces of those she trusted flicker through her mind, now all tainted by the shadow of Yu Zhengren's malice. Her friend urges her to stay vigilant, the weight of this deadly secret pressing down on them both. Selina leans heavily against the cold stone railing, the night air doing nothing to soothe the fire of betrayal burning in her chest. Phoebe approaches her on the balcony, her presence a mixture of comfort and complication as she asks who is on the other end of the line. Selina turns to face her, her blue eyes searching Phoebe's face for a truth she is almost terrified to uncover. The tension between them is thick enough to choke on as Selina finally asks the question that has been haunting her soul. She points out how intimately Phoebe knows the other woman, her hobbies, her tastes, and every dark corner of her past. Phoebe sighs, looking out at the moon as she explains that they share a bond forged in the fires of mutual, agonizing loss. Selina's gaze remains unwavering, her voice low and dangerous as she demands to know the true depth of Phoebe's feelings. "Do you actually know she loves you?" Selina asks, her voice cracking under the weight of her jealousy. Selina's eyes flutter shut for a moment, the pain of the situation finally becoming too much to bear in silence. "Maybe we aren't right for each other," she breathes, the words feeling like a physical blow to the air between them. Phoebe's composure finally shatters, and she grabs Selina's shoulders, her voice desperate as she asks why she would say something so heart-wrenching. "How can you be my woman if you can't handle this tiny bit of pressure?" Phoebe growls, her eyes darkening with a possessive frustration. Selina flinches under the intensity of the grip, her body trembling as she feels the walls of their relationship closing in on her. She looks up at Phoebe, her eyes filled with a devastating mixture of love and agonizing doubt. "Why do I have to choose?" Phoebe asks, her own heart breaking as she tries to hold onto two different worlds at once. Tears begin to well up in Selina's eyes, shimmering like diamonds before they finally spill over her cheeks. Without another word, she turns her back on her soulmate and begins to walk away into the cold darkness of the house. Every step feels like a mile as she sobs, the weight of the betrayal and the impossible choice crushing her spirit. Left alone on the balcony, Phoebe bows her head in the moonlight, a single tear falling as she realizes that in trying to keep everyone, she may have just lost the only one who truly mattered. The sun hung low over the sprawling estate, casting long, mocking shadows across the walls of Phoebe's home. Inside, the air felt heavy, thick with a premonition that made Phoebe's chest tighten as she sat alone on the edge of her bed, her spirit flagging under the weight of an unspoken goodbye. Dragging her feet, she found herself standing before the heavy wood of Selina's bedroom door, the silence from within louder than any scream. She raised a trembling hand, the sound of her knuckles meeting the wood knock, knock, knock echoing hollowly through the empty hallway. When no answer came, she pushed the door open, only to find a room stripped of its soul, the bed knee made with nothing but a single, devastating white envelope left behind. Phoebe's breath hitched as she unfolded the paper, her eyes blurring as she read the words. "When you can't decide between two people that you love, I think you should choose the latter one. It seems like you were never in love with me." The paper crinkled in her shaking hand as she realized Selina had left more than just a note. She had left behind the very bracelet that once symbolized their bond. Phoebe gripped the jewelry so hard her knuckles turned white, the cold metal biting into her palm as the reality of the abandonment began to sink in. A sob finally broke through her composure, and she collapsed, clutching the letter and the bangle to her heart as hot, bitter tears finally spilled over. Desperation took hold as she sprinted outside, her phone pressed to her ear as she frantically called everyone, begging for a lead on where Selina could have gone. On the other end of the line, Amy's face went pale, her eyes widening in genuine shock as she heard the news that Selina had vanished without a trace. Phoebe slumped into back of her car, the luxury of the interior feeling like a cage as she pleaded into the phone for anyone, to tell her where her love had fled. The car sped past the towering GMG hotel, a place that used to hum with their shared ambitions, now just another landmark of her failure. Even as she arrived at the office, the world seemed to move in slow motion, the bustling city streets a stark contrast to the void growing inside her. She didn't even try to pretend to work, burying her face in her hands at her desk, her mind a chaotic loop of Selina's final words. "Chairman, it's time for the meeting," her assistant whispered, peeking through the door, but Phoebe couldn't even find the strength to look up. Thousands of miles away, a massive plane touched down on the tarmac of Geneva International Airport, the engines roar, signaling the start of a total disappearance. Inside the cabin, Selina sat staring out the window, her expression unreadable as she prepared to step into a world where Phoebe didn't exist. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her lap, Amy's name flashing on the screen, a bridge to the life she was trying so hard to burn down. Stepping off the plane, Selina finally answered, her voice cold and distant as she walked through the terminal. "Are you okay?" Amy asked, her voice trembling with worry as she paced her own room. Selina's eyes welled up with unshed tears, the pain of her decision etched into every line of her face, but she forced her heart to remain made of stone. Amy looked down, her heart breaking for her friend, knowing that no matter how far Selina ran, she was carrying the weight of a shattered heart. Selina ignored the mountain of missed calls on her screen, her thumb hovering over the notifications before she resolutely turned away. She stepped into a waiting car, the door clicking shut like a final seal on her past life. With a final, decisive movement, she tapped the end call button, severing the last thread connecting her to the woman she left behind. 3 weeks bled into a blur of gray skies and towering glass skyscrapers. In the heart of the city, Phoebe remained a ghost of her former self, sitting listlessly in her office while the world continued to turn without her. A woman sat across from her, a cigarette dangling from her fingers, her eyes sharp and predatory as she watched Phoebe wither. "It's been 3 weeks, the woman remarked, blowing a plume of smoke into the air, and still not a trace of her. She leaned forward with a sickeningly sweet smile, her voice a low purr as she asked, "But it seems like you chose me. Did you?" Phoebe peered through the gaps of her fingers, her eyes bloodshot and filled with a loathing that was directed as much at herself as it was at the woman in front of her. The woman reached out, her hand sliding over Phoebe's skin in a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like a violation. With a sudden burst of energy, Phoebe smacked the hand away, her voice cracking as she snarled, "I want to be alone for a while." Left in the silence, the memories began to haunt her the way they used to laugh together, popping champagne to celebrate victories that now felt meaningless. She could still hear Selina's voice on the microphone, vibrant and full of life, a light that Phoebe had managed to extinguish. She remembered the way they had once lain together, the tension and chemistry between them so thick it was almost tangible, a moment of pure connection that was now nothing but a ghost. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the world, Selina wandered through a museum, a camera slung around her neck as she tried to fill the emptiness with art and history. She stood before a vibrant painting, her profile sharp and lonely against the white walls of the gallery. Seeking solace in nature, she climbed to a high tourist site, looking out over a sea of misty, green mountains that stretched toward the horizon. She raised her camera, focusing the lens on the breathtaking landscape, trying to capture a beauty that she could no longer feel. But the travel was a mask for a darker reality as the scene shifted to the sterile, white walls of a hospital. Selina sat on the edge of a clinical bed, a thin ivy line snaking from her arm, her strength finally failing her in the wake of her emotional exile. As night fell over the city, the lights of the buildings twinkling like distant, uncaring stars, Selina sat hunched over a laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating her pale, tired face. Her fingers traced the image on her desk, a photo of her and Phoebe in happier times, a reminder of the love she had sacrificed, and the woman she missed with every dying breath. Phoebe sits alone in the dim light of her room, her silhouette a picture of absolute desolation as she clutches a bottle of pills, her eyes hollow with a despair that seems to swallow the very air around her. Her trembling fingers fumble with the cap of a small container, the frantic clicking of plastic against plastic the only sound in a house that feels far too empty. Overwhelmed by a sudden, violent wave of grief, she covers her mouth to stifle a sob, her vision blurring as the crushing weight of her loneliness finally becomes too much to bear. The dam finally breaks and she collapses onto the table, her body racking with silent, agonizing tears while the scattered remnants of her life lie forgotten around her. Suddenly, the harsh vibration of her phone cuts through the suffocating silence, and her hand darts out to grab it, a flicker of raw, desperate hope igniting in tear-stained eyes. She stares at the glowing screen with a sharp, predatory focus, her previous weakness vanishing in an instant as she prepares to hunt down the only woman who gives her life meaning. Outside, a cold, uncaring moon hangs suspended in the velvet sky, casting long skeletal shadows over the world as if anticipating the storm Phoebe is about to unleash. The scene shifts to the towering glass and steel of Wuyu City, where the sunrise does little to warm the icy resolve hardening in Phoebe's chest. She strides through the bustling terminal like a goddess of vengeance, her vibrant red dress flowing behind her as she cuts a path through the morning crowd. She corners her assistant, Amy, in the lobby, her presence so overwhelming that the younger woman nearly drops her files in sheer terror. "Amy, you know exactly why I'm here," Phoebe whispers, her voice a low, dangerous purr that sends a shiver of pure dread down the assistant's spine. Amy can barely meet her gaze, stammering out that Selina has been calling every day to say she's fine, but has strictly forbidden anyone from knowing her location. Phoebe doesn't waste another second on words. She reaches out and snatches Amy's phone, her eyes narrowing as she prepares to bypass every boundary in her way. She gestures sharply to her tech expert, her face a mask of cold efficiency as she commands him to start the trace. On the screen, a mocking message from Selina appears, claiming she is simply admiring the mountain scenery and begging them not to worry. Amy watches the exchange with wide, fearful eyes, realizing that Phoebe has completely crossed the line into a possessive obsession. Phoebe stands with her arms crossed, the silence in the room becoming heavy and suffocating as she waits for the digital net to close. The technician points triumphantly at the monitor, announcing that he has successfully pinned down the IP address of the very last message sent. Very good, Phoebe says, her voice dripping with a chilling satisfaction as she orders them to continue monitoring every single ping. She turns her back on Amy, informing her with a cold finality that she is leaving for the airport, and that a bodyguard will stay behind to ensure no more secrets are kept. As she walks out of the office, the sheer force of her will seems to vibrate in the air, leaving Amy shaking and helpless in her wake. Hours later, the glowing sign of Geneva Airport looms in the night, marking the end of one journey and the beginning of a much more dangerous one. Phoebe is met on the tarmac by a contact who can barely hide her shock at how quickly the Harris managed to track them down. "Do you know the exact place I sent you?" Phoebe demands, her voice tight with an urgency that borders on madness. The woman nods, leading Phoebe toward a sleek, white luxury vehicle that waits to whisk them toward the hidden heart of the countryside. Far from the prying eyes of the city, a grand, sun-drenched villa stands nestled among the trees, a silent fortress of peace that is about to be invaded. Inside the quiet sanctuary, Selina sits at her laptop, her mind finally beginning to find the calm she so desperately sought. She pauses, a sudden, inexplicable chill running down her spine as she looks toward the door, her blue eyes wide with a dawning sense of alarm. A pale hand reaches for the handle, turning it with a slow, agonizing deliberation that makes the very floorboards seem to hold their breath. Selina's heart hammers against her ribs as the door swings wide, her face turning deathly pale when she sees Phoebe standing there, looking like a beautiful, vengeful ghost. Before Selina can even stand, Phoebe is upon her, her arms locking around her in a grip that is as much a rescue as it is a prison. "I won't let you go, because you're mine." Phoebe growls against her neck, her voice thick with a raw, possessive passion that leaves Selina breathless. They stand locked together in the middle of the room, the air between them electric with months of unsaid words and hidden longing. Phoebe pulls back just enough to gesture toward a framed photo on the desk, her eyes dancing with a wicked, triumphant light. Selina's face erupts in a brilliant, telltale blush, her eyes darting away as she tries to stutter out a pathetic excuse that it's nothing at all. Phoebe leans in even closer, her lips ghosting over Selina's ear as she teases her for her obvious lie, her gaze never leaving the other woman's trembling mouth. She picks up the picture, a soft, knowing smile playing on her lips as she gazes at the image of their shared past, her heart vowing that Selina will never escape her again. Selina stands frozen behind the chair, her expression a mask of pure bewilderment as she stares at the glowing screen. Phoebe doesn't even look up, her fingers dancing across the laptop keys with a terrifying level of calm, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. Selina slowly approaches, her voice trembling with disbelief as she asks how Phoebe even found her. Though she quickly realizes that for the wealthy, no one is ever truly hidden. Phoebe finally turns, her eyes gleaming with a possessive pride as she waits for the news to sink in. On the screen, a formal press release displays Selina's portrait, announcing to the world that she has been officially appointed as the artistic director of the entire GMG group. Selina's heart hammers against her ribs as she reads the words, realizing that the media has already been informed, and there is no turning back. "How could you make such an announcement? I haven't even agreed to anything yet." Selina gasps, her face flushing a deep crimson. Phoebe's gaze remains unyielding, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous purr as she explains that she simply won't allow Selina to leave her side ever again. Pouting with a mix of fury and helplessness, Selina crosses her arms and huffs that Phoebe is being far too overbearing. But Phoebe only draws closer, her breath warm against Selina's skin as she whispers that escaping her control is now an impossibility. The scene shifts to the quiet luxury of a private jet, where the two women are lying together in a plush bed high above the clouds. Selina's eyes are wide and shimmering with a strange, fluttering heat as she feels the weight of Phoebe's constant, heavy gaze upon her. Feeling exposed under that intense scrutiny, Selina pulls the silken covers up to her chin, trying to hide her burning cheeks. Phoebe props herself up, her short hair falling over her brow as she whispers that she simply wants to let her more. Selina pulls the blanket tighter, blushing as she asks if she hasn't seen enough, only for Phoebe to reply that it will never be enough. A month passes in a blur of success, but beneath the surface, shadows are beginning to stir on a sun-drenched golf course. Phoebe's brother grips his club with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes narrowing as he complains that Selina has his sister completely under her thumb. His companion, a man with sharp features and a calculating gaze, watches the flight of the ball in silence as they discuss the shifting power dynamics. The red-haired man adjusts his glasses, his expression unreadable as he admits that Selina's capabilities are becoming impossible to deny. A dark, twisted smile spreads across the brother's face as he vows to reclaim the power and position that was always meant to be his. Meanwhile, the headlines are screaming with the news of GMG's latest monumental success. News anchors report on the sensation caused by the folk art exhibition, cementing Selina's reputation as a visionary in the industry. Every newspaper is filled with reports of record-breaking numbers and the brilliant touch of the new artistic director. Back in the boardroom, the air is thick with tension as Phoebe showcases the incredible stir their group has caused locally. The board members sit in stunned silence, unable to deny the evidence of the triumph displayed before them. With a sharp, authoritative glint in her eyes, Phoebe officially requests that Selina Shan be given a seat on the board of directors. A ripple of dissent moves through the room as a rival board member twists her face into a bitter, jealous sneer, questioning if she is truly qualified. Phoebe's gaze snaps toward her, her expression hardening into a mask of cold, professional steel. An older executive leans forward, grumbling that a single short-term success doesn't prove Selina can bring lasting benefits to the group. Phoebe challenges them directly, her voice echoing through the hall as she asks if a global sensation would finally be enough to satisfy them. The older man erupts into a frantic, sweating protest, his face flushing with anger as he argues against the bold proposal. Later, the quiet peace of Phoebe's mansion offers a brief respite from the corporate warfare. Selina stands on the grand staircase, her posture defensive as she looks down at Phoebe, sensing that another grand gesture is coming. Phoebe looks up, her eyes soft yet intense as she mentions that she visited a villa on the mountaintop and wants to buy it for her. Selina points a finger in shock, her voice rising with a mix of fear and pride as she asks if Phoebe is trying to kick her out. "Why are you buying me these things?" Selina cries, turning her back as she struggles with the weight of such overwhelming generosity. Phoebe reaches out, her hand hovering just inches from Selina's back, her heart aching at the distance between them. She tries to explain that these aren't just things, but a gift for her lover that isn't as complicated as she thinks. Selina turns back, her eyes burning with a sudden, fierce determination as she reveals she has already contacted museums around the world for a global exhibition. Caught off guard by Selina's brilliance and sudden warmth, Phoebe finds herself pulled into a tight, emotional embrace. Selina freezes as she spots Yuhu Helen, wondering why on earth he's shown up now. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out, making Selina's heart skip a beat in surprise. She quickly masks her nerves, explaining she just arrived early for her evening plans. "Why don't we have a coffee?" the woman suggests, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as Selina reluctantly agrees. The atmosphere in the cafe is thick with unspoken tension as they settle into their seats. The woman leans in, probing about the mysterious illness that sent Selina seeking treatment abroad. Selina takes a slow sip of her drink, blaming a simple allergy at a filming site for her sudden departure. With a knowing smirk, the woman reminds her that the entire group is counting on her success. Selina meets her gaze firmly, declaring her absolute devotion to her role as Phoebe's artistic director. But the woman's expression shifts as she reveals the board's refusal to let Selina join their ranks. Shock washes over Selina. She hadn't even known Phoebe had proposed such a thing. She clarifies that her only interest is supporting Phoebe, not climbing the corporate ladder. A sudden ringtone cuts through the heavy silence, offering a much-needed distraction. Checking her screen, Selina announces her friends have arrived and she must make a quick exit. As she walks away, she can feel the woman's calculating eyes boring into her back. A final sharp question stops her. "You won't hurt her, right?" Selina turns, her voice cold and certain as she denies any intent to cause Phoebe pain. The woman watches in silence, her true thoughts hidden behind the glint of her glasses. 1 month later, the grand press conference for GMG begins under a flurry of camera flashes. A curious reporter steps forward, eager to know which masterpieces will be featured in the new exhibition. Phoebe takes the lead, proudly introducing Selina as the visionary behind the entire event. She commands the room with effortless grace, her presence demanding everyone's attention. Selina explains the unprecedented collaboration with world-famous museums, promising a truly global experience. When asked what sets this show apart, she smiles, knowing they've achieved something extraordinary. The crowd erupts in excitement, completely won over by their ambitious vision. The GMG Hotel's art gallery is finally open, a testament to their hard work and chemistry. Visitors wander through the halls, breathless as they admire the stunning collections on display. Walking side by side, the two women soak in the success of their most triumphant exhibition yet. Praise pours in from all sides, and Phoebe glows with pride at the global fame they've secured. Phoebe's eyes soften as she looks at the woman who made all of this possible. Once they retreat to the privacy of the office, the professional mask finally begins to slip. Phoebe grasps Selina's hands, thanking her for the brilliant ideas she cultivated while in Switzerland. The air between them crackles with heat as they share a quiet, intimate moment of celebration. Phoebe leans closer, her voice dropping to a whisper as she mentions one final task. "I need you to join the board," she insists, leaving Selina stunned by the renewed request. Their faces are inches apart, Phoebe explaining that she needs a loyal vote to fight off her rivals. Selina hesitates, her mind racing back to the warnings she received earlier. Finally, she agrees to the demand, prompting a playful, celebratory squeeze from a delighted Phoebe. Phoebe stands at the head of the long boardroom table, her posture radiating an unbreakable confidence as she formally proposes that Selina be allowed to join the board of directors. Her sharp, calculating eyes scan the room, searching for any hint of defiance among the elite members of the company. To her surprise, a younger board member speaks up with a pleasant smile, noting that the recent exhibition was a global success that proves Selina's immense capabilities beyond any doubt. An older executive, adjusting his glasses, nods in agreement and admits that the board could certainly use the influx of young, creative new blood to stay ahead of the competition. Phoebe allows a faint, victorious smirk to grace her lips as she clasps her hands together, declaring that she is pleased they have finally reached a unanimous agreement. With the decision finalized, she turns her gaze toward the door and calls out for Selina to enter. Selina steps into the room, her heart racing beneath her professional attire as she finally crosses the threshold into the company's inner circle. She offers a graceful bow to the gathered directors, telling them it is her absolute honor to join them, and that she is eager to learn from their collective experience. The senior members offer a chorus of polite welcomes, though their eyes remain unreadable as they applaud their newest colleague. However, the atmosphere of cooperation vanishes the moment the doors are sealed, shifting to a private office where the shadows seem to grow longer. A woman with sharp glasses narrows her eyes in frustration, admitting to her partner that they have severely underestimated Selina's ambition. Her companion, his face twisted with a visible vein of anger, growls that they must hasten their secret plans immediately before they lose any more ground. He warns that if they don't act now, their faction will be swallowed up, and they will lose the power to ever reclaim the chairmanship. The woman's expression turns wicked as she suggests they find a definitive way to force Selina out, ensuring she understands exactly how difficult it is to survive on this board. Leaning in with a cold, predatory smile, the man decides that the upcoming New Year dinner will be the perfect stage for their trap. Far away from the cold corporate schemes, the GMG Hot Spring Resort sits nestled in the quiet evening, its lights reflecting off the tranquil water. Inside the private bath, the air is thick with steam and a heavy, undeniable chemistry as Phoebe and Selina soak in the mineral-rich waters. Selina looks over at her companion, her face flushed from the heat, and asks with a hint of awe exactly how many properties Phoebe actually owns. Phoebe lets out a soft, amused breath, her skin glistening under the soft light as she explains that these resorts are simply a strategic part of their tourism business line. Selina can't help but huff playfully at the display of power, calling Phoebe rich and willful even as she sinks deeper into the comfortable, relaxing warmth of the spring. The peaceful moment is suddenly interrupted by the sharp, insistent buzzing of a phone vibrating against the stone tiles. Selina quickly answers the call, her relaxed expression instantly hardening into one of professional focus as she hears the urgency in the caller's voice. On the other end, Amy looks wide-eyed and worried, reporting that while the server data has been successfully restored, there is a major problem. She reveals the shocking news that an unknown party had acquired their server hosting provider just moments before the entire system went down. Amy's voice is tight with stress as she confirms she has already taken the initiative to switch them to a more secure provider to prevent further interference. Selina's brow furrows as she realizes that the person they've been suspecting is moving with a terrifying level of precision. After hanging up, she sits on the edge of the sofa, the weight of the company's troubles dampening the romantic mood. Phoebe watches her with a quiet, protective intensity, her eyes softening as she asks if she is being too selfish by keeping Selina by her side and making her work remotely. Selina turns to her, a genuine, tender smile breaking through her worry as she tells Phoebe that while she might be selfish, she is a more than willing partner in this life they've built. The tension breaks as Phoebe suddenly shifts into a playful mood, her eyes sparkling as she grabs Selina's hand and insists they go shopping for new outfits for the board dinner. They walk through the boutique hand in hand, their fingers interlaced as they leave the stress of the office behind for just a few hours. Selina laughs softly, her cheeks turning a light pink as she teases Phoebe, saying she'd be perfectly happy just wearing one of Phoebe's suits instead of buying something new. As night falls over the city, the two stand together by their car, the glowing windows of the skyscrapers reflecting the quiet intimacy between them. Phoebe mentions that after the board dinner, she intends to head back to Wuyu and wants Selina to accompany her. Selina gives her a knowing, mischievous look, asking if Phoebe is finally ready to show her off to the entire world as her official +1. Phoebe's composure breaks instantly, a deep blush spreading across her face as she tries to hide her flustered heart behind a defensive huff. But as the silence stretches between them, Phoebe reaches out to gently tilt Selina's chin up, her gaze becoming heavy with a sudden burning passion. Her voice drops to a low, seductive whisper, challenging Selina to just admit that she can't bear the thought of being apart for even a single second. Selina browses through the racks of stunning gowns, her eyes lighting up as she picks out a vibrant red dress, while Phoebe nonchalantly tells her to take whatever she likes. Phoebe pauses her makeup routine, a soft sweat drop appearing as she reminds Selina that she offered to buy her something new. But the stubborn girl simply wouldn't hear of it. Surveying the endless rows of luxury, Selina can't help but feel overwhelmed by the sheer opulence of the room, realizing that these rich socialites likely only wear these masterpieces once. Phoebe carefully applies a bold red lipstick, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous spark, as she asks if Selina is worried the media will catch her wearing someone else's clothes. She continues her preparations with effortless grace, explaining that most of the attendees are just group partners and that this banquet is an annual tradition. The scene shifts to the grand ballroom, where the annual New Year dinner is in full swing, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and high-stakes networking. Phoebe stands center stage under the warm glow of the spotlights, welcoming the distinguished guests with the poise of a true queen of society. Back in the crowd, Selina feels a rush of heat to her cheeks, a nervous blush spreading as she realizes all eyes are beginning to drift toward her. The music swells as the ball officially begins, and across the room, couples begin to sway, though Phoebe looks noticeably annoyed by her current dance partner. Selina sits on the sidelines, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she confesses to her companion that she's absolutely terrible at dancing. Phoebe reaches out, her gloved hand gently covering Selina's, a silent promise of support that makes Selina's heart skip a frantic beat. "I really want to dance with you," Phoebe whispers, her gaze intense and full of a longing that leaves Selina breathless and blushing furiously. The intimate moment is suddenly shattered when a stranger approaches, bowing politely as he asks for the honor of a dance with Ms. Helen. Phoebe forces a polite, albeit strained smile, her eyes darting toward Selina as she reluctantly agrees to the social obligation. As she is led away to the dance floor, Phoebe looks back one last time, her expression a mix of duty and hidden frustration. Watching from the side, Selina is completely mesmerized, thinking to herself that Phoebe's every move is nothing short of gorgeous. Suddenly, a man with a cold, calculating gaze appears behind her, asking if she doesn't think his sister is incredibly charming. He adjusts his glasses, his voice dropping to a low, warning tone as he notes that while many fall for her, she rarely returns the sentiment. Selina turns to face him, her breath hitching as she realizes this man's presence carries a heavy, suffocating weight. He leans in closer, his eyes narrowing behind his lenses as he admits that Selina is surprisingly good at handling his sister. Selina's eyes widen in shock as the man's words sink in, a cold shiver running down her spine. "I think you should give up if you're after our family's money," he growls, his face a mask of cold arrogance as he reveals his true suspicions. Selina stands her ground, her gaze hardening as she firmly repeats that she has zero interest in his wealth and only cares for the woman herself. The man scoffs, his expression turning to one of pure disbelief as he tells her he simply won't believe such a blatant lie. With a final dismissive glance, he turns on his heel and begins to walk away, leaving Selina fuming in his wake. Another man, his eyes hidden behind a glint of his glasses, approaches Selina and asks if she's really wearing Phoebe's gown. Selina stammers out a nervous confirmation, her heart still racing from the previous confrontation. He tilts his head curiously, asking what Yoo-hoo could have possibly said to make her look so shaken. She tries to play it off, looking away as she insists that it was nothing, though her trembling hands betray her. He looks toward the departing figure of Yoo-hoo, noting that Phoebe has always pampered her younger brother to no end. A subtle, knowing smirk plays on his lips as he remarks that Phoebe has been protecting him since they were children. Selina looks down, her expression clouded with a mix of confusion and a strange, burgeoning sadness. As the night winds down, the two women finally make their escape, heading toward the waiting car as the city lights glitter in the background. Once inside the quiet sanctuary of the vehicle, Phoebe notices Selina's distant expression and asks what's with the sudden, heavy silence. Selina glances at her, her voice soft as she asks if Phoebe is truly close with her brother. Phoebe sighs, looking out the window as she explains that he was a troublesome child who grew into an even more troublesome playboy. Her eyes soften with a hint of hidden pain as she reflects on the complicated dynamics of her family. Selina listens intently, her heart aching for the woman beside her as the conversation turns toward the burden of inheritance. Phoebe explains that since she has no children of her own, the weight of the group's future rests entirely on Yoo-hoo and his potential heirs. The two sit in the dimly lit car, the tension between them thick and palpable as Selina tries to process everything she's learned. Phoebe turns to her, her gaze searching Selina's face as she asks why she suddenly looks so incredibly sad. Selina leans her head against Phoebe's shoulder, her eyes fluttering shut as she whispers that she simply wants to stay by her side like this forever. But as the car speeds through the night, a dark thought flickers through Selina's mind, a desperate feeling of being trapped by enemies she can't yet see. The lights of Wuyu City were blinding as the social elite gathered for the art community's grand New Year party. Stepping onto the plush red carpet, Selina looked every bit the Crimson Queen in her shimmering gown, but the weight of the cameras was nothing compared to the warmth of Phoebe's hand in hers. The piece didn't last long, as a group of nosy socialites blocked their path, their smiles as fake as their jewelry. "Oh, Selina, why are you here alone?" one man asked with a smug grin. "Why didn't you bring your boyfriend?" Selina felt a prickle of annoyance, her voice tight as she replied, "Stop it, I don't have one." But the vultures weren't finished circling. A girl with a massive red bow leaned in, her eyes glinting with malice. "Don't you? I heard people in the art circle change their partners as often as they change their bed sheets." "You just broke up, didn't you?" Selina's breath hitched, her face flushing with a mixture of anger and deep embarrassment. Suddenly, Phoebe stepped forward, her presence commanding and cool. She didn't just defend Selina, she claimed her. "I'm sorry," Phoebe said, her voice dripping with a dangerous sort of charm, "but I'm her current bedsheet." Selina's brain practically short-circuited, Her eyes went wide, her face turning a shade of red that put her dress to shame as she sputtered in disbelief. The crowd gasped, the scandalous words hanging in the air like a lightning bolt that had just struck the center of the room. Phoebe let the silence stretch for a delicious, agonizing moment before she let out a soft, melodic giggle, covering her mouth with her hand. "Aha, just kidding. Why are you all so serious?" she asked, though the twinkle in her eyes suggested she enjoyed the chaos far too much. Later that night, the noise of the party faded into the quiet intimacy of Selina's home. The two of them were tangled together beneath the covers, the air between them thick with a much softer kind of tension. Selina turned her head, her voice a sleepy murmur as she asked, "Where are you taking me today?" Phoebe's gaze was tender as she whispered back, "Today, I'll show you my darling." Selina's heart skipped a beat as Phoebe leaned over her, their faces inches apart, the heat of their bodies radiating in the dim light. "I need to get up now," Selina squeaked, finally finding the strength to push the mischievous woman back, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the schedule. Selina sat on the edge of the bed, trying to regain her composure while Phoebe watched her with a playful, lingering gaze. Selina tried to ignore it, but the intensity of that stare was like a physical touch, making her skin tingle. Finally, Selina sighed, her resistance crumbling under the weight of Phoebe's affection. "Okay, I give up," she admitted, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Phoebe's eyes lit up as she reached out, grasping Selina's hand and pulling her toward the door with the excitement of a child. They stepped outside into the crisp morning air, where a sleek, powerful white motorcycle was waiting. "How is it? Is my darling cool?" Phoebe asked, leaning against the machine with a confident smirk. The chrome of the wheels gleamed in the sunlight, a testament to how much Phoebe cared for this beast of a machine. Selina stood there, helmet in hand, her eyes wide with a new kind of admiration. "I'm impressed," she breathed, realizing there were still so many layers to this woman she had yet to uncover. Phoebe looked at her, her expression softening. "I didn't know this side of you, Selina," she teased. Selina laughed, looking at the bike and then back at the elegant woman before her. "It's because a rich lady like you is used to luxurious cars and chauffeurs," Selina noted, still finding it hard to believe Phoebe was a biker. "Get on. I'll give you a ride," Phoebe commanded, her voice full of an adventurous spirit that was impossible to refuse. Selina climbed onto the back, her heart hammering against her ribs as she prepared for the ride of her life. With a roar of the engine, they tore away, the wind whipping past them, as they became a blur of white and red against the city streets. They leaned into the turns, the world around them disappearing, until it was just the two of them and the open road. Selina squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, her arms wrapped tightly around Phoebe's waist, feeling the vibration of the engine deep in her bones. Through the visor of her helmet, Phoebe's eyes were focused and sharp, filled with the thrill of the speed. Selina leaned her head against Phoebe's back, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. "As long as I'm with you, I don't mind if I'm riding a horse or a motorbike." She hugged her even tighter, cherishing the feeling of being completely safe in the midst of such chaos. But all good things must come to an end. The scene shifted to the bustling terminal of Wuyu Airport, the sound of jet engines a somber reminder of reality. They stood together near the entrance, the looming departure casting a shadow over their morning joy. "Time flies. You have to go back now," Selina said, her voice laced with a sadness she couldn't hide. "Hey, it's all right. I'll be there with you right after I resolve the problems here," Selina promised, trying to be the strong one even as her own heart ached. Phoebe looked down, her usual confidence replaced by a rare moment of vulnerability. "You always make it sound so easy. But I don't even want to leave you for a moment," she confessed. Selina stepped into her arms, pulling her into a fierce, desperate hug. "I don't want to leave you either. I love you," she whispered into Phoebe's ear, the words a sacred vow between them. Phoebe squeezed her eyes shut, holding onto Selina as if she could stop time itself. "Call me every day then," Selina insisted as they finally pulled apart, her eyes searching Phoebe's face. Phoebe's playful side flickered back to life for a second as she reached out and pinched Selina's cheek. "Be a good girl. Get up," she teased, trying to lighten the heavy mood. Selina blushed, her face heating up under the touch. "All right, don't do this in public. Get on your way," she huffed, though her eyes were shining with unshed tears. Phoebe gave a final, lingering look, her smile bittersweet as she turned toward the gate. Selina stood frozen, watching as Phoebe walked away, her suitcase trailing behind her like a heavy weight. The distance between them grew with every step, a cold void opening up in Selina's chest. As Phoebe disappeared into the crowd, she felt the echo of their final embrace, a golden memory to hold on to until they could be together again. The sterile silence of the room is broken only by the soft, rhythmic drip of the IV line, a cold reminder of the toll the recent chaos has taken on Phoebe's body. Selina sits at the bedside, her eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and devotion, having abandoned a crucial meeting just to ensure she didn't spend a single second away from her ailing friend. Phoebe looks up, a playful yet weary glint in her eyes as she whispers, "If I were to stay sick every day, would you keep me company like this forever?" Selina's heart aches at the sight of her weakness, her voice trembling as she begs Phoebe to recover, though Phoebe only smiles and confesses that she doesn't feel miserable at all as long as Selina is by her side. Attempting to be practical, Selina offers a cup of water to soothe Phoebe's parched throat, but the sick woman pouts and boldly demands, "I want you to feed me." Selina holds out the straw, expecting a simple sip, but Phoebe stubbornly turns her head away like a spoiled child, refusing to take a single drop. Her gaze intensifies, her golden eyes locking onto Selina's as she repeats her demand with a heavy, suggestive weight behind her words. Selina blinks, her mind racing with confusion as she asks the obvious question, "Aren't I feeding you right now?" Suddenly, the realization hits Selina like a physical blow, her heart rate spiking as the true, scandalous meaning behind Phoebe's request dawns on her. Her face erupts into a crimson blush, and she shrieks in a panic. "You don't mean... It's not like you can't move at all." Phoebe doesn't back down, pouting beneath the covers and insisting that since Selina promised to take care of her, she must follow through regardless of how inappropriate it feels. With a shaky breath and a heart thundering against her ribs, Selina takes a mouthful of the water herself, her eyes fluttering shut as she prepares for the intimate task. She leans over the bed, the air between them thick with an electric, suffocating tension as she moves to close the distance between their lips. The spell is abruptly broken by the sharp, insistent chime of the doorbell at the front gate. Standing outside is a woman with sharp red hair and an even sharper intellect, her glasses reflecting the afternoon sun as she waits with an air of cold authority. Selina answers the door, only to be met with a biting accusation about Phoebe catching a cold because of their reckless motorcycle racing. The visitor's gaze is icy as she looks Selina up and down, declaring with absolute certainty that Selina is simply incapable of protecting someone as precious as Phoebe. She pulls out her phone, displaying a scandalous headline that has already begun to circulate through the gossip rags. "The media used to report news about us." She sneers, her voice dripping with venom as she notes that the paparazzi managed to catch a very compromising shot of the two women this time. Selina's blood boils as she demands to know if this woman truly thinks she can just waltz back in and reclaim a position she abandoned. The red-haired rival lets out a chilling laugh, her eyes narrowing as she asks, "Do you really think you can take my place in her heart?" Selina stands in the shadows of the doorway, her face obscured by a dark, vengeful cloud as she absorbs the insult. She clenches her fists, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low growl as she vows that no matter what their past was, Phoebe will always return to her side the moment things go wrong. The rival turns her back, walking away with a confident stride and a final, haunting command to trust me. The scene shifts to the manicured greens of the GMG golf course, where the elite gather to trade secrets and build empires. Under the bright sun, a man swings his club while the red-haired woman watches, the conversation quickly turning back to the scandal surrounding Phoebe's health. The man notes with a frown that Phoebe caught a chill from the wind during that infamous motorbike race. He leans on his club, admitting that while Phoebe was always chauffeured in luxury, Selina certainly has a unique way of getting under her skin. "Phoebe seems to be closer to Selina than she ever was your sister," the man observes, his words acting like salt in an open wound. The woman's eyes flash with a predatory light behind her lenses, her expression twisting into one of pure, unadulterated malice. The man's gaze hardens as he realizes the depth of the resentment brewing between these powerful players. She scoffs at the idea of Selina's importance, claiming she never truly believed the girl mattered to Phoebe's long-term plans. The man smiles darkly, promising that he will deal with Selina personally since she dared to interfere with the recent board meeting. Weeks pass and the tension moves from the hospital room to the high-stakes world of corporate warfare in Phoebe's office. Phoebe sits behind her desk, her recovery complete and her focus sharpened on the upcoming bidding for a massive theme park site. She reminds her team that while Shuzhou isn't a top-tier city yet, breaking into this secondary market is the key to their future dominance. Her staff stands at attention as she issues a stern warning. The design drafts are the lifeblood of this project and must not be leaked under any circumstances. Her lead designer nods enthusiastically, his face glowing with the confidence of a man who believes victory is already within their grasp. Phoebe dismisses them with a sharp, professional air, her mind already moving 10 steps ahead of her competitors. But as the office clears, she glances down at her phone, her heart skipping a beat as she reads a message that has nothing to do with business. The birthday party is next week. Come back soon, I miss you. Inside Phoebe's mansion, the air is thick with expensive perfume and the laughter of high society. Selina looks radiant, though a guest curiously asks why the party is being held today of all days. A friend explains that since Phoebe's birthday was yesterday and Selina's is tomorrow, a joint celebration was the perfect choice. The guests cheer, raising their glasses to the two beautiful women at the center of the room. Phoebe's expression falters when she's told that Yuzeng won't be making it after all. A man in a suit delivers the chilling news that Yuzeng was involved in a car accident on her way there. A crash? Is she all right? Phoebe gasps, her heart skipping a beat in sudden terror. The man's eyes are grim behind his glasses as he confirms she's already been rushed to the hospital. Without a second thought, he announces he's going to check on her, leaving the party in a state of shock. Phoebe insists on going along, her protective instincts flaring up as Selina watches her with concern. They quickly coordinate, telling the others to keep the guests entertained until they return. Outside, the man stares up at the starlit sky, his mind racing with worry for the woman he loves. He strides toward his car, the engine roaring to life as he prepares to speed toward the hospital. Inside the vehicle, Phoebe grips Selina's hand, her voice trembling as she admits she can't just sit still. Selina offers a soft, reassuring look, telling her it's okay to go if she's that worried. At the hospital, a woman walks down the sterile hallway, appearing remarkably unscathed despite the scare. She adjusts her glasses with a smirk, looking far more composed than anyone expected. "I just bumped the car turning a corner," she explains casually, downplaying the drama. Relieved, the group stands outside the facility, the tension finally beginning to drain from their bodies. The car speeds back toward the mansion, the headlights cutting through the quiet night. Phoebe sits in the back, her gaze fixed on the driver as she processes the chaotic turn of events. The man watches her through the rearview mirror, a silent understanding passing between them in the shadows. He offers a small, knowing smile, glad that the worst is over and they can return to the festivities. Back at the party, the music is pumping and the guests are lost in a world of karaoke and joy. Phoebe and Selina slip back into the room, Phoebe apologizing for the sudden disappearance. Lily beams at them, her face flushed with wine as she insists they've been having a grand time. Acker holds up a microphone, demanding that Phoebe sing a song to make up for her absence. Phoebe laughs it off, claiming she can't sing and playfully pushing Selina into the spotlight instead. Selina takes the mic, her voice sweet and clear as she begins a duet with Acker. The room is filled with musical notes and cheers as the two of them perform for the delighted crowd. They look like a perfect pair on stage, Selina's laughter ringing out as she holds Acker's hand. Phoebe watches from the side, a flash of irritation crossing her face as she sees how close they are. The night ends with the cutting of a beautiful cake, the celebration finally reaching its sweet conclusion. Guests begin to filter out, waving goodbye and thanking the hosts for an unforgettable evening. Once they are alone, Phoebe's teasing tone returns, mentioning how much Selina seemed to enjoy that duet. Selina blushes, defending herself by saying it was just a song, but Phoebe isn't letting it go. "What did you say?" Phoebe whispers, leaning in close as the air between them turns electric. Selina's breath hitches, her eyes darting away as she tries to hide the flutter in her chest. Phoebe flops onto the bed with a huff, her jealousy showing through her playful exterior. Selina looks down at her, her heart swelling with an affection she can no longer deny. "Don't be jealous," Selina murmurs, leaning over her with a gaze that promises she only has eyes for one person. LQ leans in, her voice a low, suggestive purr as she asks the question that's been burning in her mind. Just how many people has Phoebe loved before her? Phoebe looks back at her with a gaze that is both intense and vulnerable, admitting that she wants to peel back every layer of LQ's history, leaving no secret unturned. They lie together in the heavy, quiet intimacy of the room, their bodies close enough to feel the heat radiating between them as the weight of the past settles over them like a shroud. Phoebe begins her tale, her voice trembling slightly as she remembers the day her heart first skipped a beat under the shadow of towering office buildings. It all started with a simple handshake and a polite greeting to the woman who would soon become her entire world. Her boss was the new creative director, a woman named Selina who commanded every room she entered with an effortless magnetic grace. At the time, Phoebe was just an eager employee, never imagining that a professional mentorship would spiral into a desperate, unrequited obsession. Every day at the office felt like a precious gift, with Phoebe's eyes constantly drifting toward the woman who was rapidly becoming her son. Selina was protective and kind, always standing up for Phoebe in the high-pressure environment of the art center, unknowingly fueling the fire in Phoebe's heart. She was so charismatic and so utterly charming that Phoebe found herself falling completely and hopelessly in love, a secret she carried like a heavy stone. Phoebe spent her nights staring at her phone, her heart racing as she replayed every interaction, wondering if Selina felt the same spark. It was unbelievable even to her, especially since a woman like Selina wasn't even her typical type, yet she couldn't look away. She watched Selina lead meetings and address crowds with a microphone in hand, her admiration turning into a deep-seated, painful longing. Finally, unable to hold the pressure in any longer, Phoebe typed out those 3 life-changing words and hit send, her breath hitching in her throat as she waited. The reply was a crushing blow that felt like a physical strike. Selina admitted she already had a crush on someone else. The air in the office turned cold and clinical, with Selina even offering to move Phoebe to another location just to avoid the unbearable awkwardness. Tears blurred Phoebe's vision as she insisted she was fine, even as her entire world crumbled into ash around her. Selina's voice was firm but pained as she told Phoebe that she had to stop torturing her own heart with these impossible feelings. Not wanting to make things difficult for the woman she adored, Phoebe swallowed her pride and agreed that they should remain just friends. She convinced herself that seeing Selina every day was enough to survive on, even if it meant hiding her heartbreak behind a professional mask. She became a ghost in the hallway, sneaking countless glances at Selina whenever she thought no one was looking, her heart aching with every step. Phoebe would linger by the office door, the simple word office, on the sign feeling like a barrier to a paradise she could never enter. Every frown or smile that crossed Selina's face would dictate Phoebe's mood for the entire day, a puppet pulled by the strings of her own devotion. She lived for a single message, her thoughts running wild with anxiety and fear whenever Selina didn't reply immediately. Hours would pass with Phoebe staring at a "where are you?" Text on her screen, the silence of the phone echoing the emptiness in her soul. In a moment of impulsive, tragic devotion, she even went as far as to have Selina's initials tattooed onto the side of her hand. She wept as the needle marked her skin, a permanent, hidden reminder of a love that was never meant to be hers. They would still gather for meals with friends, Phoebe forcing a smile and acting the part of the happy colleague while her heart was breaking just inches away. They played mahjong and drank wine late into the night, Phoebe playing the role of the perfect friend to perfection while screaming internally. She attended every social gathering she secretly hated simply because she knew Selina would be there. A moth drawn to a flame that would only burn her. Selina's favorite sayings became Phoebe's mantras, her social media feed a window into a life Phoebe desperately wanted to share. Phoebe once sent her a poetic message, telling Selina that her eyes were only beautiful because Selina was the light reflected within them. She watched Selina from the crowd at events, a silent worshiper lost in the blue glow of the stage lights, knowing she was invisible. But eventually, the torment of being so close yet so far became a weight too heavy for any soul to carry. With a trembling hand and a heart made of lead, she finally placed her resignation letter on Selina's desk, choosing to walk away before she broke completely. Selina didn't understand the depth of the sacrifice, jokingly dismissing Phoebe's heavy-hearted parting words as nonsense. Phoebe walked out of that office and out of that life, knowing that even until the very end, Selina never realized how deeply she had been loved. Back in the present, Phoebe finishes her story, her eyes searching LQ's face for any sign of jealousy or understanding. LQ looks at her with a piercing, possessive gaze, asking if there was truly no one else who occupied Phoebe's thoughts. Phoebe insists that's the end of it, her cheeks flushing a deep rose as the atmosphere between them grows thick with a new kind of tension. LQ scoffs playfully, refusing to believe the story ended so simply or that Phoebe only had one love before her. Phoebe huffs, her face turning a bright, lovely shade of crimson as she accuses LQ of being far too bossy for her own good. LQ leans in even closer, her lips inches from Phoebe's as she demands to know every single secret, her eyes darkening with a hunger that promises a very different kind of story. Selina's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes searching Phoebe's as she promised that she would eventually reveal the secrets she was hiding. Phoebe could only stare back in stunned silence, her heart hammering against her ribs as she gasped out a question, unable to believe the intensity of the moment. Sensing the rising heat between them, Selina reached out to gently cup Phoebe's face, her touch a soothing balm as she urged her to get some rest before their high-stakes meeting the next morning. A deep blush crept up Phoebe's neck while she leaned into the affection, finally closing her eyes as they exchanged a soft, lingering goodnight. The following morning, the sun beat down on the towering glass facade of the GMG Group's headquarters, where the fate of their newest project would soon be decided. Inside the sterile, expansive meeting room, the atmosphere was thick with professional tension as the team gathered to finalize their strategy. One of the lead directors leaned forward, his voice firm as he announced that they were ready to seal the official files and submit their tender for the upcoming contract. Phoebe watched him with a sharp, calculating gaze, her eyes narrowing as she reminded everyone that these design drawings were to be kept under the strictest confidentiality. Selina couldn't help but let out a small, triumphant smile, holding the thick stack of finalized plans against her chest as she prepared to hand them over to the legal department. The stakes couldn't be higher. The entire company was banking on securing the massive theme park site in Shuju City. As the heavy doors finally swung open and the meeting was adjourned, the staff began to filter out, the weight of the deadline pressing down on every shoulder. While navigating the bustling lobby on the first floor, Selina clutched the precious documents tightly, her mind already racing toward the next task. Suddenly, a man appeared out of nowhere, and before she could react, they collided with a jarring force that sent her reeling. "Ah!" she cried out as the papers slipped from her grasp, fluttering across the polished floor like white autumn leaves. The man dropped to his knees immediately, frantically apologizing as he helped her gather the scattered sheets. Selina offered a polite, strained smile as she accepted the returned documents. But as the man turned to walk away, a cold shiver of suspicion ran down her spine. Later that night, the world seemed to go still as Phoebe and Selina drifted into a restless sleep, unaware of the storm brewing. In the hazy, golden light of a dream, Selina found herself back at a glamorous hotel event, the air smelling of expensive perfume and champagne. She felt Phoebe's familiar warmth as she was pulled into a sudden, playful embrace from behind, the brunette whispering that the evening had been a success. They shared a moment of pure, unadulterated bliss, their faces glowing with a happiness that felt almost too real to be a fantasy. But the dream shifted, the colors bleeding into a pale, ghostly white as a figure from the past suddenly stood before them. A woman named Tangbao looked directly at Selina, her voice echoing with a haunting longing as she confessed how much she had missed her. The jealousy in the air became suffocating as Phoebe tightened her grip on Selina, refusing to let her go even as the vision began to fracture. Selina bolted upright in bed with a sharp gasp, her skin slick with a cold sweat as the nightmare finally shattered. Beside her, the silence was broken by the aggressive, rhythmic buzzing of two phones vibrating against the nightstand. Phoebe woke just as abruptly, her eyes wide with alarm as she realized the early morning silence was being invaded by an emergency. Both women scrambled to answer their calls, their expressions turning grim as they received the exact same devastating news from the office. Phoebe's face was a mask of pure stress as she listened to the frantic report, her knuckles turning white around the handset. By the time they reached the office, The entire executive team was already waiting, the air in the room heavy with the scent of bitter coffee and impending doom. The lead analyst didn't mince words, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly tone as he delivered the killing blow. Their secret designs had been leaked to the competition. One of the partners crossed her arms tightly, her eyes flashing with a mix of fury and disbelief at the betrayal. Selina felt the blood drain from her face, her voice trembling as she demanded to know how they could be so certain that a leak had occurred. The analyst adjusted his glasses, his gaze cold and clinical as he explained that the rival corporation's submission was an identical, yet slightly improved version of their own work. Phoebe stared at the table, her mind flashing back to every person who had touched those files, her heart sinking as she realized the magnitude of the disaster. "We have to get to the bottom of this," the director growled, his eyes burning with a vengeful light behind his lenses, "because this leak has just cost us everything." The silence of the room was shattered by a sharp, insistent knock that echoed against the heavy wooden doors. Phoebe's assistant stepped inside, her face pale as she clutched a digital file to her chest, her eyes darting nervously toward the head of the table. The atmosphere was already suffocating, with every board member's eyes fixed on the device in Yuhu's hand as he prepared to reveal his hand. "This," he hissed, his voice trembling with a calculated, theatrical venom that made the air turn cold. He slammed the tablet onto the desk with a deafening crack, shouting that this was the definitive proof of the betrayal that would ruin them all. The device lay there on the polished surface, a glowing testament to a crime Selina knew in her heart she hadn't committed. Selina sat frozen in her chair, the weight of the accusations pressing down on her shoulders like lead. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" Phoebe demanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade as she stood to defend her friend. She glared at the man across from her jaw set in a hard line, refusing to let him see the flicker of fear in her eyes. Yuhu didn't flinch, his finger stabbing at the screen as he pointed to the incriminating footage that he claimed was undeniable. There, in grainy surveillance quality, was a figure that looked exactly like Selina, appearing to handle the very documents that had been leaked to their rivals. "It's obvious that Selina leaked the confidential documents," he declared, his smile widening as he saw the board members begin to murmur in agreement. The room erupted into low, jagged whispers, the vultures circling as they sensed blood in the water and a chance to seize power. "This surveillance video proves nothing. It could be anyone." Phoebe snapped, her heart hammering against her ribs as she looked for a way out. She reached for the tablet, her hand trembling slightly as she tried to find any flaw, any sign of tampering in the evidence. But Yuhu was one step ahead, revealing a high-tech pair of spy glasses and explaining they had captured everything through a hidden camera. Phoebe's breath hitched, her gaze fixated on the tiny, cold lens hidden in the frame of the glasses. He threw the glasses into a velvet-lined box, the sound of the lid closing feeling like the final nail in a coffin being sealed shut. The light caught the dark frames, a silent mockery of the two women who were now trapped in a corner with nowhere to run. Several board members stood up in a wave of orchestrated outrage, their faces twisted with a mix of indignation and hidden greed. "Even if they're spy camera glasses, I believe Selina didn't do it on purpose. This is a setup," Phoebe argued, her voice growing desperate. The red-haired woman across the table scoffed, her eyes cold and clinical behind her own spectacles. "Responsibility. Can she afford the tens of billions we will lose if we lose the Shuju project?" Yuhu roared, his face turning a furious, mottled shade of red. He adjusted his suit jacket with a sharp, aggressive movement, looming over the table like a predator about to strike. "Even if we lose that project, we can still develop other locations and recover." Phoebe countered, her voice shaking but her spirit still fighting. "Other places. You speak as if opportunities like this grow on trees." Yuhu repeated, his eyes narrow and full of concentrated disdain. The red-haired woman leaned back, crossing her arms with a smirk as she dismissed Phoebe's desperate attempt to pivot. A heavy, judgmental silence fell over the room, the air thick with the scent of a dying career and a broken bond. "Well, what do you want? What is the price for your silence?" Phoebe whispered, finally seeing the true, ugly shape of the trap. Yuhu stood tall, his presence dominating the space as he prepared to deliver the final, killing blow to their partnership. "I demand that Selina be relieved of all duties immediately and taken off the board of directors," he shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Phoebe's eyes widened in a mix of shock and agony, her hand clenching into a white-knuckled fist beneath the table. He smoothed his tie with a sickeningly calm gesture, the picture of professional cruelty as he waited for her to break. "You're going overboard. It was a single mistake, if it was a mistake at all." Phoebe cried out, her voice cracking with the strain of the confrontation. "Phoebe, you won't make a stupid decision because of your intimate relationship with her, right?" The red-haired woman sneered, hitting below the belt. The whispers grew into a roar, the board members openly questioning if Phoebe was fit to lead if she couldn't be objective. They watched like spectators at a tragedy, their faces cold and unmoving as they waited to see which woman would be sacrificed. Yuhu leaned in close, his voice a low, dangerous rumble as he threatened to have the board question Phoebe's own chairmanship. He stood over them like a judge delivering a sentence, his shadow stretching long and dark across the polished floor. Selina looked at Phoebe's trembling hands and the sweat on her brow, the realization of what she had to do finally breaking her heart. "It's my mistake. I'm willing to leave the board and accept all punishments," Selina said, her voice soft but carrying a devastating clarity. Phoebe turned to her, her eyes filling with a sudden, sharp grief as she whispered, "Selina, no, please don't do this." "How's the situation?" she gasped, her breath hitching as the weight of the betrayal finally began to sink in. Her companion's eyes narrowed, a cold, calculating light flickering within them as she realized the depth of the trap set for Phoebe. "I knew using Ren had an ulterior motive all these years," she continued, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "But I never expected Yoo-hoo to join forces with her." Looking out at the passing city lights, the blonde woman's reflection in the glass seemed haunted by the realization that Yoo-hoo's greed for power knew no bounds. "What about her?" the dark-haired girl whispered, her heart racing as she feared the worst for their friend. A heavy silence filled the car as Selina stared into the distance, wondering if her very presence had been the catalyst for this sudden, cruel transformation. Confused and desperate for answers, the girl could only stare at her friend, searching for a glimmer of hope that wasn't there. "Yeah. It seems like I'm the one who brought all this harm to Phoebe," Selina admitted, her voice cracking under the pressure of her mounting guilt. Her friend tried to offer comfort, reminding her that after years of friendship, resorting to such ruthless tactics for power was simply inexcusable. But the pain was too fresh, and Selina simply closed her eyes, whispering for them to drop the subject before she completely fell apart. Resigned to the somber mood, her companion nodded silently, letting the quiet of the night take over as they drove on. Meanwhile, beneath the neon glow of the GMG hotel, a much darker storm was brewing within the executive suites. Inside the office, the air was thick with despair as a woman sat slumped at her desk, her head in her hands as her world crumbled around her. A red-haired woman stood over her like a silent sentinel, her voice deceptively soft as she promised to help solve the impossible problems they faced. "Why are you targeting Selina?" The woman suddenly snapped, looking up with eyes red from crying and a face twisted in betrayal. The red-haired woman didn't even flinch, her expression remaining chillingly calm as she claimed her actions were purely for protection. "Protecting me?" she scoffed, a bitter tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Is hurting the person I care about most supposed to be protection?" The room felt colder as the red-haired woman stared back, her gaze unyielding and devoid of any visible remorse. She stepped closer, looming over the desk as she asked if she was simply expected to watch, while the board of directors stripped everything away. The woman could only stare back in shock, the harsh reality of corporate warfare baring its teeth in the middle of the night. The red-haired woman pressed her advantage, reminding her that Yoo-hoo wouldn't just walk away after losing millions of dollars in potential profit. "I've devoted my entire life to this company," she cried out, her voice echoing off the walls of the sterile office. "Don't you understand?" the other woman countered. "When you divorced the conglomerate's son, you killed every business prospect he had." Shaking her head, the woman clutched at her chest, insisting that she could never accept a loveless marriage built solely on business transactions. The red-haired woman watched her carefully, her eyes tracking every flinch and every sob as the woman's resolve began to shatter. Softening her tone just enough to be dangerous, she mentioned Danny, knowing exactly which heartstrings to pull to keep her under control. At the mention of that name, the woman broke completely, her teeth gritted as a fresh wave of agony washed over her. Back at Phoebe's home, the headlights of a car cut through the darkness as Selina finally arrived, looking for a sanctuary that might no longer exist. Her friend questioned why she was even returning to this place, but Selina knew that avoidance was no longer an option. "I need to know how Phoebe is doing," Selina said firmly, her eyes fixed on the grand, silent entrance of the estate. She stood by the car for a moment, a lone figure against the imposing gates, before steeling her nerves to step inside. The house was eerily quiet, the grand staircase looming above her as she called out into the emptiness, wondering where everyone had gone. Suddenly, the sharp ring of her phone shattered the silence, the screen illuminating her worried face in the dark foyer. In the office, the woman quickly wiped her eyes, reaching for her phone as if it were a lifeline in a stormy sea. "Hello, Selina? Where are you?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. Selina clutched the phone to her ear, her brow furrowed with concern as she explained she was waiting at the house. Desperate to hide her current state, the woman promised she would be right back, lying through her teeth about being stuck with work. As the call ended, the red-haired woman watched the interaction with a cold, predatory interest, her glasses reflecting the dim office light. Standing up abruptly, the woman insisted that Selina had nowhere else to go but back to her side, her desperation palpable. "I thought she'd be too ashamed to even look at you," the red-haired woman remarked, her voice dripping with a subtle, poisonous venom. Ignoring the jab, the woman rushed toward the door, leaving the suffocating atmosphere of the office behind her. As night falls over the quiet luxury of Phoebe's home, the air inside is heavy with unspoken apologies and the scent of a brewing storm. Phoebe steps into the room, her heart aching as she looks at the woman she failed to shield from the public's wrath. "I'm sorry, I should have protected you," she murmurs, her voice trembling with the weight of her guilt. Selina stares into her glass of water, the cool surface reflecting the turmoil of a day filled with accusations and betrayal. She knows that if Phoebe had stood by her, the public would have devoured them both, and that is a sacrifice she simply cannot allow. With a weary sigh, Selina looks up, her eyes soft but filled with a finality that cuts deeper than any blade. She insists that her position on the board wasn't right for her anyway, trying to mask the pain of her forced resignation with a brave face. Before Phoebe can protest further, Selina gently presses a finger to her lips, a spark of electric tension passing between them in the heavy silence. Morning arrives all too soon, and the sleek black car waiting at the gate signals a painful parting that neither is ready for. Phoebe clings to the final moments, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears as she realizes she can't stop the woman she cares for from walking away. Rainey looks on, her own heart heavy with worry as she asks the question they are all thinking. When will Selina finally come back to them? Selina offers a bittersweet smile, her eyes closing for a brief second as she admits that it will be a long time before she can return to their side. As she turns to leave, a hand shoots out, grabbing her arm in a desperate, silent plea to stay just a moment longer. Their shadows stretch across the pavement, a final moment of physical contact before the distance between them becomes an agonizing reality. Even in their most frantic moments, the bond between these friends remains unbroken, though the goodbye feels like a weight they aren't ready to carry. Selina is practically bundled into the car, her heart racing as the engine hums to life, signaling the end of her sanctuary. From the window, she waves a final, playful farewell, hiding her true sorrow behind a mask of forced cheerfulness. As the car speeds away, the reality of the upcoming battle sets in, leaving them both looking pale and utterly drained by the emotional toll. The scene shifts to the grand, bustling lobby of the Manhwa Hotel, where the next chapter of Selina's life is set to begin under the glare of 1,000 lights. Inside the massive hall, a sea of reporters waits with bated breath for the launch of the highly anticipated new drama, Loneliness. The MC takes the stage with a bright, professional smile, her voice booming through the speakers as she welcomes the crowd to the event. Selina steps into the spotlight, looking every bit the elegant director, though her heart is thumping painfully against her ribs. One by one, the stars are introduced, starting with the stunning main female lead, Kate, who radiates a quiet, ethereal grace. Beside her stands the dashing first male lead, H-King, looking like a ruined nobleman brought to life from the pages of a script. The second female lead, Helena, joins them on stage, her bold beauty perfectly capturing her character's fiery and adventurous spirit. Then comes MJ, the martial arts warrior of the group, standing tall with a confident smirk that charms the cameras. Finally, the mysterious younger sister, Gina, completes the ensemble, looking as delicate and perfect as a porcelain doll. The MC gestures towards Selina, inviting the woman behind the vision to share her creative thoughts with the world. Selina grips the microphone, her knuckles turning white as she prepares to face the scrutiny of the public eye. Behind them, images of the drama flicker across the screen, a tale of power struggles and palace intrigue that mirrors the chaos of her own life. A still of a romantic near-kiss appears, drawing gasps from the audience as the raw chemistry of the leads fills the room. The entire cast stands together, a united front ready to take the entertainment industry by storm. But the atmosphere shifts instantly when the MC opens the floor for the dreaded Q&A session. A reporter stands up in the front row, his expression unreadable as he prepares to drop a bombshell on the unsuspecting director. Selina tries to maintain her composure, but the air in the room suddenly feels suffocatingly thin. "Director Selina, I heard you were removed from the board due to work mistakes," a balding reporter barks, his voice dripping with professional malice. Selina's breath hitches, her eyes widening in sheer terror as her darkest professional secret is dragged into the light. Murmurs erupt like wildfire through the crowd, the sound of 100 whispers turning into a deafening roar of judgment. She stands frozen on the stage, the bright lights now feeling like a harsh spotlight on her shame as the world watches her crumble. Her pulse thunders in her ears, and for a terrifying moment, she fears she might lose everything she has worked so hard to rebuild. The room is packed with stone-faced reporters, their eyes fixed on the stage with predatory intensity as they wait for any sign of a slip-up. From behind, we see Selina standing tall, the bright lights of the auditorium washing over her golden hair as she prepares to face the wolves. "This question is not the subject of today's conference, so I will not respond," she says firmly, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. Beside her, a colleague tries to maintain a professional smile, though the sweat on her brow betrays her nerves as she officially ends the Q&A session. The team bows in unison, a formal conclusion to a press conference that felt more like a battlefield. A large promotional banner for their project, Loneliness, stands as a backdrop, depicting elegant, ethereal characters that seem to watch over the room. Confetti rains down on the cast and crew as they strike a pose, celebrating the official launch with bright smiles and peace signs. Backstage, the atmosphere shifts as a teammate complains about the reporter's sudden, aggressive line of questioning. Selina and her friend walk through the modern glass doors of the venue, the cool evening air finally hitting their faces. "It must have been someone who's deliberately trying to stir trouble," her friend notes, her eyes wide with worry for Selina's reputation. Selina lets out a weary sigh, closing her eyes for a brief moment to shake off the day's exhaustion. The scene transitions to the sleek, modern exterior of a high-end restaurant where the team gathers for a well-deserved meal. They sit around a lavishly set table, the warm glow of the interior providing a much-needed sanctuary from the public eye. Selina smiles warmly at a young woman named Giagia, expressing her sincere gratitude for her help. Giagia beams with pride, her eyes sparkling as she tells Miss Selina that it was an absolute pleasure to assist her. The others are surprised to learn that Selina has been sponsoring Giagia from junior high all the way through college, showing a hidden, selfless side of the heiress. Selina blushes slightly, downplaying her generosity by insisting she's just doing the best she can. Jia gazes at her benefactor with deep admiration, knowing she wouldn't have this career if it weren't for Selina's support. Another friend chimes in, her red eyes glowing with mischief as she suggests they're all finally being rewarded for their good deeds. The group erupts into laughter, the tension of the day melting away as they raise their glasses in a joyful toast. As night falls over the city, the skyscrapers glow like jewels under a crescent moon. Inside a quiet apartment, a phone begins to ring, its screen illuminating the darkened room. Phoebe appears on the screen, her short dark hair framing a face that looks tired but relieved to see her friend. Selina looks at the phone with a soft expression, her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders in the dim light. Phoebe leans back, her dark slip dress catching the light as she asks Selina when she's finally coming home. Selina explains that she has a few more things to settle, her heart aching slightly at the distance between them. Phoebe's gaze softens, her voice dropping to a whisper as she admits how much she misses having Selina by her side. "I miss you too," Selina replies, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips, as they share a tender moment across the digital divide. The next day, the atmosphere is far more clinical as the executives of the company gather for a high-stakes announcement. The board members applaud enthusiastically, thrilled to hear that they've finally secured the prestigious Shuju City project. Phoebe takes the floor, her eyes sharp and determined as she proposes reinstating Selina to the board now that the crisis is over. "No!" "I object," a man in glasses shouts, his face contorted with indignation as he stands up to challenge her. He leans in close, his eyes narrowing behind his lenses as he argues that Selina's past mistakes cannot be ignored so easily. Another executive joins the attack, claiming they only won the project because their rivals' assets were frozen by the Regulatory Commission. The man in glasses sneers, insisting that Selina's success was nothing more than pure, dumb luck. Phoebe's jaw tightens, her face flushing with a mix of anger and disbelief at their blatant disrespect. A colleague tries to de-escalate the situation, urging Phoebe to stay calm and not lose her cool in front of the board. The sun beats down on the sleek, modern exterior of the GMG Sports Hub, a place where business deals are often settled with sweat and steel. Inside the hallowed halls of the fencing arena, a man clad in deep blue protective gear adjusts his grip, his voice echoing with a challenging edge as he tells his opponent it's been far too long since they've crossed blades. Behind his thin spectacles, his eyes glint with a sharp, calculated coldness that suggests this match is about much more than just sport. As they walk toward the center of the strip, the woman in red hair and matching gear bites back a retort, reminding him that while his plan to purge the board of directors worked, he failed to secure her the position of executive chairman. He doesn't even flinch at her accusation, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register as he admits that his only goal, his only reason for breathing is food. He slips his fencing mask over his face, his expression vanishing behind the wire mesh as he declares that as long as he gets what he wants, the rest of the world can burn for all he cares. The woman follows suit, her breathing turning heavy and rhythmic behind her own mask as she prepares to defend her pride. With a sudden, violent swish, he lunges forward, his movements a blur of practiced lethality that catches her off guard. Their blades clash in a high-stakes dance, the screech of metal on metal ringing out through the vaulted ceiling of the arena. From a distance, they look like two titans locked in a struggle for dominance, the vastness of the sports hub making their personal war seem all the more intense. Then, with a sickening whack, his blade finds its mark, the force of the strike sending a jolt through her entire body as she's thrown backward. She collapses onto the floor, gasping for air as sweat beads on her forehead, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and bitter resentment. Meanwhile, across the city at the towering headquarters of GZC Media, a different kind of battle is being lost. Inside a plush office, Selina stares at a tablet held by her assistant, Amy, her heart sinking as she sees the disastrous numbers for their new show. Her breath hitches as she asks if they've done a proper analysis, her face pale with the realization that their hard work might be for nothing. Amy's voice trembles as she explains that despite their massive budget, every single advertising effort has been a total failure. Selina's eyes widen in sheer disbelief, her voice cracking as she demands to know how such a targeted campaign could possibly miss the mark so badly. She scrolls through the data, seeing the jagged lines of suppressed engagement and blocked platforms that tell a story of deliberate sabotage. A cold shiver runs down her spine as she realizes that a powerful shadow player must be pulling the strings of the media companies to crush her. Suddenly, the silence of the office is broken by the sharp ding of her phone, the screen lighting up with a call from a contact saved simply as her, adorned with a small, mocking heart. Selina stares at the device as if it were a venomous snake, a bead of cold sweat rolling down her temple. She slowly brings the phone to her ear, her voice a mere whisper as she answers. On the other end of the line, Phoebe is lounging back in her own executive chair, looking perfectly composed and utterly satisfied with the chaos she's likely caused. Selina tries to sound professional, claiming she's just busy discussing the new show, but the tremor in her voice betrays her. Phoebe's eyes darken with a playful yet predatory light, her smile widening as she listens to Selina struggle. Amy senses the tension and quietly slips out of the room, leaving Selina alone in the vast, glass-walled office. Phoebe stands up and walks to her window, looking out over the sprawling city like a queen surveying her domain. Selina closes her eyes for a moment, trying to find the strength to keep up the facade of the confident director. Then, Phoebe drops the bombshell. She wants Selina to drop everything and accompany her on a trip to Europe. Selina's jaw drops, her mind racing as she repeats the destination in shock, wondering how she could possibly leave while her company is under fire. Phoebe's silhouette is framed by the towering skyscrapers, her voice dripping with a honeyed sweetness that feels more like a command than an invitation. She insists that they've both been working too hard and that Selina simply needs to relax and keep her company. Selina looks out at the horizon, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders as she realizes she is being cornered. In her mind's eye, Phoebe transforms into a pleading, adorable version of herself, whining "baby, baby," in a way that Selina has never been able to resist. Selina lets out a long, defeated sigh, her heart fluttering despite the dire circumstances as she admits she can never say no to her. Phoebe's smirk is visible even through the phone line, her triumph complete as she promises to send a private plane for her the very next day. Selina hangs up and stares blankly at the wall, a soft, resigned okay escaping her lips as she realizes she's walked right into Phoebe's golden cage. The sun blazes against a crystal-clear sky as their private jet cuts through the clouds, leaving all their worries far below. Stepping onto the luxury liner, the world seems to shrink, leaving only the two of them in this floating sanctuary. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is heavy with unspoken words as one girl leans her head against the other's shoulder, her voice a soft murmur. "Why do you seem upset?" she asks, her eyes searching for any sign of the pain she knows is hidden deep within. A gentle sigh escapes as she looks down, her heart clearly heavy with the weight of her responsibilities. "Not really, it's just something on my mind," she admits, the vulnerability in her eyes enough to melt even the coldest heart. She mentions the constant plotting within the company, a never-ending battle for power that has left her exhausted, though there's something more personal she's been dying to share. Her companion looks at her with such tenderness, a soft smile playing on her lips as she brushes a stray hair from her face. "Don't think too much about it. Since we're already out, let's take a good vacation first and talk about work later." A weary breath hitches in her throat as she reflects on the life she's led, one where she had to grow up far too fast. "I've had to learn to handle everything I'm faced with since I was young," she whispers, the strength in her voice masking a deep-seated fatigue. Her friend listens intently, realizing the immense pressure of managing a global empire at such a young age, her heart aching for the girl who never got to be a child. To lighten the mood, she raises a glass of rich, ruby red wine, the liquid shimmering under the cabin lights. "So, stop worrying," she insists, clinking their glasses together in a silent pact to leave the world behind. "Relax and let nature run its course." Taking a slow, deliberate sip, a sense of peace finally begins to settle over them. "Yeah," she agrees softly, "fate will decide." As the plane finally touches down, the real world is replaced by the promise of an adventure they'll never forget. They are whisked away in a sleek, silver car, the engine purring as they leave the airport behind and head toward the unknown. With a roar of power, they speed toward their destination, the wind whipping past as they chase the horizon and the setting sun. They find themselves overlooking a breathtaking European town, the sun setting over the terracotta roofs and sparkling water in a display of pure magic. Every moment is a memory in the making, captured in bright smiles and selfies with the Eiffel Tower standing tall in the distance. From the salt spray of the ocean on a luxury yacht, where they bask in the warmth of the sun, to the adrenaline-pumping thrills of skydiving and gravity-defying roller coasters, they are finally truly free. As night falls, the world turned to a winter wonderland, the moon shining brightly over a cozy, snow-covered retreat nestled in the mountains. They soak in the warmth of a steaming hot spring under the stars before finding themselves in the desert, laughing as a curious camel tries to steal a kiss. Their journey eventually leads them to a magnificent, sprawling manor that glows like a jewel in the night. Inside, the opulence is staggering, leaving one of them completely breathless. "You have a manor in each country?" she asks, her eyes wide with disbelief at such immense wealth. Her host just chuckles, leading her into a private winery where the air is thick with the scent of aged grapes. "I like to drink red wine, so I bought this winery," she explains casually, as if buying a vineyard was as simple as buying a loaf of bread. The sheer scale of her influence is starting to sink in, leaving her friend in a state of quiet awe at the power she wields. But the night isn't over yet, and a mysterious glint appears in her eyes. "Another place? What kind of place is it?" she asks, her curiosity piqued by the sudden change in tone. A playful, yet intense tension fills the air as she leans in close, her presence overwhelming. "I need to be blindfolded. What are you trying to do?" she stammers, her heart racing as she feels the warmth of the other woman's breath against her skin. Their faces are so close now that the world seems to disappear, the chemistry between them electric and undeniable. They arrive at a modern, glass-walled building, the moonlight reflecting off the sleek surfaces in a dance of light and shadow. With a gentle hand on her waist, she guides her blindfolded companion forward, her voice a low, seductive hum. "Don't rush. We're almost there." Stopping in front of the entrance, she reaches up to tilt her chin, her gaze burning with an intensity that promises something unforgettable. "Are you ready?" she asks softly. The blindfold falls away, revealing a private gallery filled with familiar masterpieces. "Did you steal all the artworks from our previous exhibition?" she gasps, her heart overflowing at the sight. They stand together in the center of the room, two figures dwarfed by the beauty surrounding them. That's right, she whispers, pulling her closer until there's no space left between them. For you, I'd give you the world. Their eyes lock, a silent confession passing between them that says more than words ever could. Suddenly, a single, brilliant spotlight cuts through the darkness, illuminating a display at the far end of the hall. It draws them in like a moth to a flame, a beacon of light in the quiet gallery. They walk toward it hand in hand, the anticipation thick enough to taste. Her breath hitches, her hands flying to her mouth as she sees what lies within. Resting on a bed of velvet soft red roses that seem to glow in the dark is a diamond ring so massive and brilliant it seems to hold the light of 1,000 stars. The atmosphere in the gallery is heavy with unspoken words as Phoebe gazes into the glass display, her fingers trembling just inches from the velvet cushion. Suddenly, a sharp vibration cuts through the silence, and she commands Selina to ignore the persistent buzzing of her phone, her voice tight with a sudden, unexplained urgency. A knowing, almost sinister smirk plays on Phoebe's lips as she looks at the blonde girl, the air between them crackling with a sudden icy tension that makes Selina's breath hitch. Deep in the folds of her crimson dress, Phoebe's own device continues its relentless demand for attention. Light spilling from the pocket like a warning of the storm to come, the two women share a momentary, nervous laugh, trying to mask the growing dread that the outside world is finally closing in on their fragile peace. But the illusion is shattered when they both pull out their phones, seeing the names of their assistants flashing on the screens like a death knell. Standing in the dim light of the hall, they both answer, their faces draining of color as the same frantic voices deliver the same devastating news. They stand frozen in the middle of the vast room, two small figures dwarfed by the weight of a scandal they never saw coming. The phones won't stop. The screens for using Ren and Rennie light up again and again, a digital chorus of chaos that threatens to drown them both. What? Engaged. Phoebe gasps into the receiver, her eyes wide with shock as the world shifts violently beneath her feet. She turns to her friend, her voice a ghost of its former self, whispering that the secret is finally out and there is nowhere left to hide. Behind her, a spectral image of the media report appears, a cruel mockery showing Phoebe's supposed engagement to the celebrity, Henry, for the whole world to see. Selina looks on in stunned silence, her heart hammering against her ribs as she tries to process the magnitude of the betrayal. What happened? Aren't you going to explain this? Selina demands, her voice laced with a mixture of hurt and desperation. But Phoebe can only offer a hollow promise to explain later, her eyes darting away to avoid the piercing, tearful gaze of her companion. With a sudden, forceful movement, she shakes off Selina's hand, the physical rejection stinging more than any words could. A single, bitter tear escapes as Phoebe looks down, her voice breaking as she insists they need to return home immediately before things get even worse. She clutches the engagement ring tightly, her knuckles white, as if the diamond itself could provide the answer she so desperately lacks. The light catches the stone as it dangles from her fingertips, a beautiful, glittering lie that has ruined her life in a single afternoon. Without another word, she turns and storms away, her red dress trailing behind her like a streak of blood across the cold floor. Selina is left standing in her wake, watching the one person she trusted disappear into the shadows of the gallery. She doesn't hesitate for long, picking up her pace and running after Phoebe through the marble corridors, her heels clicking rhythmically against the stone. The ring is left behind on the display, a lonely spark of light in the darkened room as the two women flee toward the exit. High above the clouds, a private jet cuts through the blue expanse, carrying them far away from the prying eyes of the media. The silence on the plane is suffocating as they descend the stairs upon landing, neither woman willing to be the first to break the heavy ice between them. Come to me after you figure things out, Phoebe says coldly, her eyes hard and unforgiving as she prepares to face the music alone. A car door slams with a violent bam, punctuating the end of their conversation as Phoebe is whisked away into the bustling city. Inside the second vehicle, Selina finds herself pulled into a sudden, tight embrace by Rennie, the physical closeness a stark contrast to the emotional distance she just felt from Phoebe. They're starting to take action, aren't they? Selina whispers, her eyes narrowing as she shifts her focus back to the evidence they've gathered. Rennie nods, her face set in a grim mask of determination as she confirms that their enemies have finally made their move. Selina leans back against the leather seat, her expression unreadable as she admits she never expected the situation to come this far. She turns to Rennie in the car, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she asks about the truth behind the engagement news. I can tell you first because I trust you, Selina says softly, her eyes searching the other woman's face for any sign of deceit. Rennie's eyes widen in shock, her breath catching in her throat as the truth begins to unravel. Do you know the female singer named Tangbao? Selina asks, the name hanging in the air like a forbidden spell that changes everything. It all began back in our school days, a time when our paths first crossed and a bond was forged that would change our lives forever. Tangbao was the shining star of the Art Institute, a senior whose talent seemed to radiate from her very soul even then. And then there was me, just an ordinary high school girl, watching her from the sidelines with wide, admiring eyes. I was captivated by her every move, listening intently as my friends gossiped about how she was already representing our school on the big stage. I still remember the day she conquered that singing contest. The world finally started to see the brilliance I had recognized from the start. Seeing her on that television screen, radiant and untouchable, I was completely hooked, drawn to her light like a moth to a flame. I'll admit I was a little selfish back then, determined to befriend her simply because she was becoming a star. I never imagined that pulling a few strings to meet her would lead our hearts to such a deep, tangled, and beautiful place. I would stare at my phone for what felt like an eternity, her name glowing on the screen like a promise of something more. With a trembling hand and a heart full of hope, I finally sent that first message, praying she'd want to be my friend too. From that moment on, I was her shadow, watching from the wings with bated breath as she poured her heart out to crowd. I even risked my own studies, begging for a leave of absence just so I wouldn't have to miss a single moment of her first solo concert. Our bond grew until we were each other's lifeline. If she caught even a tiny cold, my world would stop until I knew she was safe and recovering. We spent hours on the phone every single day, and though we didn't have a formal label, she'd whisper that it felt exactly like we were dating. Of course, we had our little spats, but even our arguments felt sweet and intimate in their own way. As her fame skyrocketed, I took charge, organizing her fan club and managing her life with a perfectionist touch. Whenever she held a trophy aloft, I felt a surge of pride so intense it was as if I were the one winning the world. I was there for every high-stakes interview, meticulously preparing her scripts so she'd never falter under the bright lights. "Is this off-shoulder pink dress too revealing?" she'd asked with a blush, and I'd spend hours ensuring she looked like a goddess. On our travels, we'd pick out matching rings, tiny tokens of a connection that felt unbreakable to me. "Wear my earrings, they suit your outfit today," she'd say softly, her fingers brushing against my skin as she shared her most precious things. She relied on me for everything, even the secrets and fears she didn't dare tell her own parents. Our families eventually became one, sharing meals and laughter as if our combined future was already a certainty. I watched with tears of joy as she was chosen as the only disciple of the most famous teacher in the country. Her music filled the room as she practiced under that strict guidance, her fingers dancing across the keys while I watched in awe. But as the next big award ceremony loomed, a strange shift began to occur in the air between us. She'd send me messages late at night, her words filled with a vulnerability that she only ever showed to me. I clutched my phone to my chest, moved by her belief that she couldn't have achieved any of this without my help. Our intimacy was unrivaled, a secret world built just for the two of us, or so I thought. But then, a friend from my circle asked for a simple introduction, and I, in my naivety, agreed. I brought that girl into our lives, never suspecting the darkness she carried behind her friendly smile. It didn't take long for her to start weaving a web of lies, determined to sow discord and tear us apart. "Tang Bao, you're so beautiful, though this amber bracelet is too cheap for you," she'd sneer, insulting my gifts while tightening her grip on Tang Bao's hand. Suddenly, Tang Bao was always too busy to see me, and the distance between us began to feel like a vast, cold canyon. By the time I realized how scheming that girl truly was, she had already dug her claws in too deep to be easily removed. The ultimatum was cold and cruel. If we tried to fire her, she would expose our relationship to the entire world and ruin everything. We stood there, hands clasped tightly as we watched our peace walk away, knowing our lives were about to change forever. "No, your career is growing. You can't be affected now," I whispered, realizing we had to keep our distance to save her. I walked away with tears streaming down my face, but in my heart, I knew I could never truly let her go. To protect her from the scandal, I orchestrated a desperate plan, posing for fake wedding photos with our friend Henry. If the rumors ever leaked, I was prepared to announce a marriage to him just to shield her from the public's judgment. We even shared a bittersweet laugh that day with the crew, pretending everything was normal while my heart was breaking inside. But now those very photos have been suddenly exposed, and I fear we've walked straight into a trap. My breath catches in my throat as I realize how high the stakes have become and how much I stand to lose. Phoebe listens intently to the long tale, her expression turning grim as she realizes how complicated this web truly is. I lean back in the car seat, my voice heavy with the harsh reality that in the entertainment industry, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. The cold, glass facade of the GMG Group headquarters looms over the city like a silent titan, but inside a corporate storm is brewing. The air in the executive suite is thick with a suffocating tension as the news breaks. In a mere 2 weeks, the mysterious Oz Corporation has systematically devoured the shares of every minor stakeholder. One of the directors clenches his jaw, his eyes flashing with a mix of fear and fury as he warns the room that such a rapid, aggressive acquisition can only mean one thing: they are being hunted. Using Ren adjusts her glasses, her gaze sharp and calculating as she realizes that if Oz Corporation gains just a sliver more ground, they will hold the ultimate power to veto every decision the board makes. The numbers are a ticking time bomb, with the assistant revealing that they are currently sitting at 29.7%, dangerously close to the 34% threshold that spells total disaster. Using Ren's expression remains an unreadable mask of iron, though the stakes have never been higher. Beside her, the woman in red feels the weight of the entire company pressing down on her, a single bead of sweat tracing her temple, as she realizes her 5% stake is now the only thing standing between them and total collapse. Sensing the girl's trembling resolve, Ren reaches out, her hand landing firmly on her shoulder in a rare, grounding show of solidarity. "You can rest assured," she murmurs, her voice a low, steady anchor in the rising tide of panic. "I am on your side." A small, fragile smile touches the girl's lips as she looks up, whispering that those few words are the only comfort she has left in Den of Vipers. Meanwhile, the drama has spilled out of the boardroom and into the streets as a swarm of paparazzi descends upon the Kia Hotel, their lenses hungry for a glimpse of the fallen stars. Inside the suffocating silence of the hotel suite, Henry and Selina stand amidst the wreckage of their privacy, the world outside screaming for their blood. Tangbao clutches her notebook to her chest, her golden eyes wide with a mix of shock and disbelief as she tries to make sense of the corporate web they've been caught in. Henry's head hangs low, the guilt etched into the lines of his face as they discuss the impossible. Their entire agency has been snatched up by a foreign firm from country X. In the past, they only ever signed partnerships. One of the women notes, her voice trailing off as she wonders what dark secret forced the company to agree to a total acquisition this time. Selina stands tall, her white dress a stark contrast to the shadows of the room, as she demands to know why the news of her engagement to Henry was leaked at this exact moment. Henry wipes the sweat from his brow, theorizing that the new corporate overlords simply needed a bomb to announce their arrival and attract the world's attention. But Tangbao isn't buying the easy explanation, her face flushing with indignation as she points out the glaring flaw. Selina isn't even an artist under their label, so how did they even know about a secret engagement? The woman in pink crosses her arms, her voice tight with the reality of the industry, explaining that Henry is the most popular artist they have, and any scandal involving him is a guaranteed media explosion. Selina's eyes darken, her intuition screaming that they are being played by a master puppeteer. The others turn to her, the silence in the room heavy with the realization that the truth might be far more sinister than a simple PR stunt. Suddenly, the sharp, repetitive chime of the doorbell cuts through the tension, making everyone's heart skip a beat. Tangbao rushes to the door, and as it swings open, her face transforms into a mask of pure, starstruck joy. She practically glows with excitement, exclaiming that it is the greatest honor of her life to have two of the industry's legendary artists standing right in front of her. Selina doesn't let the bubbly distraction break her focus, immediately pressing Tangbao for the truth and asking if she's finally gotten to the bottom of the acquisition. Tangbao can't help herself, lunging forward to squeeze Selina in a playful, chibi-style hug of pure, nervous energy. The playfulness vanishes in an instant as Selina leans in, her voice a hushed, urgent whisper as she asks if their worst suspicions have finally been confirmed. The woman in pink watches them, her brow furrowed in total bewilderment as she demands to know what secret they're keeping from the rest of the group. Tangbao's expression turns grave, the weight of the information making her look much older as she prepares to drop the final bombshell. Henry stands silent in the background, his shadow stretching across the floor as the final pieces of the puzzle begin to click into place. It turns out the foreign Lie Group is nothing but a shell, a front for domestic giant WJJ Group, which has been pulling the strings from the shadows all along. The realization hits the room like a physical blow, leaving the man and the woman in pink frozen in a state of stunned, sweating silence. Selina's gaze softens as she looks at her friends, her heart aching as she apologizes for dragging them into the center of this corporate nightmare. But that the woman in pink just gives a weary, resilient smile, insisting that she's survived years of drama in this industry, and this is just another Tuesday for her. Selina turns away, her silhouette framed by the soft light of the room as she prepares herself for the inevitable confrontation. Every detail of the betrayal feels like a needle under her skin, but she refuses to let them see her resolve flicker for even a second. She walks slowly to the window, looking down at the sea of cars and the flashing lights of the paparazzi below, knowing the world is waiting for her to break. With a chilling, beautiful smile, she looks back at the room and declares that if they want a scandal, she's gonna give them a performance they'll never forget. The blinding flashes of the paparazzi's cameras are relentless as Selina and Henry step onto the red carpet, their faces masks a carefully maintained composure. "Henry, are you really engaged? Since when?" A reporter screams, shoving a phone forward to capture every flicker of emotion. Another journalist, sweat beading on his forehead, thrusts a microphone toward them, desperate for a soundbite that will trend by morning. "Selina, what is the relationship between you and Tangbao? And what about you and Phoebe Helen from the GMG group?" They demand, the air thick with the scent of a brewing scandal. Henry doesn't flinch, his voice steady as he promises a press conference to explain everything, though his eyes tell a far more complicated story. The crowd of reporters is a sea of grasping hands and prying lenses, all focused on the pair as they try to push through the chaos. In a moment of sheer vulnerability, Selina leans her head against Henry's shoulder, a silent plea for protection that the cameras catch in high definition. They look like a tragic couple trapped in a gilded cage as they make their way toward the waiting cars. Henry is a perfect gentleman, his hand hovering protectively over Selina's head as he helps her into the backseat, shielding her from the prying eyes of the world. While the red carpet burns with gossip, the cold, glass-walled offices of the GMG group feel like a tomb. Phoebe sits at her desk, the silence broken only by her assistant's sharp question. "What happened to you and Selina, Sean?" Phoebe looks away, her jaw tight as she insists that nothing has happened, though the way she avoids eye contact betrays her. Her assistant, a woman who knows Phoebe's heart better than anyone, suggests that perhaps Selina simply doesn't want to explain herself. I don't know. But who would hurt someone they love? The assistant asks, the words hanging heavy in the air between them. The assistant watches Phoebe closely, her own eyes filled with a mixture of pity and concern for the woman who usually seems so untouchable. Did you guys break up? She asks softly, her voice cutting through Phoebe's defenses like a knife. Phoebe's heart skips a beat, a hollow ache blooming in her chest as she realizes she isn't even sure if they were ever truly in a relationship to begin with. The assistant crosses her arms, pointing out the painful truth that despite the company facing a crisis, Selina hasn't even bothered to send a simple message. Speaking of her, I read the news, the assistant continues, her voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. She and Henry were being very affectionate in front of the reporters. The words are like a physical blow, and a single hot tear finally escapes Phoebe's eye, tracing a path through her perfect makeup. Her hand trembles as she reaches for a phone, her fingers ghosting over the cold screen as if it might burn her. There, on the display, is the undeniable proof, a photo of Selina and Henry looking every bit the happy couple. Phoebe stares at the image, her vision blurring as she sees the woman she loves leaning on another man. Suddenly, the phone vibrates in her hand, the sudden movement making her heart hammer against her ribs. It's a message from Selina, but it's far from the apology Phoebe was hoping for. It's just a cold, brief confirmation that they'll see each other in a few days. Who messaged you? What's the matter? The assistant asks, stepping closer as she senses Phoebe's world crumbling. Phoebe quickly shuts the phone off, her voice regaining its icy professional edge as she suggests they go to dinner and focus on the upcoming shareholder meeting. The assistant follows her, promising that everything will be fine and that she can be trusted to handle the fallout. Phoebe pauses, looking at the woman who has stayed by her side through everything, wondering why she is so certain of their success. Don't you see? I always want to protect you. It's no exception this time, the assistant whispers, her gaze intense and full of a hidden, burning loyalty. Phoebe lets out a shaky breath, the weight of the world feeling just a little lighter with someone in her corner. I know. Let's go, she says, turning toward the door as she prepares to face the lions waiting for her outside. As they walk, Phoebe's expression hardens into a mask of stone, her heart locking itself away. Let's not mention her. Come on, she commands, her voice a sharp blade that cuts all ties to the woman who broke her. The scene shifts as night falls over Phoebe's sprawling, lonely villa. Inside, a magnificent feast is spread out, the table groaning under the weight of expensive delicacies. Phoebe sits at the head of the table, her presence commanding the room even as her mind wanders to a red carpet miles away. A young girl at the table sighs, noting that they haven't all eaten together like this since their father passed away. Phoebe's the busiest one, a man adds with a knowing smirk. She has to handle the group's affairs and her lover at the same time. Phoebe doesn't miss a beat, raising her glass with a forced, elegant smile. Well, let's drink first, she says, the red wine shimmering like blood in the light of the chandelier. The cold glass facade of the GMG Group headquarters looms over the city like a monument to corporate greed and hidden agendas. Inside the hallowed halls of power, the atmosphere is suffocatingly tense as the board members gather for a meeting that feels more like a funeral for the old guard. Every seat at the mahogany table represents a fragment of a crumbling empire, and the air is thick with the scent of expensive perfume and desperate ambition. Yoo-hoo Helen leans back in his chair with a smug, self-satisfied smirk, his eyes glinting behind his glasses as he dismisses the absence of a certain key player. She's not an important stakeholder anyway. He sneers, his voice dripping with condescension. It doesn't matter if she attends or not. His associate offers a sharp, knowing grin, their shared confidence acting as a shield against the brewing storm. The purpose of this meeting is to welcome Oz as our new shareholder, the man adds, his eyes narrowing. It's best if she's not here, but the universe has a funny way of shattering such arrogance. Just as the words leave his lips, the heavy boardroom doors fly open with a thunderous crash that makes several shareholders jump in their seats. Framed by the bright light of the hallway, a silhouette stands tall and defiant, her presence immediately commanding the room's oxygen. Selina glides toward her seat with the lethal grace of a predator, a chillingly beautiful smile playing on her lips. Sorry, I'm late, she purrs, her voice sending a cold shiver down Yoo-hoo's spine. The representative Oz Corporation offers a polite, calculated nod, his eyes tracing the sudden shift in power as Selina takes her place at the table. Phoebe Helen watches from across the room, her gaze sharp and suspicious, her red-lined eyes searching for any sign of weakness in Selina's impeccable armor. The representative clears his throat, his tone turning clinical as he begins to dismantle the current status quo. We want to make adjustments to some of GMG Group's current businesses, he states firmly, specifically the media business under Mr. Yoo-hoo. Yoo-hoo's face turns a violent shade of red as he slams his hand against the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. As a newbie on the board, you want to interfere with the group's business. He roars, his composure finally snapping. Such mindless thinking, the O's representative doesn't even flinch, his voice remaining as smooth as glass. Mr. Yoo-hoo, calm down. This is just a discussion, he says, though his eyes remain icy. Your media business accounts for a large portion of the group, but the income is far less than that of the WJ Group. The representative leans in, the lighting catching the sharp edge of his jaw as he delivers the killing blow. We don't think GMG should compete in this area. especially when it comes to bidding for the International Film Festival. Yuhu's breath hitches, his eyes darting around the room as he realizes his fortress is being besieged from within. I have never thought about this as a competition. He stammers, his sweat-beaded brow betraying his internal panic. Phoebe's voice cuts through the noise, cold and sharp. I want to know, how are you going to oppose it? She challenges, her arms crossed defiantly. The representative offers a predatory smile that doesn't reach his eyes. We don't have a veto right at this point, he concedes. But if our shares exceed 34%, we'll get the one-vote veto. Selina's eyes sparkle with a dangerous light, her silence more terrifying than any shout as she watches her enemies squirm. Why do you think you can acquire more than 34%? The representative asks, a flicker of genuine fear finally crossing his face. Are you going to buy the 5% from Ms. Ren? A bead of sweat rolls down his temple, his mask of professional indifference melting under the heat of the confrontation. The board members exchange frantic whispers, the weight of the impending coup hanging over them like a guillotine. Selina finally speaks, her voice a calm melody that silences the room. 3% of the minor shareholders' shares are in my hands now, she reveals, placing a slender hand on the documents before her. The Oz representative looks like he's seen a ghost, his eyes wide with the realization that he has been completely outplayed. One of the women on the board trembles, her voice high and strained as she insists that her shares are absolutely not for sale. Beneath the table, a hand reaches out to grasp a sleeve in a silent plea for stability, the physical touch a stark contrast to the cold, calculating words being exchanged above. The room is a portrait of psychological warfare, with every character trapped in a web of their own making. Yuhu's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred as he spits out a final warning. Your foolishness will ruin the group sooner or later. He storms out of the room, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his wounded pride. Selina watches him go, her gaze unwavering as she prepares to drop the final bombshell. I think I need to tell the truth, she says, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. She looks around the table, her eyes locking onto each shareholder in turn. Does everyone remember our blueprint that was stolen when we bid for the theme park? Yuhu's face flashes through her mind, his previous arrogance a bitter memory she is about to overwrite. Yes, I accidentally dropped the blueprints back then, she admits, a small, triumphant smile touching her lips. But I did it on purpose. The revelation hits the room like a physical blow, leaving the remaining board members gasping for air. Yuhu's face, seen in a brief flashback, is a study in shock as he realizes the depth of the trap he walked into. Selina's eyes burn with a fierce, brilliant light, her beauty and intellect merging into a force of nature. In the end, if the Regulatory Commission hadn't found out the rivals' financial problems, we wouldn't have won, she explains, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She leans forward, her gaze intensifying as she prepares to reveal the evidence that will seal their fate. The evidence in this hard drive shows. Phoebe Helen's eyes widen in alarm as she stares at the small device, her hand frozen in place as the true scope of Selina's revenge is finally unveiled. Phoebe's eyes were heavy with an exhaustion that went deeper than just a lack of sleep, her voice a mere ghost of its former strength as she declared that this incident was finally over. Selina's world seemed to tilt on its axis, her breath hitching as a look of pure, unadulterated shock washed over her face. Unable to believe the coldness in her friend's tone, the man across from them adjusted his glasses, his gaze sharp and piercing as he demanded to know if she had forgotten the secret truths shared over their dinner. He watched her closely, the air in the room turning thick and suffocating as he waited for a reaction that never came. He let out a frustrated sigh, his brow furrowing as he realized that the woman standing before him was no longer the one he could easily manipulate. Selina couldn't take the silence anymore, her voice rising to a shrill pitch as she pointed a trembling finger, accusing Phoebe of protecting the very person who had set out to ruin them. Memories of the betrayal flooded back into the room, the poisoned cigarettes and the constant, biting malice that had been directed at Selina since the very first day they met. Her eyes blazed with a desperate, tearful fire as she shouted about the hacked servers and the data loss that had crippled her company's future. She even spoke of the stolen blueprints, her voice cracking as she described the thief Phoebe had supposedly sent to strip her of her life's work. Phoebe's eyes fluttered shut, unable to bear the weight of the accusations or the suffocating guilt of the memories they stirred. Just moments before the meeting, a hand had gripped her arm with bruising force, pulling her into the shadows of the corridor. It was him, the man who haunted her thoughts, his voice low and dangerous as he questioned why she was acting so strangely when the stakes were so high. He looked down at her with a gaze that was both cold and burning, demanding an explanation for her sudden, inexplicable change of heart. I did all of those things for you, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird as she confessed her hidden sins. His grip tightened on her wrists, pinning her against the wall as his breath fanned across her face, hot and demanding, forcing her to look at him. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his for a spark of the man she used to love, her own feelings a tangled mess of devotion and growing resentment. Why did Selina get you so easily? He growled, his face inches from hers, the dark chemistry between them crackling like a live wire in the narrow hall. He looked away for a moment, his jaw tight and his pulse racing, as if trying to restrain the impulse to pull her into a desperate embrace. Phoebe's heart sank as she realized that no matter how much she sacrificed, the distance between their souls was only growing. "I don't want to talk about anything else," she pleaded, her voice trembling as she tried to pull away from his suffocating, magnetic presence. But he wouldn't let go, his hand slamming against the wall beside her head, the sound echoing through the empty, sterile hallway. He leaned in, his lips nearly touching her ear as he whispered that he could offer her everything Selina ever had and so much more. For a fleeting second, their gazes locked in a moment of pure, raw vulnerability that made her breath hitch and her skin flush. "Let's just get in," she finally managed to choke out, a single, bitter tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. Back in the present, Selina's voice cut through the tension like a knife, her words dripping with hurt as she asked if Phoebe really wanted to protect someone who caused so much pain. Phoebe's expression remained a mask of stone, though her eyes betrayed a glimmer of agony as she asked if Selina had ever considered the hurt she herself had inflicted. Selina's mouth hung open, her mind racing to find an explanation for the chilling coldness radiating from her former companion. Finally, Phoebe couldn't take another second of the scrutiny and declared the meeting officially over, her voice echoing with finality. She turned her back on them all, ignoring the desperate, broken calls for her to stop as she walked toward the exit. Selina watched her go, the silence of the room feeling more like a funeral than a conclusion to their long-standing bond. The man in the suit stood by, his expression unreadable as he watched the dramatic collapse of their alliance from the sidelines. Left alone in the wake of the storm, Selina collapsed, her head bowing as the first sob finally broke through her defenses. She eventually made her way outside, standing like a ghost by the entrance of the GMG group as the cold evening air bit at her skin. A friend rushed to her side, her face full of concern as she asked what on earth could have happened to cause such a public breakdown. Selina could only shake her head, her eyes red and swollen as she confessed that the person she once knew had vanished completely. Her friend's eyes widened in shock, realizing that the careful plan they had constructed had crumbled into nothing but dust and betrayal. High above them, Phoebe stood at the window, a solitary figure watching the car pull away, her own silent tears falling for the life she was forced to leave behind. "Can you explain what just happened?" the woman in the glasses demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and confusion as she stared across the vast, sun-drenched office. Phoebe didn't even flinch, her gaze cool and distant as she gestured toward the window. "Look downstairs," she replied simply, her voice like ice. The weight of the silence was suffocating, and the woman in the glasses felt her heart shatter as she looked at her companion. "I am very surprised by your reaction and attitude towards Selina, Shan, and me," she whispered, her eyes searching Phoebe's for even a flicker of warmth. Phoebe stood her ground, her arms crossed in a defensive posture that spoke volumes about her current state of mind. "Surprised?" she echoed with a bitter edge. "Isn't it surprising?" The other woman's hand gripped the arm of the sofa, her knuckles turning white as she tried to steady her racing heart against the coldness in the room. Finally, the words she had kept buried for so long spilled out in a rush of desperation. You should have known about my feelings for you all these years," she confessed, her voice cracking under the strain of a decade's worth of unrequited love. Phoebe's expression remained a mask of indifference, her sharp features highlighted by the harsh afternoon light. "Well, were you surprised by the media reports about her engagement?" she asked, turning the knife in a wound she knew all too well. She closed her eyes for a moment, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to her. "Then we're both used to surprises. What happened today isn't even surprising," Phoebe stated, her voice dropping to a weary murmur as she leaned back. Beads of cold sweat broke out on the other woman's forehead as she struggled to keep up with the shifting conversation. "What do you mean?" "I don't understand," she pleaded, her vision blurring with unshed tears. Phoebe turned her back on her, staring out at the city's skyline dominated by a distant, towering spire. "Nothing. I just need to consider many things carefully." "Things between her and me and you," she trailed off, the words hanging heavy and unresolved in the air. The tension was a living thing, snapping between them as Phoebe prepared to end the conversation. "So?" the woman in the glasses asked, her voice small and desperate for any sign of hope. Phoebe adjusted her glasses, her posture rigid as she prepared to walk away. "So, let's all keep our distances and calm down. Too much talking is useless," she declared, drawing a line in the sand that felt like a death sentence to their relationship. She began to walk away, the click of her heels on the hardwood floor sounding like a countdown to a final goodbye. "I don't know if you really mean what you are saying," the woman whispered to her retreating back, her heart sinking. Phoebe paused for just a second, a flicker of something regret, perhaps crossing her face before it vanished. "But you know I'm serious about you, don't you? I got to leave now." "I'm busy," she said, her tone final and absolute as she moved toward the door. Meanwhile, across the city, the golden hour light washed over the grand facade of Rennie's home, a place that held as many secrets as it did rooms. On the balcony, two figures stood silhouetted against the burning orange of the sunset, the air thick with unspoken tension. "I think it's not that simple. Phoebe will never make such a decision," one of them mused, her voice lost to the evening wind. Selina, her long hair glowing like fire in the dying light, stared down at her phone with a heavy heart. "Really?" But she didn't explain what just happened. She sighed, the uncertainty gnawing at her very soul. Her companion, a woman with a spiked choker and a defiant glint in her eyes, gripped her phone tightly. I don't believe it. I'll call her and ask, she snapped, her patience wearing thin as she pulled up the contact list. But as she looked at the name on the screen, her thumb hesitated over the call button. If she doesn't want to explain, calling will just stir another fight. She realized, the frustration clear on her face as she lowered the device. The balcony felt smaller now, the beauty of the sunset clashing with the gloom of their situation. Then what are you going to do? She asked, turning to Selina with a look of genuine concern. Selina stood by the stairs, a single suitcase by her side, looking more fragile than she ever had before. What else can I do? Since things turned out this way, I should leave, she whispered, her decision made with a heavy finality. Her friend looked at her with wide, pained eyes, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. Yeah, I thought everything would be solved. Then she would go with you to the film festival in Italy. But Selina forced a sad, beautiful smile, though her eyes remained clouded with grief. It's okay. Work is work, she murmured, trying to convince herself as much as her friend as she clutched her coat. Below them, a white car sat waiting in the driveway, its engine idling like a heartbeat waiting for the next move. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the mansion cast a long shadow over the street as a dark car began to pull away into the twilight. Tears welled up in the younger woman's eyes as she watched the tail lights fade, feeling a sudden, sharp pang of abandonment. She jumped as a voice spoke from behind her, and she turned to see Phoebe standing there, looking as if she hadn't just upended several lives. "Sis, why are you here?" "Selina just left," she stammered, her heart racing. "I know," Phoebe replied coolly, her gaze fixed on the distance. The girl's mouth hung open in shock, her breath hitching in her throat as she realized Phoebe had planned this. Then, Phoebe walked toward the trunk of her own car, her movements precise and deliberate as she reached for a heavy bag. "This is your luggage. I can't go to Italy. You should go with her," she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. The younger sister stared into the trunk, her mind reeling from the sudden turn of events. "What do you mean? What happened at the shareholder meeting? Aren't you going to explain yourself?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. Without a word, Phoebe took her by the shoulders and practically shoved her toward the open car door with surprising strength. "It's hard to clear the air right now. Don't you trust me?" she asked, her gaze intense and unyielding as she locked eyes with her sister. The girl looked out through the glass, her face a mask of pure bewilderment and fear. "You don't need to know nor say anything. Help me take care of her. Treat this as a vacation," Phoebe insisted, her voice muffled by the window. The car lurched forward, leaving the girl to scramble for balance as she pressed her hand against the glass in a desperate plea. "Hey, sis!" she screamed, but the car was already picking up speed, whisking her away. Phoebe watched the car disappear into the night, her expression unreadable as she whispered to the empty air. "The plane is waiting for you at the airport. Pick her up." The hum of a private jet's engine serves as the backdrop for a sudden, whirlwind departure as luggage is whisked away into the hold. Selina can hardly catch her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs as she is practically hauled toward the boarding stairs. "I was about to board my flight. Why did you suddenly drag me out of the terminal?" she gasps, but Rennie only offers a mischievous, glittering look in return. There is an electric spark of spontaneity in Rennie's eyes as she explains she simply decided they needed a trip together, leaving Selina completely stunned by the audacity. With a playful but firm shove, Rennie begins ushering her friend up the stairs, ignoring the protests of propriety. Selina tries to dig her heels in, her face flushed with a mix of irritation and exhilaration as she cries out that this really isn't a good idea. But Rennie is relentless, her voice dropping to a theatrical, desperate plea as she begs Selina to just give in and accompany her. The scene shifts as the sleek vessel touches down under the bright, expansive sky of a European international airport. As they disembark, a heavy, bittersweet veil of nostalgia settles over Selina's features, her gaze lingering on the horizon. Rennie, ever observant of her friend's shifting moods, leans in close, her voice soft with genuine concern as she asks why Selina looks so heartbroken. Selina quickly masks the pain with a fragile, practiced smile, insisting she was merely lost in the echoes of past. Rennie watches her closely, sensing the unspoken stories hiding behind that blonde fringe. They descend toward the tarmac, the European air bringing back a flood of memories that Selina isn't quite ready to face. Rennie tries to lighten the heavy atmosphere, flashing a brilliant, toothy grin as she promises to take Selina to all her favorite haunts once the business of the film festival is concluded. Their temporary sanctuary is nothing short of breathtaking, a sprawling stone luxury manor, nestled against the lush green hills. Selina stands before the massive estate, her luggage forgotten at her side as she takes in the sheer scale of Rennie's family wealth. She can't help but offer a dazed, wide-eyed expression, her mind reeling at the fact that Rennie actually has a manor just waiting for them in Europe. Rennie, meanwhile, is in her element, spinning through the fragrant garden with her arms outstretched, as the stress of the journey melts away. Selina watches her, taking a deep, steadying breath and resolving to bury her ghosts deep enough to enjoy the moment. The quiet of the manor is soon replaced by the blinding flashes and prestige of the Europe International Film Festival. Selina is a vision of elegance, her golden hair cascading over a white gown as she prepares to walk the red carpet. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation as the spotlight hits the grand stage of the classical theater. A roar of applause erupts, the word "bravo" echoing through the hall as Selina stands center stage, clutching a golden award to her chest. Performers take to the stage in a blur of motion and color, celebrating the night's big winners. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, a crowning achievement for any director. Yet, as the luxury car wins through the Emerald Valleys the following day, the high of the victory seems to have vanished. Selina gazes out the window, her expression distant and clouded with a melancholy that even a prestigious award couldn't cure. Rennie takes the wheel, a knowing smirk playing on her lips as she mentions that they are heading to a place known only to the locals. Selina's brow furrows in confusion, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over her as the road begins to feel hauntingly familiar. When Rennie finally reveals their destination is a place called Benwenu, the name hits Selina like a physical blow. Her breath hitches, her eyes widening as the name of the restaurant ripples through her soul. Rennie pulls the car over, gesturing toward the horizon where the sky begins to blush with the colors of a setting sun. She leans forward, her eyes wide with excitement as she describes how the flower beds will soon be lit up to mirror the stars above. Selina remains silent, her profile etched with a profound, aching sadness that Rennie finally notices. "How do you know this place?" Rennie whispers, her playful demeanor replaced by a sharp, sudden curiosity. Selina closes her eyes, a small, tragic smile touching her lips as the memories finally break through the surface. "Yeah," she whispers, her voice trembling with the weight of a ghost. "Someone took me here a long time ago." Rennie leads the way, her voice soft as she invites Selina to join her for their meal. Selina follows, though her eyes betray a lingering hesitation as she steps into the light. A waiter welcomes them, gesturing toward a private table set perfectly for a night of secrets. They settle in across from each other, the weight of the unspoken hanging heavy in the air. Selina's gaze drops to her glass, her eyes shimmering with the sudden glint of unshed tears. "Are you all right?" Rennie asks, her concern cutting through the quiet of the room. Selina's fingers tighten around her drink, her voice trembling as she prepares to unearth a painful past. It started years ago with a simple heart on a screen, a digital spark that would soon change everything. They were worlds apart, yet every message felt like a lifeline connecting their lonely souls. Fate finally brought them together in a crowded bar during a business trip to China. In the heat of that first meeting, a single, passionate kiss sealed a destiny they weren't ready for. They hit it off instantly, walking through the night as if they'd known each other for many lifetimes. Wrapped in each other's arms, the world outside simply ceased to exist for a moment. Monthly visits became their rhythm, a beautiful routine of long-distance longing and reunions. Every moment spent in private was precious, a sanctuary built of shared whispers and soft sheets. They traveled high above the clouds, laughter echoing through the cabin of every plane they boarded. From the ancient, sun-drenched stones of the Great Wall to the playful joy of watching pandas together, they were inseparable. In Europe, they stood before masterpieces of old, though they only had eyes for one another. They skied down mountains and cycled through busy cities, living a dozen lives in a few short years. They stood side by side at weddings, the silent promise of their own future hanging in the air. Selina even met the family, sharing meals that felt like a glimpse into a permanent, blissful life. "Let's open a bar in Spain," they whispered, dreaming of a quiet life on a sun-soaked island. But the world turned cold as a global pandemic locked the borders tight and canceled their plans. Flights were grounded, and the distance that once felt manageable became an infinite, terrifying void. Tears flowed over long-distance calls that could never replace the warmth of a real touch. Finally, the message came, a heart-wrenching goodbye sent through a cold, glowing screen. Reality was a cruel master, breaking a bond that was supposed to last forever. Yet, despite the crushing pain, Selina wouldn't trade a single second of that beautiful tragedy. A collage of fading memories is all that remains of a love that burned too bright to last. Back in the present, the tears finally spill over, tracing slow paths down Selina's cheeks. Rennie watches in silence, her heart aching for the woman sitting broken across from her. "I'm fine," Selina lies, her voice a fragile thread as she tries to compose herself. Rennie realizes this restaurant isn't just a place to eat. It's a ghost of everything Selina lost. "She brought me here before," Selina admits, the confession hanging heavy between them. Rennie assumes the memories of the ex-lover are the true source of the pain. But Selina shakes her head, her gaze intensifying with a new raw energy. "It's not that this place reminds me of her," she whispers, her blue eyes searching Rennie's. Rennie freezes, the air leaving her lungs as a shocking truth settles over the table. "It's because I'm looking at her now," Selina confesses, her heart finally laid bare. The restaurant fades into the background as they sit in the heavy silence of a love rediscovered. Rennie leans in, her eyes wide with a mix of burning curiosity and a hint of hidden jealousy as she asks about the child in the photo. Selina looks away, her voice soft and trailing as she explains that it isn't her child, but the daughter of her best friend Mary and her husband, both of whom are world-renowned ballet dancers. Rennie's gaze sharpens, her heart pounding against her ribs as she presses further, her voice dropping an octave to ask if the other man in the picture is Selina's boyfriend. A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the table before Selina's expression clouds with a bittersweet melancholy, admitting that she only has eyes for girls. Reaching across the table in a moment of sudden, bold intimacy, Rennie gently covers Selina's hand with her own, the warmth of the contact sending a visible jolt through both of them. Selina's shoulders slump as she stares at their joined hands, the weight of unspoken memories and old wounds pressing down on her. Sensing the shift in the air, Rennie asks the question that's been clawing at her heart, Does Selina still love her? The question makes Selina's breath hitch as she looks up in genuine shock, her eyes searching Renee's for the source of such a raw inquiry. Renee quickly pulls back, her face flushing a deep crimson as she stammers that she only asked because Selina looked so incredibly, hauntingly sad. Deciding the atmosphere has become far too intimate to bear, Selina abruptly stands, suggesting they finally make their exit. As they walk toward the car parked under the bleeding colors of a deep sunset, the tension between them remains thick, like a cord stretched to its breaking point. Selina catches a glimpse of her phone screen, a notification lighting up the dark pocket of her bag and demanding her attention. Her heart skips a beat as she pulls the device out, her expression turning to one of sheer, pale disbelief. The message is from a contact labeled GB, asking with blunt curiosity if the friend she's currently with is actually her girlfriend. Stunned into a temporary paralysis, Selina pauses at the entrance of the cafe, the golden light of the evening doing nothing to warm the sudden chill in her blood. Meanwhile, far across the city in a cold, sterile office, the air is thick with corporate fury as orders are barked to buy back every available share from Oz Corporation regardless of the cost. A woman in a striking red dress grips her phone, her voice sharp and commanding as she demands her staff get to work immediately. Once the call ends, her facade of iron strength wavers, and her gaze drifts toward a framed photograph resting on her desk. Her thumb brushes over a message from Renee, asking when they'll be back from their travels in Europe, unaware of the storm brewing at home. She sits back in her leather chair, the oppressive silence of the office amplifying a loneliness that seems to swallow her whole. Suddenly, her phone buzzes again at 9:03, the bright screen cutting through the shadows of the room. She looks down at the device, her eyes narrowing as she prepares herself for a new crisis. With a sudden, violent motion, she recoils as if struck, her chair skidding back against the floor as her composure finally shatters. Her eyes are filled with a cold, sharp pain, the kind that only comes from a heart that has been broken one too many times. She slumps forward, her howling under the invisible pressure of her own grief. Her fingers tremble as they reach for a broken photo frame, the glass shattered across a memory of a smile she can no longer reach. She stares at the wreckage of the picture, her jaw set in a grim line of absolute despair. Back at the car, Selina tries to play it cool, shaking her head and insisting that nothing is wrong even as a cold sweat breaks out on her forehead. She tosses her phone into the side pocket of the car door, trying to bury the unanswered question from GB. Renee settles into the driver's seat, mentioning casually that her sister just texted to ask when they'll finally be heading home. Selina's eyes widen at the mention of the sister, a flicker of recognition and fear crossing her face like a lightning strike. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Selina tells Renee to go on ahead without her, claiming she still has urgent business to attend to. Renee looks back, her brow furrowed in deep confusion as she wonders what could possibly be more important than going home together. Selina stands firm by the car, the fading light of the sunset casting a long, lonely shadow as she waves Renee away, her heart heavy with secrets she isn't ready to share. The sun rose over the quiet estate the following morning, but inside the air was thick with a brewing storm. Renee stared at her phone screen, her heart hammering against her ribs as she read the scandalous headline. The richest female's new girlfriend. My sister. What on earth is she doing now? She hissed, her eyes wide with a mix of betrayal and disbelief as she clutched the device. From the balcony, she watched a sleek white car pull away, the tires crunching against the gravel like a bad omen. Down on the driveway, Selina stood with a mysterious woman, her expression unreadable under the bright, mocking sky. Renee didn't waste a second, rushing down the stairs to confront her, her voice trembling as she demanded to know where Selina had disappeared to the night before. Selina just stood there, the picture of calm, watching the younger girl approach with a face full of suspicion and hurt. Was it a gathering, or did something actually happen between you and her? Renee pressed, her breath hitching as she searched Selina's face for even a flicker of a lie. Selina sighed and pulled her into a soft, reassuring embrace, murmuring that they were simply catching up on their lives. She pulled back just enough to look Renee in the eye, a playful yet guarded glint in her gaze as she asked, "What? Do you still not trust me?" Renee bit her lip, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears as she mentioned the shocking news involving her sister and the woman from the car. Selina's brow furrowed, her voice turning sharp and cold as she demanded, "What news?" The atmosphere shifted instantly, the warmth of the morning replaced by a chilling realization that things were spiraling out of her control. "Why are you taking my phone?" Renee cried out, clutching the device to her chest as Selina reached for it with an ironclad, desperate grip. Selina didn't answer, her gaze hardening into something unrecognizable and cold as she focused entirely on the screen. With a swift, forceful motion, she snatched the phone away, her knuckles white with the intensity of her grip. "I see," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she stared at the digital evidence of her secret being laid bare to the world. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead, her vision blurring as the weight of the situation began to crush her very spirit. Suddenly, Selina's knees buckled and she swayed dangerously, sending Renee into a full-blown panic. Her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, her eyes reflecting a deep-seated pain that she had been trying so hard to hide from everyone. She forced herself to turn away, dragging her heavy feet toward the house while Renee followed close behind, terrified of the sudden change. Their companion by the car waved a cheerful goodbye, completely oblivious to the silent agony unfolding just a few feet away. Rennie could only manage a weak, trembling wave back, her mind spinning with 1,000 questions she was too afraid to ask. "Pack your bags," Selina commanded, her voice sounding hollow and drained. "We're leaving the day after tomorrow." Rennie watched her walk away, a sense of dread pooling in her stomach as she whispered, "Selina, what are you going to do?" Images of Selina and that woman flashed through her mind, a ghost of a memory that felt like a knife to her heart. As they finally drove away, a hand waved from the window, signaling the end of their brief, chaotic stay. 2 days later, they found themselves at an international airport in Europe. The sprawling terminal a cold reminder of how far they were running. Inside the luxury of their private cabin, Selina leaned back and closed her eyes, telling Rennie not to overthink the situation. But Rennie couldn't help it. She watched the woman she loved, realizing that Selina never offered explanations, only more mysteries. Her eyes narrowed with a newfound resolve, her heart hardening against the silence that stood like a wall between them. "You and Yuzheng Ren, it's impossible," Rennie declared, her voice ringing with a certainty that she didn't truly feel deep down. Selina didn't even look at her, her profile etched in the soft light of the cabin as she asked, "Why are you so sure about that?" Outside, the sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the tarmac where their plane waited. They climbed the stairs in silence, the engines beginning to roar like a beast waking from its slumber. Halfway up the stairs, Selina stopped, her hand flying to her head as a wave of intense dizziness overcame her. "Rennie, don't tell your sister," she managed to choke out, her face turning as pale as death in the twilight. Rennie's scream echoed across the runway as she saw Selina's eyes roll back into her head. Before she could reach her, Selina's strength gave out completely, and she collapsed onto the hard metal stairs, leaving Rennie alone in the fading light. Rennie's voice is trembling as she shakes the limp, unresponsive body beside her. Selina, are you okay? Wake up," she cries out, her heart hammering against her ribs as she stares at her friend's pained, ghostly pale face. She leans forward, her voice sharp with a jagged edge of desperation as she screams at the driver, "Hurry up! Go to the hospital." Outside, the car screeches to a violent halt at the emergency entrance, where a medical team is already waiting with a gurney, ready to snatch Selina from the jaws of the darkness that has claimed her. The wheels of the gurney clatter rhythmically against the sterile, white floor as they rush Selina deep into the hospital, her blonde hair spilling over the pillow like frayed silk. Rennie is left behind in the heavy, silent corridor, staring at the glowing red sign of the operating room while clutching her phone with white-knuckled intensity. Her mind is a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Selina had begged her not to tell her sister before she slipped away, and the weight of that secret feels like lead in her chest. She bites her lip, trying to blink back hot tears, deciding she will simply have to wait until Selina is conscious to demand the truth. Hours of agonizing silence pass until finally, the heavy doors swing open and a nurse wheels Selina into a private ward, her condition stabilized but her strength clearly depleted. Rennie rushes to the bedside, her eyes wide with lingering terror as she whispers, "Selina, you scared me to death. Are you okay?" Selina's eyelids flutter open, her gaze hazy and unfocused as she struggles to find her voice in the quiet, clinical room. Rennie leans in close, her breath hitching as she reassures her friend that she kept her promise and only called her assistant, Amy, who is already rushing to the hospital. A faint, weary smile touches Selina's lips as she rests her head back against the pillow, the monitor's steady beep the only sound in the room. The medical staff finish their final checks and leave the two women alone, the morning sun beginning to peek through the ward's large window. Selina's voice is barely a whisper as she admits that she hasn't been feeling well for a while, blaming her collapse on the crushing weight of overwork and the chaos of recent events. Rennie's heart sinks as she listens, her brow furrowed with a deep, knowing concern for the woman she cares so much about. Selina explains that she had passed out once before during a gathering, and a private examination had revealed a terrifying reality. Rennie listens intently, her face losing what little color it had as she realizes the gravity of the situation they are truly facing. The toxins haven't been removed completely, Selina confesses, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears as she explains that her previous illness has relapsed with a vengeance. Rennie gasps, her voice breaking as she asks the question she is terrified to hear the answer to. Can it be cured completely? Selina looks away, suggesting that once the urgent business in Hongo is settled, she will have to disappear to Europe for long-term treatment. Rennie's eyes widen in absolute shock, unable to believe that Selina would plan to leave everything and everyone behind. But Selina's resolve is like iron. She refuses to give up, insisting that her heart will be at unease if she doesn't finish what she started. A pained expression crosses her face, betraying the deep vulnerability hidden beneath her professional mask. Rennie leans in, her voice hushed with a sudden, sharp realization, asking if Selina is actually trying to avoid her sister by fleeing the country. Selina doesn't answer directly, her gaze drifting as she pleads with Rennie to keep her condition a secret from her family. Rennie stares at her, the conflict visible in her eyes as she wonders if she can truly keep such a dangerous secret for her friend's sake. Suddenly, the door clicks open and a woman steps into the ward to check on the patient. Meanwhile, as the sun sets in a blood-orange hue over the luxurious Yuzheng Ren's villa, a very different kind of drama is unfolding behind closed doors. Inside, Ms. Ren sits with her arms crossed, her expression cold and calculating as a man stands before her, arguing that their current situation is far from what they agreed upon. Ms. Ren doesn't flinch, her voice smooth as she admits she severely underestimated Selina Shan's hidden abilities. The man's face is tight with frustration as he warns that GMG is now determined to suppress OZ Corporation entirely. He sets his teacup down with a sharp, ringing clack, the sound echoing in the tense, opulent room. He insists that their only move now is to retreat and sell their shares back to GMG, before they lose everything. Ms. Ren peers at him through her glasses, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass as she weighs her options in silence. The man senses her hesitation and pushes harder, questioning why her attitude toward the chairman of GMG has changed so drastically. Ms. Ren's eyes narrow, a flash of genuine anger crossing her face as he mentions the scandalous rumors of an affair. The man stands his ground, his expression grim as he reminds her that a scandal could destroy their partnership forever. Ms. Ren snaps at him, her voice dripping with ice as she tells him to mind his own business, instead of her personal affairs, unaware that the media has already begun to tear her reputation apart. High above the city, the cold glass of the GMG Group headquarters reflects a sky filled with deceptive calm. Inside the sterile walls of the meeting room, the air is thick with the suffocating scent of high-stakes corporate warfare. A man in a pristine lab coat, his hands trembling slightly, leans over the table to sign a document that could change everything. Across the polished mahogany, the paperwork is slid forward, a silent testament to a deal that was finalized far too easily. Helen sits with her eyes half closed, a predator savoring a victory as she reminds the room that their rivals never truly intended to hold those shares for long. The man's face pales, a single bead of sweat rolling down his temple as he whispers a desperate plea for her to keep her voice down. Without a word of comfort, Helen stands and reaches across the table, sealing the arrangement with a handshake that feels more like a death warrant than a partnership. "Well, Miss Helen, see you again then," the man stammers, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape from her intense gaze. As the heavy doors swing open, the group files out of the boardroom, leaving behind the lingering tension of their secret transaction. Helen strides down the opulent corridor, her heels clicking rhythmically against the stone until she reaches her office door. She pauses, her sharp eyes narrowing as she senses a presence waiting for her in the shadows. "Why are you here? When did you guys come back?" she demands, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade as she spots a familiar figure. Her sister peers over the back of a plush chair, her crimson eyes wide with a mix of surprise and hidden anxiety. Ignoring the pleasantries, Helen's heart begins to race as she asks the only question that matters. "How about Selina? Where is she now? Is she okay?" The younger woman shifts uncomfortably, trying to steer the conversation back to business by asking if the Oz Corporation mess has finally been settled. "Yes, I've solved it. It's just a farce," Helen replies dismissively, her mind clearly elsewhere as she sits across from her sibling. The sister leans forward, her gaze intensifying as she asks if Helen is truly prepared to dig into the dark secrets behind the incident. A chilling smile touches Helen's lips, her expression darkening with a vengeful promise as she vows that the mastermind will not escape her reach. Her sister looks away, a blue aura of distress surrounding her as she asks why Helen remains so close to the very person she should be destroying. "You don't get it, I know what I'm doing," Helen states coldly, her face a mask of iron determination. "You know what you're doing. Do you know that Selina—" her sister shouts, her voice cracking with the weight of the secret she's been carrying. Helen's breath hitches, her composure fracturing as she snaps. What's up with her? The world seems to shatter when her sister finally cries out. "I'm here to tell you that Selina suffered from a relapse. She's in the hospital now." The color drains from Helen's face, her eyes widening in absolute horror as the word "what?" escapes her lips in a strangled gasp. Her sister's gaze softens with pity, admitting that Selina begged her not to tell. But the situation had become too dire to keep hidden. Panic, raw and unfiltered, surges through Helen as she surges to her feet, demanding to know exactly which hospital is holding her friend. She learns that Selina had collapsed the day before and, despite her condition, has been stubbornly fighting the doctors to be discharged. She's still so childish. "We can't let her mess around with her health," Helen growls, her business suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket as she prepares to bolt. Her sister watches her go, a look of profound bewilderment on her face as she wonders if her sister is finally losing her grip on reality. Helen doesn't care about appearances anymore. She sprints into the parking lot, her lungs burning with every frantic breath. She throws her car into gear, the tires screaming against the concrete and leaving a cloud of acrid smoke in her wake. While weaving through the city streets at breakneck speeds, she frantically taps the touchscreen on her dashboard. "Hello, come to the group's hospital. I want to talk to you," she commands the moment the line connects, her voice trembling with urgency. On the other end, Yuzing Ren pauses, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he asks with sharp suspicion why they are meeting at a hospital. Helen swerves into the fast lane, her car a blur of black metal as she explains that Selina has fallen ill and there is no time to waste. Ren's eyes narrow behind his glasses, his expression shifting from cool indifference to a flicker of genuine alarm. "Go there quickly. I'm hanging up now," Helen snaps, her face set in a mask of grim, desperate resolve. She slams the car into a stop and leaps out, sprinting across the pavement toward the entrance as the sound of a distant, warning horn blares through the air. The world spins into a blur of asphalt and screeching metal as the silence of the afternoon is shattered by a sickening metallic crunch. The motorcyclist can only stare in paralyzed horror, his heart hammering against his ribs as he realizes the gravity of the chaos he's just caused. On the hard pavement, Phoebe collapses, her breath hitching as a searing, white-hot agony radiates from her mangled leg, the crimson stain spreading rapidly against her suit. From high above, the intersection looks like a cold, indifferent stage where a tragedy has just unfolded in the blink of an eye. Inside a nearby car, her friend's eyes widen in absolute terror, her hands trembling violently against the steering wheel as she witnesses the nightmare. She doesn't even wait for the engine to stop before she's throwing the door open and sprinting toward the wreckage, her heart in her throat. "Phoebe? Phoebe, talk to me. Are you all right?" she cries out, her voice cracking with a desperation that echoes through the crowded street. Phoebe can barely focus through the haze of pain, her face pale as she whispers through gritted teeth that her ankle feels like it's been shattered into 1,000 pieces. Fury boils over in her friend's veins as she lunges for the motorcyclist, grabbing him by the collar with a strength born of pure protective rage. "You absolute dumbass. Look at what you've done to her," she screams, her eyes flashing with a lethal intensity. But even in her agony, Phoebe reaches out a trembling hand, her voice soft but firm as she tries to shield the man from the blame. "Stop. It wasn't his fault. I was the one in a rush," she gasps, her selflessness cutting through the tension like a knife. The sunlight glints off the shattered glass and the cold metal of the car mirror, a grim reminder of how quickly a life can change. Someone in the gathering crowd recognizes her, their voice hushed with shock as they realize the victim is none other than the prominent Miss Helen. Chaos erupts as the medical team arrives, the bright red of the traffic light casting a macabre glow over the frantic scene. Back at the hospital, the air is thick with the scent of antiseptic and unspoken fear. "I heard Rennie sent Selina Shan here yesterday. Tell me, how is she?" A doctor asks, his brow furrowed with professional concern. The nurses exchange a grim, silent look, their slow head shakes speaking volumes of the complications they're facing behind closed doors. When the doctor approaches Phoebe, his voice is urgent, insisting that they must stabilize her injury before she loses consciousness from the shock. But Phoebe is a woman possessed, her eyes burning with a feverish need that transcends her own physical pain. "I don't care about my leg. Where is Selina? You have to take me to her right now," she demands, her voice rising in a frantic plea. Her red-haired friend places a grounding hand on her shoulder, trying to soothe the rising hysteria. "Phoebe, please. You're bleeding. Let them help you first, and I promise I'll go check on her for you," she whispers, her heart breaking for her friend's distress. The doctor's expression is stern, his patience wearing thin as he warns her that being reckless now could cost her the ability to walk. A sharp, jagged cry escapes Phoebe's lips as they finally move her, the bone-deep ache of the fracture forcing her to confront her own fragility. As they begin to wheel her toward the trauma room, she looks back one last time, her eyes locking onto her friends. "Don't leave. Wait for me here. There are things I have to tell you," she murmurs, her voice fading as the morphine begins to take hold. She watches the ceiling tiles blur past, the weight of her secrets feeling heavier than the cast they're about to put on her. Hours crawl by like days until the doctor finally emerges, his face weary as he delivers the news of a severe dislocation and multiple fractures. Phoebe's friend listens with a cold, focused mask, her mind already racing 10 steps ahead. "I understand. Now leave us," she commands, her voice like ice as she dismisses the medical staff. She turns back to the bed, her expression softening only slightly. "I've already called Rennie. She's on her way." "Phoebe, you were so incredibly careless," she chides, though her voice trembles with relief. Phoebe stares at the sterile walls, a single tear escaping as she admits that her worry for Selina had blinded her to everything else. "By the way," her friend adds, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses, "what was it you were so desperate to tell me over the phone?" Meanwhile, at the hospital entrance, another drama is unfolding as a nurse tries to block Selina's path. "Miss Selina, you absolutely cannot leave. Miss Rennie gave us strict orders to keep you under observation," she exclaims, her voice fluttering with anxiety. Selina doesn't even break her stride, her golden hair shimmering like a flame as she stares the nurse down with chilling authority. "I'll deal with Rennie myself." "Move out of my way," she snaps, her presence commanding and cold. She marches toward the waiting car, her every movement radiating a dangerous, restless energy. A companion catches up to her, her voice hushed as she asks the question that's been lingering in the air. "You're moving so fast. Did you actually call Rennie and get permission?" The nurse can only watch in stunned silence, her mouth agape as she realizes she's powerless to stop the storm that is Selina Shan. Amy, waiting by the vehicle, looks up with a start. "Selina, are you really demanding a discharge again? You know how dangerous this is," she warns. Selina's eyes are like flint as she barks out a single order. "Amy, get in the car and drive." Now, she stands there, a figure of defiant beauty against the backdrop of the hospital, insisting that she has business that cannot wait for the whims of doctors. Her gaze is haunted, a flicker of something deeply unsettled dancing in the depths of her eyes as she contemplates her next move. "I'm not here to play the victim this time," she whispers to herself, her jaw set in a hard line of determination. She turns to her sister, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur as she reveals the lie she's woven. "I told her you were the one who was ill. I had to get her here," she admits. She reaches out, her fingers digging into the other woman's arm with a desperate, bruising grip. The final blow lands with a sickening thud of realization. Phoebe was hit by a car, Selina. She was coming to see you, and now she's the one fighting for her life in the ward upstairs. She reveals, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Selina's heart hammers against her ribs, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the terrifying news of the accident finally sinks in. Her friend tries to offer a small, reassuring smile, explaining that while the car hit was a shock, it only resulted in a manageable ankle fracture and a plaster cast. But Selina isn't waiting for a full medical report. She bursts into a desperate sprint, her footsteps echoing wildly through the sterile white corridors. A startled nurse points toward the elevators, informing her that the VIP ward is located on the exclusive top floor. Watching Selina disappear around the corner, her friend sighs with a mix of sadness and admiration, marveling at how deeply these two truly care for one another. Inside the quiet of the VIP suite, the atmosphere is thick enough to choke on as the man in glasses looms over the hospital bed. The woman resting there looks up with eyes like flint, her voice cold as she asks why he's bringing up their past conversations now. He stares back, his expression unreadable behind his lenses, demanding to know what she's implying. She doesn't flinch, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as she reveals she knows every single one of his dirty secrets, especially the ones targeting Selina. He tries to stammer out a denial, his composure beginning to crumble, but she cuts him off with a look of pure disdain. The shadows of his past deeds begin to crawl out of the dark, starting with the night he hired thugs to break into the server room and sabotage Selina's hard work. She knows he didn't stop there, having tracked his secret acquisition of a media company, just to leak Selina's private engagement to the vultures. But the true horror lies in the small, lethal packages he sent, cigarettes laced with metal toxins designed to slowly poison the woman he viewed as a rival. Caught in the web of his own malice, he can only stare at her in shock, his voice trembling as he asks how she could possibly know all of this. She shifts slightly, the movement sharp and painful, as she explains that her investigators were thorough, and that she's seen every piece of evidence. Her gaze drops, a flicker of genuine sorrow crossing her face as she contemplates the depth of his betrayal. She looks him dead in the eye, asking he was also the mastermind behind the leak of Selina's most precious designs. She remembers the close calls, like the time Selina only saved a vital project because her friend Giagia intervened with the banking commission. She had known someone was hunting Selina from the shadows since that very moment, and the trail led straight back to him. She recalls the dinner she shared with Yuhu, where she carefully extracted the truths he had been hiding. It was those very truths that kept Yuhu from siding with him during the cutthroat OZ Corporation operation. The man's face twists with a bitter realization, his eyes darkening as he understands that his sister has been 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. She sighs, her voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and heartbreak as she asks why. After everything, she still feels a shred of closeness to him. He can only look away, the weight of his guilt pressing down on his shoulders like lead. For a fleeting second, a memory of the kindness he once showed her flickers through the air, a ghost of the brotherly bond they used to share. Unbeknownst to them, Selina has reached the door, her hand frozen on the handle as she listens to the devastating conversation inside. She stands paralyzed in the sliver of the doorway, hearing the man confess that he only did it because he didn't want to lose her to someone else. Tears well up in Selina's eyes, shimmering with a pain that goes deeper than any physical wound. Slowly, her fingers lose their strength, and she releases the doorknob as her world falls apart in silence. She turns away, stifling a sob with her hand as she flees the ward, unable to face the monsters lurking behind that door. Inside, the man remains delusional, insisting that his greed for the company's shares was only so he could give them to her as a gift. He pleads with her, his voice desperate, asking if his grand gestures will finally be enough to win her heart. She looks at him with a pity that is far more painful than anger, her heart hardened by his cruelty. She tells him flatly that while she might forgive a blow to her company, she will never, ever forgive what he did to Selina. He leans in close, his voice cracking as he asks why she would be so foolish as to hurt herself just to protect a woman like Selina. She doesn't answer at first, her gaze distant as she admits that her own plans were cut short when Selina's health took a sudden turn for the worse. She wanted to settle the score once and for all before she ever had to look Selina in the eye again. When he tries one last time to claim his love for her, she scoffs, telling him they both know that his love is nothing more than a poisonous obsession. The tension is shattered when Yuhu enters the room, rushing to his sister's side with a look of intense worry. She tries to put on a brave face for him, whispering that she's fine, though her eyes tell a different story. Suddenly, their friend bursts through the door, her eyes wide with panic as she looks around the empty space. She gasps out the news that she saw Selina at the entrance, and that the girl had rushed up here the moment she heard about the injury. The woman in the bed pales, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Selina heard everything. Inside the sterile, quiet walls of the hospital, the air was thick with a sudden, suffocating realization as Phoebe looked up, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and rising dread. When did it happen? she gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs as she realized the one person she needed most was nowhere to be found. Ignoring the sharp sting of her wounds, she gripped the edge of the cold hospital bed, her knuckles turning white as she prepared to throw herself into the hallway. Was she lost? "I have to go to her," she cried out, her breath hitching in her throat as she struggled against her own physical limits. But a firm hand pressed against her shoulder, anchoring her back to the mattress as a stern voice cut through her panic. "You'd better not move," her sister Rennie commanded, her eyes flashing with a protective fire that brooked no argument. Rennie immediately pulled out her phone, her expression a mask of professional calm even as the tension in the room reached a breaking point. Nearby, Yuzing stood in a heavy, painful silence, his gaze fixed on the floor as the weight of his own failures crashed down upon him. He whispered brokenly about having no chance left, his pride finally crumbling in the face of a love he couldn't grasp. Phoebe looked at him with a pity that cut deeper than any insult, her voice soft, but final as she told him he still had a chance at happiness, just not with her. The silence that followed was agonizing, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor as Phoebe confronted him about the resentment he had harbored for so long. "I thought you detested Selina because she took Danny's place," she stated plainly, watching the color drain from his face. She spoke of the past he thought was buried, of the bitter fights, and the ultimatum he had once given his former flame. Yuzeng could only stare at her through his glasses, his eyes wide with shock and a creeping sense of guilt as she laid his heart bare. Phoebe didn't stop, her voice gaining strength as she accused him of using her simply to prove a point to a woman who had already moved on. He tried to find the words to defend himself, but the truth was a jagged pill he couldn't swallow. With a weary sigh, Phoebe reached out and gently took his hand, offering him a friendship that felt more like a final goodbye to the romance he had imagined. The moment was shattered when the door swung open and a younger, more volatile Rennie burst in, her eyes scanning the room with frantic energy. Phoebe's head snapped toward her, her voice a desperate plea as she demanded to know where Selina had gone. The younger girl hesitated, her voice small as she dropped the bombshell that Selina had overheard everything and fled in a fit of heartbreak. Fury erupted in the room as the younger sister turned her wrath on Yuzeng, accusing him of being the poison that ruined their family. Yuzeng stood frozen, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow as the accusations rained down him like stones. Phoebe sank back into her pillows, her eyes filling with tears as she realized the magnitude of the misunderstanding. "She's on her way to the airport," the younger Rennie revealed, her voice trembling with the weight of the news. "She said she's flying straight to Europe." The words were like a physical blow to Phoebe, who surged upward again, her face pale and her eyes wild with the thought of losing Selina forever. But the elder Rennie stepped forward, her white suit gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights as she blocked Phoebe's path with absolute authority. Phoebe looked up at her elder sister, her expression one of pure, bewildered shock as she realized Rennie was serious about taking control. A slender hand reached out, gripping Phoebe's arm with a strength that was both a comfort and a command. "Don't worry," Rennie whispered, leaning down until her lips were mere inches from Phoebe's ear, her voice a low, magnetic hum. "I'll make her stay for you this time. Trust me." With one last lingering look of intense resolve, Rennie turned on her heel and strode out of the room, the click of her heels echoing like a countdown. High above the city, the roar of jet engines signaled the start of a desperate race against time as planes ascended into the bright, indifferent blue of the afternoon sky. The airport was a chaotic hive of activity, a sea of cars and travelers all moving toward their own destinations, while Phoebe's heart hung in the balance. Down at the curb, a driver looked at Rennie in confusion, wondering why she was suddenly departing with such frantic haste. Rennie didn't waste a second on explanations, her face a mask of cold determination as she hauled her luggage toward the terminal. When asked when she might return, she could only offer a vague, haunting reply that she didn't know, perhaps soon, or perhaps not for a very long time. She gave one final set of instructions, her voice sharp and clear, before disappearing into the throng of travelers. Inside the vast, echoing halls of the international terminal, she checked the departures, her eyes searching for the one gate that mattered. She moved through the crowd like a predator on a mission, her gaze cutting through the blur of faces until she spotted a familiar shock of hair. "Selina," she called out, her voice cutting through the airport's white noise with the force of a command. Selina spun around, her eyes wide and rimmed with red, her breath hitching as she saw the woman standing before her. For a long, silent moment, the world seemed to stop as the two women locked eyes, the air between them thick with unspoken apologies and a raw, bleeding tension. The morning sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of brilliant sapphire and gold as a new day dawned over Wuyu City. High above the bustling streets, the glass towers of the metropolis reflected the light, a silent testament to the millions of stories unfolding within their walls. Selina felt a jolt of pure adrenaline as she read the news, her heart racing at the realization that her favorite global musical tour was finally arriving in her city. She didn't hesitate for a second, clutching her phone to her ear as she beamed with joy, telling her friend on the other end, "Sure, let's go together." Pure, unadulterated happiness radiated from her as she kicked her feet in the air, the simple prospect of the show making her feel more alive than she had in months. The days that followed were a blur of anticipation, the clouds drifting lazily across a sky that seemed to share in her quiet excitement. Finally, the big night arrived, and the grand theater doors opened to reveal a world of elegance and hushed whispers. Selina and her companion leaned in close to one another in the darkened auditorium, the air between them thick with the shared thrill of the opening act. As the final notes of the performance echoed through the hall and the stage glowed with a warm, lingering light, Selina knew it was a night she would never forget. "Quick, take a picture of me," she laughed, flashing a peace sign as she tried to immortalize the glow of the evening in a single frame. The next morning, the city was bathed in a soft, ethereal light, the view from above showing a world slowly waking up to the grind of daily life. Selina, however, was preoccupied, her brow furrowing as she stared at her phone while still wrapped in her morning robe. "Who is this? This person even left me a comment," she muttered to herself, her curiosity piqued by a notification from a complete stranger. She scrolled down to see a message from a girl named Shirley, who had commented on her photo with a mix of awe and a pointed question about how she managed to get such a perfect view. Fate had a funny way of turning digital interactions into real-world chemistry, and months later, the two were no longer strangers. They sat together in a dimly lit bar, the clink of their beer glasses punctuating a conversation that felt as natural as breathing. Selina watched Shirley with a soft smile, amazed that a random internet comment had led to a friendship that felt this profound. "I didn't think you'd actually come," Shirley confessed, her voice dropping to a shy whisper as she admitted she'd only recommended the show to have an excuse to meet. Selina recalled the sensation of being watched that night, remembering how she'd spotted Shirley's silhouette in the balcony seats above the front row. The memory of their first real meeting was vivid. Shirley, waving her arms frantically from the stairs at the end of the show, her face lit up with a desperate need to be noticed. They had bumped into each other in the chaotic surge of the crowd, a moment of pure serendipity that ended with Shirley driving her all the way home. But as their bond deepened, Selina saw the cracks in Shirley's armor, finding her friend dissolved in tears during one of their late-night heart-to-hearts. "Thank you for being with me, comforting me and offering your advice," Shirley sobbed, leaning into the warmth of Selina's shoulder as the world outside the car fell silent. Months bled into a comfortable routine until one morning Shirley stood over Selina's bed, teasing her for being a sleepyhead. Selina peered up, her vision blurry and her heart skipping a beat as she saw Shirley's face framed by the soft morning light. "Oops, I took a nap and lost track of time," she whispered, her voice husky with sleep as the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted, becoming heavy with an unspoken tension. Shirley leaned down, her gaze intensifying as she looked into Selina's eyes, the distance between them shrinking until Selina could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Selina's breath hitched, her eyes widening as Shirley's fingers grazed her jaw, a touch so light yet so electric that it sent a shiver down her spine. Their connection only grew stronger as the seasons changed, marked by shared laughter in the front seat of a car during long, aimless drives. They shared intimate meals in quiet corners of the city, their eyes constantly finding each other across the table as they fed one another's souls with secrets and dreams. They even escaped to the coast together, walking along the shoreline as the sun set, the vastness of the ocean reflecting the depth of the feelings they were beginning to navigate. But the bubble was destined to burst, and the day finally came when Shirley had to deliver the news that she was leaving for America to care for her family. "Yeah, there's no other way. I need to take care of them," Shirley said, her eyes brimming with a sorrow that mirrored Selina's own heartbreak. "What about us?" Selina asked, her voice cracking as she felt the foundation of her world start to crumble beneath her. Shirley reached out, her hand trembling as she gently stroked Selina's hair, promising that 3 years was a small price to pay for a lifetime together. They walked away from each other that night, two silhouettes moving into the darkness, the space between them filled with the echoes of a goodbye that felt like a physical wound. 3 years passed like a slow-motion dream, the city lights flickering through 1,000 nights of longing and wait. Selina stood in the familiar park, the air crisp and the moon hanging high in the sky, when a voice she had heard in her dreams every night finally spoke. "Long time no see," Shirley whispered from across the path, the glow of the street lamp illuminating the reunion they had both prayed for. The man's head hangs low, his voice thick with a heavy, suffocating regret as he pleads for her to find it in her heart to forgive him and finally reconcile with Phoebe. Selina stands frozen, the air in the terminal feeling suddenly thin as she admits that the sheer weight of everything she's just learned is almost too much for her mind to process. They stand there amidst the chaotic blur of the airport, two souls caught in a sudden, agonizing moment of indecision while the world continues to rush past them. The fragile silence is shattered when a staff member approaches, his voice urgent as he reminds Selina that if she truly intends to board her flight to Europe, she needs to move toward the gate immediately. But before she can take even a single step toward her old life, the man beside her snaps into action, shouting at the official that she won't be going anywhere today. The airport worker is left blinking in utter confusion, stuttering out a surprised confirmation as the grand plans for her departure are unceremoniously canceled. The man turns back to Selina with a knowing, almost challenging gaze, telling her that even if she tried to flee to the literal ends of the earth, she should know by now that Phoebe would never stop until she found her. A soft, bittersweet smile touches Selina's lips as the truth sinks in. While other people use words as empty, romantic sweet talk, when Phoebe says them, they are a terrifyingly beautiful promise. He laughs softly, his eyes warming behind his glasses as he looks at her radiant face and asks why she's still bothering to put up a fight against destiny. In a sudden, firm gesture of support, he pulls her into a brief embrace, whispering that Phoebe is currently waiting for her at the hospital, and that it's finally time for them both to be happy. With a newfound, burning sense of purpose, they turn their backs on the departure gates, leaving their heavy suitcases behind as they race toward a future they both thought was lost. The sun glints brilliantly off the sterile glass of the hospital's outpatient building, a place that now holds the key to Selina's heart's deepest, most hidden desires. Selina bursts through the door of the hospital room, her breath hitching in her throat as she finds the space draped in an eerie, unsettling silence. Her eyes widen in a flash of pure panic as she stares at the neatly made, completely empty hospital bed, wondering if she's arrived too late. Just as her heart begins to sink, she notices a lone smartphone left behind on the bedside table, a silent, glowing clue left in the middle of the vacant room. Suddenly, the screen flickers to life with a soft, melodic chime announcing a new message that had been sent only moments before her arrival. Selina leans in, her brow furrowed in deep confusion as she tries to understand why Phoebe would leave her most vital connection to the world behind. She picks up the device with trembling hands, her heart thudding violently against her ribs as she prepares herself for whatever words might be waiting on the screen. The display shows a single, cryptic instruction that sends a jolt of electricity through her. The top floor suite of the Hongo Tower. Far across the city, the majestic spire of the tower pierces the orange-hued sky, standing like a silent iron sentinel over the sprawling urban landscape. Below the tower, the first few city lights begin to flicker to life as the sun dips below the horizon, bathing the architecture in a warm, golden glow. A sleek white car pulls up to the base of the massive structure, its engine purring softly as Selina prepares herself for the confrontation she's been running from for years. Standing at the foot of the tower, she gazes up at the dizzying, impossible heights, reflecting on the irony that their journey has led them back to this very spot in the end. She steps into the elevator, her reflection ghost-like in the polished metal, as she watches the floor numbers climb higher and higher toward the clouds. The doors slide open to reveal a breathtaking, panoramic view of the sunset, and there, silhouetted against the dying light, sits Phoebe in her wheelchair. Selina tries her trembling voice with a bit of playful banter, asking if Phoebe really brought her all the way up to this height just for a bungee jump. Phoebe looks back, her eyes filled with a deep, aching vulnerability as she whispers that she could never bear the thought of either of them coming to harm. They are suspended high above the world, the vast, shimmering cityscape stretching out beneath them like a dream they're finally waking up from. Selina begins to walk slowly across the polished floor, her eyes locked onto the woman she almost left behind, her heart swelling with every step. A light, genuine laugh escapes Phoebe's lips, the suffocating tension finally breaking as they share a moment of pure, unadulterated connection. Selina asks with a playful tilt of her head how Phoebe could have been so certain that she would even find the phone, let alone follow the message here. Phoebe reaches out a hand, her touch gentle and warm as she looks up at Selina, knowing in her soul that they are tethered together by a bond that transcends logic. To Selina's absolute shock, Phoebe begins to push herself up out of the chair, her determination radiating from her every movement as she stands on her own 2 feet. Phoebe leans in close, her voice a low, melodic hum as she vows that no matter how difficult their future might be, they will confront every challenge together. She reaches into her pocket and produces a shimmering object, her fingers trembling slightly as she prepares to change the course of their lives forever. A massive, brilliant diamond ring catches the fading sunlight, a dazzling symbol of a promise made long ago and a future finally being claimed. With tears of overwhelming joy glistening in her eyes, Selina allows Phoebe to slide the ring onto her finger, the fit feeling perfect, as if it had always belonged there. They lean into one another, their lips meeting in a passionate, tearful kiss that washes away every ounce of pain and doubt from their past. High above the sleeping world, the tower stands as a silent witness to their union, a testament to a love that refused to be silenced by time or distance.